In the kingdom of Avalon, there was a knight. He used a single spear to break every rule. He was a tall knight in a black cloak. He wielded a red spear of immense power. He had reached the realm of a master, a spear knight without equal. With his spear, he crushed the cruelest armies. He fought to preserve the peace. He was a great hero. The kingdom of Avalon escaped the ravages of war because of him. He was revered and praised by all. Hailed as the strongest on the Agrander continent, his name was Joshua Sanders. But his life was ended by a conspiracy. He was betrayed by those he cherished most. Darkness covered the forest. A man holding a black crystal orb spoke. His voice was filled with contempt. To think an invincible knight like him would die so helplessly. Joshua covered his mouth. He coughed up a large amount of blood. His whole body trembled. He must have been severely wounded in battle. His noble face was twisted in agony. His brow was furrowed in extreme pain. A group of people stood opposite him, looking down. He writhed in torment while they watched with deceitful pity. Their faces were cold. They were just waiting for death to claim Joshua's life. This was the end they had all hoped for. Joshua staggered, barely able to stand. He clutched his chest. His eyes burned with hatred for them. Why? A man in a black robe spoke up. You're the one who pushed his mana to its absolute limit. The dark energy and divine power are now clashing inside your body. He stepped in front of Joshua. Joshua could no longer stand. He fell to his knees, his hands pressed against the ground, trying to keep his body from collapsing. The man stared at Joshua like a wolf at its dying prey. His voice dripped with mockery. A normal person would have died instantly from that conflict. Joshua glared at him, his eyes full of resentment. Blood still stained the corner of his mouth. He gritted his teeth. Why? His fists clenched. In a fit of rage, he slammed one into the ground. He never dreamed of the throne. He never wanted to stand above all others. All his life, Joshua only wanted to show everyone the magnificence of his spear. He wanted to use his talent to escape his boring life as the son of a concubine. He remained loyal to his king, who was also his best friend. The same man who now stood across from him. He watched his friend collapse with a satisfied gaze. He eagerly awaited Joshua's death. King Kaiser's gaze was ice cold. There was not a shred of pity. Joshua's tragic end was something he had planned. He had longed for this. It had to happen to end the kingdom's long civil war. Joshua had lived as a shield for the king until the very end, but all he received was a painful demise. Joshua struggled to stay upright. So why? He looked at the group with overwhelming hatred. A man in a white robe, a mage from the Evergrande Magic Tower, spoke to him. Joshua, some people are a threat to the world just by existing. The civil war is over. The king's position is secure. He can now take whatever he wants without fear, and his only fear is you. Joshua couldn't believe it. He looked up at the mage. He had dedicated his entire life to the king, and in the end, he was seen as a threat to be eliminated. The mage continued. Even if a warrior clings to the mana he's gathered his whole life, it takes decades to forge a dagger into a powerful sword. But for a knight like you, even with a mountain of men, you could do it all with that energy. He looked at the tormented Joshua and continued. How many enemies have you defeated with that spear? His hand tightened around the orb he held. The orb began to glow with a faint blue light. No. I know you've reached a new level of power. A sharp pain constricted Joshua's chest. The light from the orb in the mage's hand grew stronger. This is the orb found in Tantic Amen. A knight stepped in front of Joshua. I feared that terrifying spear might one day take my head. For some time, I was so afraid. I even had deranged thoughts. His expression turned grim. Just the thought of it seemed to make him anxious and terrified. Joshua bit down hard. Disappointment and pain brought down the strongest knight of the Avalon Empire. He collapsed in front of those vile people. The white-robed mage spoke mockingly. Thank you for everything until now. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be here today. We are truly grateful to you. A stream of red light wrapped around Joshua. It was like flames consuming his body. The mage looked at him with sheer delight. His lips curled into a vile smile. Farewell, my good friend. Joshua fell into a pool of his own blood. His breath grew faint. King Kaiser put on a false face of sorrow. I can't bear to watch any longer. The final moments of my best friend. With that, he turned and walked away. The others followed one by one. Joshua used his last ounce of strength to scream. Kaiser Van Britten, this isn't the end for me. A blue circle with a star in the middle appeared beneath Joshua's feet. He started to panic. The circle exploded. With my current power, I have 5 minutes. It's meaningless. Joshua slammed his fist on the ground in despair. What? The Peerless Knight. A ridiculous title. In the end, just a crippled knight, betrayed by those I trusted, dying in an unknown field. Damn it. A sound echoed from beside him. He turned to see his spear glowing a brilliant red nearby. Lugia, the spear, stained with blood. Known on the battlefield as the Reaper, Lugia. He tried to drag himself toward his weapon. Lugia radiated a fiery red light. The spear that had fought alongside him across countless battlefields. Besides its immense power, he always thought it could create special magic, but he never imagined he would have to use it. He screamed at Lugia. Come here. He tried to inch closer, just a little more. Finally, his hand touched the spear. The ground around him began to crack. His eyes became resolute. His hand gripped the spear tightly, awaiting the end. The earth suddenly shattered, launching Joshua into the air. Light erupted from the cracks. A massive pillar of light shot straight up, sending him flying. A deafening explosion roared, tearing through the night. It shattered the grim silence of the forest. In the sky, a blood-red moon glared down. It was like the resentful eyes of the betrayed knight, a unique man in the land of knights. The kingdom of Avalon. Joshua Sanders' life had ended. A deep crater appeared, burying Joshua in time. All his glory, gone. Such a sudden death was unworthy of the undefeated spear knight. Joshua jolted awake. He looked around in a daze. He was lying on a pile of straw in a stable. Horses from Duke Agnes's house were all around. Morning sun streamed through the wooden slats. A pile of straw? Where am I? What happened? Joshua remembered being thrown into the air. I should have been blown to pieces. How is this possible? Joshua looked at his hands. He was too shocked to believe it. Why are my hands so small? Impossible. Joshua's face was filled with utter confusion. Joshua rushed outside. He leaned over a water barrel to see his reflection. The image of a young boy appeared, stunning him completely. Did I become younger? No. He suddenly realized something. This is the place where I used to live. I've returned to the past. He looked at the familiar surroundings. The corners of his lips curled up. How interesting. Joshua's eyes gleamed. A confident smile spread across his face. I've been given a very rare opportunity. Kaiser Van Britten, don't expect anything good to come your way. As Joshua savored his joy, 3 knights approached. They carried themselves with arrogance and contempt. All 3 wore dark blue uniforms. They wore boots, with swords at their hips. They looked at Joshua with disdain. The one in the lead had his hands in his pockets. His face was cocky. Behind him was a tall man carrying a wooden club on his shoulder. He was just as arrogant and crude. The last one wore a cloak and seemed calmer. The leader yelled at the boy with a scornful voice. Hey, why aren't you mucking out the horse stalls? What are you just standing there for? Joshua looked at them with an icy gaze. He tried to remember who they were. These men were likely soldiers of Duke Agnes. The 3 captains, Rose, Roy, and Gott. The one who just spoke saw Joshua didn't react. He roared threateningly. You should answer me, kid. Another one laughed and said to him, Roy, have you forgotten? He's mute. Of course he can't answer. The last one also laughed disdainfully. Ah, Joshua narrowed his eyes at them. He was struggling to suppress his anger. I was only pretending to be mute. If I said even half a word, I'd get beaten. Roy started to look around. They joked among themselves with extreme disrespect. Oh, it seems Lucia isn't here, God said to him. Keep it down. You want the Duke's family to hear? We're watched 24/7. Don't shout Lucia's name like that. Joshua started thinking. My mother, Lucia. An image of a woman with a gentle smile and kind eyes appeared in his mind. Her blue hair was covered by a white scarf. She wore a maid's uniform. He remembered something else. His eyes suddenly became somber. Among the servants of the Agnes household, I am the illegitimate son of a maid, a woman forced to sleep with the Duke. The image of Duke Agnes appeared in his mind. A cold man, his face always calm and majestic. Around his collar was a silk scarf with a sparkling blue stone. Only nobles were allowed to wear such a thing. A pure white fur cloak rested on his shoulders. His entire being exuded nobility. He was as regal as a king. Joshua immediately understood. That's why these soldiers knew he was a bastard. They bullied him for his noble blood. It gave them immense pleasure, especially these 3 standing before me. One day, I will settle this debt. He looked at the 3 thugs. They continued to mock his mother. I suddenly miss Lucia today. Somehow, Rose. Rose nudged Roy, reminding him sarcastically. Anyway, keep your voice down, Roy. If someone hears us, we'll be in trouble. You're overthinking it. Roy then pointed at Joshua and sneered. Who would be in this smelly stable except for that kid? Even so, Roy looked extremely pleased and continued. The Duchess and Vanessa said if we quietly dispose of Lucia and the kid, she would take responsibility for us. He put his arm around Rose's shoulder, his voice dripping with sarcasm. This is a good opportunity. Too bad we can't find Lucia. Rose sighed softly. You're right. Roy's face suddenly brightened. So what can we do? We can play with this kid without Lucia here, of course. Rose immediately agreed enthusiastically. Agreed. Hearing those words, Joshua's eyes turned bloodshot. The anger he had been suppressing erupted like a volcano, his lips pressed tightly together. You, anyone who insults my mother, I won't let you get away with it, you bastard. Joshua's hands clenched into fists. He closed his eyes and began to calculate. Will it work? The mana training method I used before, the one that made me different from others. It's the method Lugia and I discovered in the ruins. The results of this method are extraordinary. You can achieve maximum power in a short time. Importantly, Its foundation is completely different. It doesn't use the mana core in the lower abdomen like other methods. Instead, it uses energy fragments that exist in the surrounding space. It's not limited by a mana core, which stores mana. The entire body can absorb mana. You can also focus mana anywhere you want and use it instantly. Joshua's fist tightened. He tried to recreate what he had done in his past life. A golden light flared from his hands. For a mana user, creating mana is a process everyone must go through, but I don't need to go through the year-long process. It's inevitable that I'll start as a mana user. The soldiers saw Joshua standing still and not responding. They started to charge. Let's punch this guy. Boys. My blood boils just looking at his face. Roy taunted God. You look like you're jealous that God can get close to that woman so easily. The other one flared up and yelled, Shut up. It's not that. The big guy stood in front of Joshua and raised his club. Hey, it seems I'm about to lose my temper. They were all startled when Joshua remained motionless. He showed no reaction at all. What's wrong with him? Is he frozen? Seriously. He's like a wooden statue. Joshua was still concentrating all his mind on focusing his power. A golden aura gradually appeared around him. I just need to gather mana in my palms. Before, it took me nearly 10 years just to gather mana in my palms. But now I know what to do, if that's the case. Joshua's eyes snapped open. His pupils were ice cold. Got was startled by his sudden movement and stepped back. He yelled, You little rat, you dare to glare at me. He swung his club, intending to beat Joshua to a pulp. Joshua clenched his fist. He poured all his strength into the punch. It landed on the man's face like a lightning strike. The man fell to the ground like a trapped animal. His face slammed into the dirt, as if he was giving Mother Earth a passionate kiss. He screamed in agony. The other two were frozen in place. Roy shouted, What's wrong with him? What happened? Joshua frowned slightly. The power in his body felt strangely unfamiliar. It made him uncomfortable. Like a slimy, disgusting tumor had appeared in his lower abdomen where there should be nothing. Something I haven't felt since I returned to the past. Roy drew his sword. He charged menacingly toward Joshua. You're dead, you dog. Rose, standing behind, looked bewildered. Joshua gritted his teeth and started calculating. This small body is not strong enough to fight back, but if I can take down Roy, who's charging at me, Rose probably won't come near me. He glanced at Rose, sighing in the distance. This one is smarter than the other two. Just one more time. He clenched his fists, gathering his power once more. Roy swung his sword. Today is the day you die. Joshua immediately ducked, avoiding the blade. Right after, he unleashed his own strike. A heavy punch slammed into Roy's face. He spat out a mouthful of blood. Blood gushed from his mouth like a fire hose. His entire body was sent flying back. He landed with a thud in front of Rose. Rose stared at Joshua in absolute terror. He trembled slightly, thinking to himself, I can't believe this mute kid was hiding his strength. The first time could be a coincidence, but not twice. Joshua was also sweating. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. His body felt drained, as if all his strength had been sucked out. I didn't know it would hurt this much. That was the price for using too much mana. He looked at Rose, a little worried he might attack. He had used up too much energy. He sized up his opponent. Rose was promoted to captain mostly through cunning, not skill. Though not as strong as God or Roy, he was still dangerous in my current state. I can't let him see my weakness. He looked up at Rose. His steely gaze promised the same fate as his two comrades. Any last words? The man was so panicked he was drenched in sweat. You can speak? He pointed at Joshua, as shocked as if he'd seen a monster. He staggered, unable to stand steady from extreme fear. Joshua spoke again, his voice powerful. From this moment on, any bastard who insults my mother, I swear on my name, I will leave no one alive. His eyes shone with determination, as if he was confirming that his words would become reality. Rose stepped back in fear. He screamed, turned, and ran for his life. Monster! As soon as he was gone, Joshua coughed violently and gasped for air. I'm done for. As the words left his mouth, he collapsed. Defeating those two had completely drained him. It was too much of a burden for a 9-year-old body. His vision blurred. His eyes slowly closed. This time, he was truly and utterly exhausted. Duke Agnes's castle was as magnificent as a palace. Bright sunlight shone on the massive white walls, making it even more brilliant. Down in the main hall of the castle, the servants' whispers echoed everywhere. Have you heard? Joshua, the mute boy from the stables, knocked out 3 captains. One servant recounted the story with a thrilling tone. It was as if he was telling a myth. Another servant chimed in. I heard that too. There's even a rumor he was faking, being mute. The remaining servant was skeptical. His face showed clear disbelief. Young Master Joshua? The one who's 5 years younger than young Master Babel? He did that? It's so strange, he argued with the others. You believe that? It's just a baseless rumor. He's just an orphan. And how can a mute boy suddenly start talking overnight? Just think about it. How could he possibly defeat 3 captains with his bare hands? Another person replied, I know, but if it really happened, Duke Agnes's succession plan could change. The other servants still refused to accept it. Even if Joshua's skills are recognized, he still can't beat young Master Babel. You all know that, right? I agree with that, because young Master Babel is also a mana user now. You've hit the nail on the head. Duke Agnes, who achieved the title of Master, only started using mana when he was 16. But young Master Babel can use mana at only 14. That proves he's a genius too. But Duke Agnes's shadow is too large. The servant who sided with Babel added, for him, becoming the successor must be a challenge. How absurd. Just then, Joshua pushed the door open and entered the hall. The servant who was talking jumped in surprise. Perhaps because he had just spoken ill of Joshua, he was flustered. He stammered, "Young Master Joshua, when did you get here?" Joshua looked at him sternly and spoke coldly. "Go and tell the Duke that, by his summons, Joshua von Agnes is here." The aura emanating from Joshua terrified the servants, and they backed away. In the Duke's study, he sat behind a large wooden desk. The tabletop was intricately carved and gilded. Behind him, a glass window let in light, making the room even more luxurious. The curtains were embroidered with exquisite patterns. The wall-mounted lamps were simple but extremely elegant. Behind the Duke, his aides stood motionless. In front of him, Rose knelt on the ground. Someone's armor was placed to the side. The Duke asked, "So, you are Rose?" He looked up, his voice trembling as he replied, "Yes, my name is Rose." Duke Agnes glanced at him with a dismissive look. "Which battalion are you from?" "The 29th? The Duke turned to his aide. "The 29th Battalion, near Griezmann, Chiffon." "Yes, my lord." The Duke gestured with 2 fingers for Rose to stand. "I understand. Bring that armor here." The armor had a large hole in the middle. It looked as if it had been burned. It was placed before Duke Agnes. It probably belonged to one of the 2 men Joshua had defeated. The Duke stared at it, his face showing both surprise and suspicion. He asked, "So you're saying Joshua did this to the armor?" Before Rose could speak, the aide, Chiffon, standing next to the Duke, gave him a threatening look. "Think carefully before you answer. You know the consequences of lying, don't you?" The man answered hesitantly, "Yes, yes." His expression was extremely serious. He swallowed hard to overcome his rising fear. Just remembering the scene sent a chill down his spine. "It's not a lie, my lord." Hearing this, the Duke sighed lightly and turned to his aide. "Chiffon, what do you think?" "Of course, it's very hard to believe this, my lord." The Duke's face was still filled with doubt. He stroked his beard and said, "Yes, it's hard to believe. How old is Joshua this year?" Chiffon replied, 9 years old, my lord." Duke Agnes began to consider. He stared at the torn armor on the table. At that age, to damage armor like this with bare hands. If Joshua can use mana, then it's a simple matter. Chiffon immediately reacted as if he had stepped on hot coals. "My lord, that's impossible. To be able to use mana at only 9 years old, it's unheard of in history. It has never happened before. Even if it was a high-level skill, he would have to be at least a high-ranking B-class knight to do that with his bare hands. Only then would something like this be possible." The Duke remained silent. Chiffon continued, "Young Master Joshua is only 9. I don't believe he could do this." He then turned to Rose and accused him. "I think they were afraid of being caught bullying young Master Joshua, so they made this up. If you allow me, I will drag him out immediately and discipline the army." Rose trembled violently. His face was drained of all color. Sweat beaded on his forehead from fear. "No, it's not. It's the truth." Chiffon moved closer to him. "How dare you raise your voice in front of the Duke? It's the truth. Please believe me, Chief Chiffon." Chiffon drew his sword, ready to kill the man. Even now, he's still spouting lies. The Duke immediately stopped Chiffon. "That's enough, Chiffon." Chiffon, still unwilling, said, "But my lord, to forgive someone who spread a false rumor." He didn't finish. The Duke cut him off. He stood up, placing his hands on the desk. "Everything will become clear if we go see him ourselves." It seemed he had only just remembered the child who shared his blood, but had always been treated like a slave, mucking out horse manure daily. "It's been a long time since I've seen him. I will go and meet that child myself." Chiffon's face immediately showed worry. The Duke himself was going to meet the son of a concubine, a privilege he had never even granted young Master Babel, who was considered exceptionally gifted. The Duke left his desk and asked, "So, where is Joshua?" "I heard he has come to the main house and is waiting in the reception room." The Duke walked out of the study. "I see. Lead the way, Chiffon." Chiffon reluctantly followed the Duke, leaving Rose behind, who sighed in relief for having escaped a perilous situation. The main house of Agnes had long, wide corridors. On both sides were gleaming glass windows, meticulously cleaned by the servants. The pillars were carved and gilded. Precious paintings hung on the walls. Babel was walking somewhere when he suddenly saw Joshua in the distance. His face immediately soured. Hatred was clear in his eyes. "What? Joshua, why is he here?" He walked straight up to Joshua and shouted, "Hey, what are you doing here?" Joshua remained silent. He didn't seem to notice him. He was intently looking at a painting, a portrait of King Marcus. the current ruler of the empire. Anger radiated from him. For some reason, every time he looked at the man's portrait, he felt immense hatred. Heiser Van Britten, no matter what, I will have my revenge. He silently cursed in his heart. Seeing no reaction from Joshua, Babel clenched his fists in anger. Hey, you bastard, you dare to ignore me? He swung his fist to attack Joshua from behind. But suddenly, Joshua spun around and countered. Joshua's hand caught Babel's fist. He squeezed Babel's hand hard, making a cracking sound. A look of surprise mixed with a little fear flashed across Babel's face. This strength. Was the rumor about defeating 3 captains really true? You think I'll just stand here? Babel began to gather all his strength, preparing to teach Joshua a lesson. Just then, Duke Agnes walked out. What are you doing? Babel was startled and quickly stepped back. Father. He immediately adopted a respectful attitude. He knelt on one knee and placed his hand over his left chest to salute. Greetings, Duke. The Duke looked at his first wife's son with a stern voice. I asked you what you were doing here. We were exchanging greetings. The Duke raised an eyebrow. Greetings? He sighed softly and looked over at Joshua. The boy only gave a slight nod. Chiffon saw Joshua not saluting and silently judged him. Is this kid crazy? Not kneeling to greet the Duke. He stepped forward and yelled at Joshua. You are being disrespectful to the Duke. Greet him now. What are you doing? Why aren't you greeting him? Duke Agnes stopped his aide and spoke softly. His eyes were filled with loathing. He called out to Joshua. Joshua was still lost in the anger sparked by the king's portrait. Hearing the Duke's voice, he was startled and told himself, that portrait reminded me of someone. That's why this rage is boiling up. I can't control it. This can't continue. Agnes won't spare anyone who dares to oppose him, even if it's the king. The Duke gestured for Joshua to come closer. He spoke calmly. If you've calmed down, come here. I will personally confirm whether you truly have mana or not. The Duke's brow furrowed. His face showed clear anticipation to verify his suspicions. Babel, kneeling beside him, looked at Joshua with utter amazement. What is this? Mana? That filthy bastard who spends all day shoveling horse manure. He has mana? Babel gritted his teeth in anger. Hatred and jealousy were evident in his eyes. Chiffon stepped closer to Duke Agnes, about to protest. Duke, for you to do this. But the Duke ignored him and continued to call Joshua. Joshua, come here. Joshua felt uneasy. Duke Agnes is one of the 5 mana masters of this vast empire, a man extremely sensitive to mana. If he discovers anything unusual, my plan will be ruined. Since when did he? Before Joshua could react, the Duke grabbed his wrist. Immediately after, he let out a cry. What? This is? The Duke's expression turned incredibly grim. Joshua looked at the Duke suspiciously. He calculated silently. If the Duke, who is sensitive to mana, discovers something I don't know, I'll have to come up with a different plan immediately. The Duke looked horrified. There's nothing here. Chiffon, standing beside them, also exclaimed in shock. What? No mana at all? The Duke, stunned, let go of Joshua's hand. Babel, standing nearby, looked triumphant. I knew it. Chiffon, as if wanting to reconfirm, approached the Duke and asked. So, the matter of young Master Joshua having mana has been confirmed to be false. I'm not talking about the mana core. Every living thing in this world has mana within it. That applies to ordinary people, even magical beasts. But I can't feel any mana inside Joshua. Chiffon thought suspiciously. Can he really not feel any mana? That's like an empty shell. He said to the Duke, if it's not congenital, then from now on, I will keep an eye on Joshua. Chiffon immediately spoke up. Duke, if young Master Joshua was born unable to hold mana, don't you think those rumors are false? We can't let those soldiers spread rumors. The Duke glanced at him. The soldiers are also the Duke's assets. It would be unwise to punish them for baseless rumors and deplete our resources. Chiffon looked down, clearly not satisfied. I was too hasty. It seemed he was worried that too many people knew about Joshua's abilities. It appeared that this didn't benefit him. The Duke looked at Joshua and said, Joshua, you will stay here for a while. Are there any empty rooms here? Babel immediately shouted. He couldn't accept that someone who shoveled horse manure could live in the main house. But, Duke, Joshua can't. The Duke glanced at his son. Babel, is there a problem? Young Master Babel couldn't say another word. He could only grit his teeth and accept. No, sir. The Duke turned to a close knight. Suan. Yes, Duke. From now on, train Joshua to become a knight. If you see that Joshua has talent, teach him the red blood training method. Chiffon yelped as if he'd been splashed with lime. What? The training method? But isn't the young master's mana? The Duke turned and walked away. We need time. We will confirm it soon enough. Joshua was born with a body that can't contain mana. I hope that's not true. He left Joshua with a final word. I'm counting on you, Joshua. Joshua stood silently, watching the Duke's departing back. His eyes were filled with hope. A large door opened. The young master's attendant spoke. Young Master Joshua, from now on, this room will be your new residence. Joshua looked around the spacious room. It had a large, soft bed. A few books were on a shelf. A deep red carpet covered the floor. The room seemed a bit large for a 9-year-old. He remained calm, as if nothing had happened. His face showed no emotion, which surprised the servant. "Are those rumors true? He doesn't seem happy at all after receiving such a blessing," he said to Joshua. "If you need anything, just call me." Then he thought, it seems his attitude has changed. Is it because the Duke isn't here? Joshua threw himself onto the bed. It was much softer than a pile of straw. "I don't think I need anything," he thought. "If only I could get a good night's sleep." Suddenly, Joshua sat up. He remembered the Duke's words. "I'm counting on you." He's expecting a good result. Duke Agnes spent most of his time in Akkadi, the capital of the Avalon Empire. He only stayed in his territory to rest after finishing his work. The territory of Agnes was a vast land. His castle was nestled among high mountains. From the tallest tower, one could see the entire territory. In the large room, Joshua was still puzzled by a series of confusing issues in his mind. Did Duke Agnes discover something I don't know? The truth is, Duke Agnes has realized something I don't know, and it's extremely dangerous, but I'm still not sure. He jumped out of bed. Before anything happens, I have to regain my strength first, and to do that night, in a corner of Duke Agnes's castle, a small figure somersaulted from a high place, landing gently. The movement was so practiced, it seemed second nature. Joshua landed in a sitting position, one hand on the ground, but his body was still too weak. The side effects of using too much mana had subsided, but regaining his strength was taking longer than he expected. Suddenly, his whole body seized up. A sharp pain shot through his abdomen. Golden sparks flew around him. He groaned in pain, clutching his stomach. Joshua's body trembled violently. He was losing control. He screamed, "The tumor inside my mana core is reacting. I don't know if I'm feeling divine or demonic magic. This magical power is suppressing everything." Lugia. Why did Lugia come here? Why did Lugia come here and suppress everything? As he suppressed his power, he heard footsteps approaching. 2 guards in white armor, holding torches, approached when they heard the noise. "Hey, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" "I didn't hear anything." The 2 guards raised their torches, searching the area. "There's nothing here. That's strange. I thought I saw something." "Forget it. Let's get back. We have to relieve the other group." Joshua ran quickly, his breath ragged. Lugia might be the solution to this problem, but if I'm controlled by the 3 sources of power inside me. Inside a warehouse in the corner of Duke Agnes's garden, a woman's scream tore through the quiet air. "Let me go. Why are you doing this to me?" 3 soldiers were holding a woman down. One pinned her arms. Another drew his sword, preparing to do something cruel. The last one just stood and watched. It was the same 3 men Joshua had, beaten in the stables. "Do you really not know why?" Roy looked at the woman with a hateful glare. He drew his sword from its sheath. "Because of your son, we were all disciplined." She was Joshua's mother. The woman bit down hard on the hand of the man holding her, forcing him to let go. God angrily pushed her, and she fell to the ground. "What? Are you crazy?" Lucia was shoved down. Her head hit the floor hard. Roy grabbed her hair and brutally pulled her head up. "We just wanted to take care of you, but you're wasting our time." "Hold her, Roy. I'll take care of the rest." Rose immediately grabbed God's shoulder. "God, do we really have to do this? If that kid finds out." God shoved Rose's hand off him and insisted, "Rose, the lady said she'll protect us. If you're scared, you can back out." Rose was stunned and couldn't say another word. He seemed to be wavering. Roy looked at him with a mocking gaze. "Why are you dragging this out? If you're scared, then get out. Don't make me laugh. You're the one who's scared." Lucia had fainted from the pain. Roy held her up by her hair. God pointed the tip of his sword at her neck, preparing to stab down. Just then, a loud shout came from behind them. "Stop." Rose saw Joshua and frantically tried to stop his 2 companions. "God, stop it, now. It's that kid." The other 2 continued to jeer. They had probably forgotten the punches from before. "Ha, so you're here. We've been waiting for a while. What took you so long? Let us show you something interesting." Joshua was furious. His eyes were bloodshot. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. "Didn't we settle this last time? Don't even think about getting out of here alive." Lucia barely opened her eyes. She weakly called out to her son, Joshua. Rose trembled in panic. "Let's get out of here." "That kid will kill us," God shouted. "What are you talking about? You're just scared." Joshua's gaze turned ice cold. He hissed through his teeth, "Get out." While Rose fearfully backed away, the other 2 continued to taunt Joshua. "I'll make sure you stay like that for the rest of your life. And remember to save some for me." Joshua repeated sternly, "I said, get out." Roy tightened his grip on his sword. "You little brat. Who do you think you are?" Suddenly, from the ceiling, a man jumped down. "How did you know? How could you sense me?" The soldiers all spoke at once. "Sir Kane." Joshua looked at him. He thought, the red insignia. Someone with that red insignia is one of the 3 knights handpicked by Duke Agnes himself, even with red blood. So, Red Blood has started monitoring me. Did Chiffon request this? All three men placed their hands on their left chests. It's an honor to meet you, sir. Kane looked at the boy standing before him. He seemed very impressed with Joshua. So this is the child from the rumors? Joshua asked him. Let me ask you. His face was stern. These soldiers are harming someone under the Duke's protection. Kane's face immediately darkened. He seemed flustered. Joshua continued to ask, according to the Duke's military law, how should this situation be handled? Kane felt an invisible pressure weighing down on him. What is this pressure? I can't escape it. Kane tightened his grip on his sword. He drew his sword. Of course, they must be dealt with immediately, on the spot. The others' faces turned pale. They surely didn't expect this. When they pointed their swords at Lucia's neck, they never thought it would end like this. Kane lunged towards the soldiers. They were so stunned they couldn't even react. One by one, they fell under Kane's blade. They didn't even have time to launch a counterattack. The sound of two swords clashing rang out sharply. Gott was lucky to block the sword strike that nearly took his head. Sir Kane, wait. Kane didn't listen to a single word. He immediately struck him down and then turned to Rose. He used his bare hands to block the descending blade. I'm the one at fault. Please. Just as Kane was about to finish him, Joshua shouted, Stop. Kane's sword froze right at Rose's neck. If Joshua hadn't spoken, his head would have been severed. Rose pleaded desperately. It seems this guy has truly learned his lesson. Please, spare me this time. Kane threatened in a low voice. You should say less if you want to live longer. Joshua walked up to Kane. I told you to stop. Kane answered sternly. This man threatened a member of the Duke's family, so he must be punished. Kane spoke decisively, as if he would not spare Rose. Joshua quietly assessed Kane. Although both belong to the 3 knightly orders serving the Duke, Red Blood is the lowest rank. If this man is truly on my side, this is a rare opportunity for a Red Blood knight like him. He must be the strongest in the class. With just a few simple sword strokes, he was able to overwhelm those soldiers. The other 2 were lying on the floor. Their bodies trembled like wild animals caught in a hunter's trap. Joshua spoke. You said your name is Kane. Before you do that, let me ask you something. Who do you serve? Kane turned to look at Joshua, his face hesitant. I serve Duke Agnes. Joshua continued in a cold voice. Then another question. Who am I? Kane became flustered. Confusion appeared in his eyes. Just as I expected. Those terrifying eyes, just like his, Kane said Joshua's name. Joshua spoke softly. Sheathe your sword. Kane sheathed his sword. I will follow this order. Rose, having just escaped death, knelt before Joshua as if he had met a savior. Thank you, my lord. Thank you, young master. For the rest of my life, I will be loyal to you. Thank you for forgiving me. Perhaps that arrogant man learned a lifelong lesson today. Joshua looked at him without a hint of sympathy. He warned him, I don't need your loyalty. I will never forgive those who insult me and my family. However, because you're quick-witted, I know you understand what I mean. Tell the other soldiers to leave this place, and not a word about what happened today. If you dare to do something like this again, I will end your life with my own hands. Rose trembled uncontrollably. He was likely terrified to his core. Tears streamed down his face. He was like an ant in a frying pan, panicked to the extreme. Joshua shouted again, If you understand, then get out. I understand, young master. He scrambled away, running for his life, as if lingering for another moment would get him burned by Joshua's gaze. Lucia let out a soft sound. Joshua immediately ran to his mother's side. Kane was still a bit suspicious. Are you really the master I know? What a strange question. Aren't we completely different? The master I know. Kane didn't finish his sentence. Joshua cut him off. A smile flickered in the boy's eyes. The son of a concubine who never appears. The one who shovels manure in the stables. Kane bowed his head, looking as if he had made a mistake. Young master, all knights under the Agnes family must follow Duke Agnes's orders. Joshua just glanced back at him. So, Kane continued, once we turn 23, we have the right to choose our own master. I will be able to choose next year. Joshua looked at him with curiosity. Kane placed his hand over his left chest and bowed slightly. I trust my instincts. Next year, I will leave my post and serve you, young Master Joshua. Joshua thought to himself. He's making a decision while still thinking about the future. It would be great if he chose one of the shining gems of the Duke's family, like Babel. He said, You're really strange. In Duke Agnes's room, Chiffon and the Duke were discussing something. Lady Cheryl. The Duke pondered Chiffon's words. That's right. Babel already has her. So how can I? The 5 great dukes hold immense influence over the Avalon territory. Lady Cheryl is the daughter of the Pontier family, a family that rose to dukedom through their vast wealth. Chiffon spoke again. As I said, choosing Lady Cheryl was the right decision. After considering the Pontier family, the Duke seemed displeased. It doesn't matter how much, but it's quite humiliating. Talent is what Duke Agnes always craves. His greed for talent is as strong as his passion for martial arts. He's the type of person who judges and treats others based solely on their abilities. That is the head of the house of Duke Agnes. The Duke turned his back on Chiffon, who continued to ask, "Is something wrong, Duke? What about Joshua?" The Duke started to think about the servant's son. Chiffon straightened up. "What, you mean?" The Duke spoke slowly. "I'm thinking of giving Aislinn to Joshua." Chiffon immediately reacted violently. It seemed any decision related to Joshua irritated him. "Duke, how could you do that? You're giving Lady Aislinn, who received a blessing from heaven, to the cursed one, young Master Joshua." He couldn't believe what he had just heard. It seemed any favor the Duke showed Joshua infuriated him. At midnight, in the northern garden of the Duke's estate, Joshua was trying to climb a giant, ancient rock as tall as a mountain. In his previous life, he often came here to feel closer to his mother. But why was it so hard to climb now? He thought to himself, was it always this high? He remembered his past life. It was on this very rock that he had discovered a secret passage. Joshua tapped the ground lightly, searching. "This is where I found Lugia." Then, he bit his finger, drawing a few drops of blood, and let them fall onto the ground. A circle of light appeared. It opened the entrance to a shrine. Is this really the shrine I came to in my past life? The scene before him was completely different from his memory. In his past life, when he came here, this place was still intact. Lugia was bound in the middle of the shrine by countless chains. But now, the shrine before him was just a pile of ruins. In the middle, where Lugia used to be, there was only an iron rod. "Where is Lugia?" He picked up the iron rod. Immediately, a brilliant light flashed. An endless void appeared before Joshua's eyes. "Where am I?" A voice came from behind him. "Over here." He turned around and saw the iron rod from before. "Who are you?" "You're that iron rod." "I am not an iron rod. I am the soul of the demon god, Lugia." Joshua was so shocked his mouth fell open. "You mean the treasure of a demon god? You mean the Lugia from my past life was the soul of a demon god? Moreover, it even changed its form." Joshua cursed silently. "Damn it, what is this? It can't be. It was also changed after returning to the past with me." The iron rod spoke. "We don't have time." "What do you mean?" "As time passes, the two energies inside you will corrode your body. There is only one way to stabilize the two energies within you and restore your hidden power. You should recover your inner strength using a short-term method. Currently, you must reach at least level 4 of spear magic." Joshua was shocked. Level 4? Joshua fell into deep thought, recalling his past life. Spear magic is the ancient magic I once learned. Through that, he discovered the mana implant method and unleashed incredible power. In Iran, the sword was considered the strongest weapon. The spear was seen as a fragile one. Yet in his previous life, the number of people who could stand against him could be counted on one hand, and at that time, his spear magic had reached level 4. Compared to a knight who could unleash his full sword potential with mana upon reaching Class A, he was considered a master, an absolute existence of level 8, but my spear magic reached level 5. I became the strongest knight in the Empire. Level 4 is just one step below. At my current B-class level, it's still unverified. There are still some things he had to complete first. It's not too difficult, but time is not on his side. With his current physical condition, implanting mana could be extremely challenging. The iron rod interrupted Joshua's thoughts. "I will be by your side soon. You can use as much mana as you want, without any consequences." Hearing that, Joshua was even more stunned. Is that really possible? Pull yourself together. Once you reach the highest authority and start seeking another power, my purpose will be. The iron rod hadn't finished its sentence before it started to fade and disappear before Joshua's eyes. He lunged forward and shouted, "What? Lugia, what are you trying to say? Hey, Lugia." The void also vanished instantly. Joshua returned to the ruined shrine. The iron rod in his hand was still there. "Lugia. Whenever I'm near Lugia, I can use a little bit of mana." Joshua closed his eyes, thinking about where on the continent he could find a method for mana implantation. "The only thing I have," recalling Lugia's words, "whether you call it or not, it's at least enough to defend yourself. That is level 1 magic. To use level 1 spear magic, step 1. Concentrate mana at a specific point and thrust forward with explosive power." Joshua swung the iron rod and practiced a few moves. A blue light enveloped him. "I did it. Awesome. I can do it." Sparks shot out in all directions around Joshua, then flew straight into the air and exploded. "This is just the beginning. Kaiser Van Britten. I will become stronger and take everything from you." In the reception room of Duke Agnes, the butler cleared his throat, signaling Duke Agnes's arrival. A look of surprise appeared on the Duke's face. "We have some strange guests." A red-haired girl in a ball gown curtsied. "It is an honor to meet you, Duke." That was Cheryl, the daughter of the Pontier family. "Cheryl, why are you so late?" Duke Agnes asked her. Baroness Cox, the head of the Pontier family, hurried forward to explain. "It is my fault, Duke." Lady Cheryl. "So it took us quite some time to explain." Agnes said he didn't need an apology. Meeting him at this time was quite convenient. Baron Cox is the head of the Pontier family. All family affairs are in his hands. In front of Agnes, he appeared very timid. It is an honor to hear you say that. Agnes spoke up. If you are apologizing, why not dedicate yourself to my family? The red-haired girl spoke up indignantly. Duke, you are as mean as ever. How can you steal such an important member of our family? Agnes chuckled softly. That's more like the Cheryl I know. When you greeted me earlier, I thought you weren't the Cheryl I knew. Cheryl rested her chin on her hand and said, I heard Babel is going to become a class knight, right? I was thinking about when I should start looking for a husband. Baron Cox immediately cried out, My lady, those words are too much. He bowed low before Agnes. My apologies, Duke. My lady is still young. Agnes acted as if it was nothing and said she was just behaving her age. He then turned to the handsome young man standing next to a gentle-looking girl. My apologies, Bolson. I forgot you were still here. That young man was Baron Bolson Din. The blue-haired girl next to him was Aislinn Din. Aislinn performed a royal greeting to Duke Agnes. I am very honored to meet you, Duke. Lady Cheryl frowned as she looked at Aislinn. What? Why is she here? Despite Baron Cox constantly reminding her to maintain her etiquette, Cheryl suddenly burst out laughing. Oh, that's right. I heard the son of the concubine defeated 3 soldiers. I wonder if that's true. Baron Cox couldn't take it anymore and yelled at her. My lady, please be polite. Did I say something wrong? I was just curious, so I asked. She pouted and looked at Baron Cox. The Duke's attendant interrupted. She's right, Princess Cheryl. They are just unconfirmed rumors. Moreover, young Master Joshua has a naturally weak body. He is also cursed with mana. So how could he defeat those 3 soldiers? Duke Bolson was extremely shocked. Really? Young Master Joshua is cursed with mana? Aislinn remained silent, not saying a word, as if she was deep in thought. Duke Agnes turned to Bolson. You've come at the right time. Could you take care of that child for me? What? Aren't you training the 5th-class mages in the Empire? You are surely more sensitive to mana than a knight like me. I hope you will look after the child. Bolson thought to himself, this is my chance to score points with Duke Agnes. He reluctantly bowed and replied, Yes, I will take care of him. Just then, the attendant Chiffon spoke up. Duke, I humbly request to go and check on young Master Joshua's condition. May I? What do you mean? Before you leave the capital, shouldn't we verify whether young Master Joshua truly carries the mana curse? And whether those rumors are true? Agnes narrowed his eyes at his attendant. You're even calling a knight? Just for a 9-year-old kid? Chiffon immediately explained to the Duke. If he truly possesses the power as rumored, it's best we prepare early. I will assign this task to a suitable person. His eyes gleamed. I'm sure you will be very pleased with my choice. In Chiffon's office, Knight Kane was reporting to him about young Master Joshua. I received your report, Kane. You said there was a conflict. Yes, that's correct. According to the law, you should have brought that case to trial, shouldn't you? Isn't that a bit hasty? Kane bowed his head slightly, placing a hand on his chest. Those men intentionally harmed the Duke's wife. Chiffon immediately jumped up, slamming his hand on the table. What did you say? Is what you're saying true? He gritted his teeth in anger. How dare they do that to Lady Vanessa? Kane looked up at him. Not Vanessa, but Lucia. Lucia? Is that? Yes, the Duke's concubine. Chiffon sat down and sighed heavily. You mean those 2 were crippled by a maid, while Lady Lucia is now officially recognized as the Duke's wife. She is not someone that common soldiers can touch. Their actions are a provocation and an insult to the Duke. If I were them, I would willingly confess and accept punishment, Kane said in a righteous tone. Chiffon rested his chin on his hand and continued to sigh. All right, we'll let this matter go. This time, I have a job for you. Kane stood at attention, resolute. I am ready to receive orders. Kane, from today onwards, you will serve young Master Joshua. Kane was so shocked he couldn't believe it. What? Fight against young Master Joshua? Chiffon pondered and said, Yes, because of the recent incidents, we need to confirm if young Master Joshua has the mana curse. He might be cursed by mana, but the Duke refuses to admit it. If this situation continues, he will become a stumbling block for young Master Babel. Do you think young Master Babel will lose to him? Chiffon slammed his fist on the table. Kane, don't talk nonsense. Young Master Babel is a one-of-a-kind genius. Do you think someone like young Master Babel will tolerate that stumbling block? Kane didn't answer. An image of Joshua appeared in his mind. In his eyes, that child didn't look like a stumbling block. He looked like a meteor streaking across the sky and crashing to the earth. Chiffon continued to instruct Kane. Your fight with young Master Joshua will be kept secret. Inject a small amount of mana into Joshua. If he is cursed by mana, he won't be able to receive it. Mana will be like a poison to someone who is cursed. Once the mana flows into his body, he's guaranteed not to live for more than 10 days. Kane's face immediately turned pale. He thought, I knew he sided with young Master Babel, but I didn't expect him to go this far. If you understand what I've said, then wait at the training ground. The Duke and the Baron will be there. Yes, sir. At the training ground, Kane tightened his grip on his sword, his heart heavy with thought. Even though it's an order from a superior, I don't want to harm young Master Joshua, because I have decided to protect young Master Joshua. From a distance, Joshua approached Kane. You are Kane, right? Young master. I heard you will be my opponent. Yes. It seems the Duke wants me to fight you to test your energy. Is that all? The Duke is letting you do this? Joshua thought. It seems he realized I wasn't using my full strength. Fine, bring it on. Kane continued. You don't have to worry because I have no intention of fighting you. You have no intention of fighting me? How ridiculous. Are you looking down on me? Young master, that is. Kane was at a loss for words. Although you choose the master you want to serve, I am the same. I also have standards for choosing who serves me, and I have no reason to choose someone weak and mediocre. Joshua looked straight at Kane. If you want to see who I am, then do your best. Your sword must be drawn, and you must fight with all your might. Duke Agnes arrived and approached them. Have you two introduced yourselves? Kane quickly placed his hand on his chest. An honor to meet you, Duke. Chiffon looked at Joshua. Seeing him still standing without saluting, he thought to himself, he's still as rude to the Duke as ever. But then, Joshua knelt on one knee. He placed a hand on his chest. Joshua von Agnes, it is an honor to meet you, Lord Duke. Chiffon gritted his teeth, speechless. The Duke's expression softened. I don't recall teaching you such etiquette. You did well. I learned it from someone else. You've heard, haven't you? Yes. You're here to test my strength. Chiffon stepped forward to clarify. Young Master Joshua, you seem to have misunderstood. This isn't a test. The Duke is simply concerned for you. We're doing this to find your weaknesses, so we can create a suitable training plan. Joshua thought, you mean you want to find my weaknesses? That's why he's using this test to kill me. Are you ready? The Duke looked towards Kane. He trembled slightly. I am ready for your orders, sir. It seems you've misunderstood. You won't be fighting Joshua. Babel will. Young Master Babel entered the training ground. He exuded a kingly aura. As Joshua's older brother, I will do my best to help him. My dear little brother. Babel's eyes fixed on Joshua, full of killing intent. Joshua gritted his teeth and cursed silently. That bastard, Babel. Since this is a practice match, we won't use real swords. We'll use wooden training swords instead. Yes. As soon as Agnes finished speaking, Babel snatched a sword from the rack. He pointed it at Joshua. Joshua gritted his teeth, his eyes flashing with hatred. Babel, Chiffon. You all want me dead. That's why you staged this whole charade. But it won't be that easy. Then I'll give you the performance you're looking for. Joshua stomped his foot. He picked up a wooden stick. This is all I need. Princess Cheryl burst out laughing. He's quite funny. Countess Cox performed her usual duty, reminding her of her poor etiquette. Princess, why would you say such a thing? Duke Agnes's face tensed. Chiffon hurried forward. This is not something to joke about. What can you do with just a wooden stick? Duke Agnes stopped him. He then asked Joshua, Are you serious? Yes. Joshua answered with confidence. The Duke said nothing more. He just turned to Chiffon. All right. Show our guests to their seats. Yes, my lord. Agnes looked at Babel. That is all, Babel. You are forbidden from using mana. You don't have to worry. Babel thought to himself. Use mana on this brat? What a waste. Can watch Joshua from afar. Young Master Joshua, what are you planning? Babel gave Joshua a taunting look. You think you can stop my blade with that stick? You're better suited for shoveling horse manure. You trash. The Duke's voice rang out. Begin. Babel swung his sword, charging at Joshua. But he was instantly countered. Joshua's stick swept out, making him miss his target. So, you've learned a few tricks, huh? You think you can get one over on me? Joshua watched him, silently assessing. He may be a class knight, but he only has speed. His mind is still naive. He swung the stick, striking Babel's arm. He roared, You bastard! How dare you? A concubine's son dares to challenge me. Immediately, Joshua landed another blow to his stomach. From start to finish, Joshua's face remained serious and completely focused. Babel's entire body trembled. Scum like you. How dare you? Joshua thought with a smirk. You can take a beating, Babel. Now, I'll just keep my distance. Babel roared in fury. Go back where you belong, you dog. He started activating his mana. Joshua grew worried. Mana at this range? That's dangerous. Duke Agnes shouted, Babel, stop. A brilliant light erupted. It was followed by a deafening explosion. Babel's wooden sword snapped in two. The pieces flew a kilometer away. Everyone around was stunned. What was that? Where did that mana come from? Babel growled, glaring at Joshua, absolutely livid. Lies, this bastard. He really has mana? He remembered what Duke Agnes had once told Joshua. I will be your shield. The memory made him even more furious. It was unbelievable. He screamed, drawing his sword and charging at Joshua. I will never accept someone like you. I am the rightful heir. Joshua tightened his grip on his stick. He prepared to face Babel. Memories of his past life flashed through his mind. In 10 years, the ducal title would vanish after the Imperial Civil War. If I can secure support now, my plans will move forward. I must take the title of Duke. Joshua swung his stick at Babel. The two prepared to clash in a brutal fight. The light from their clashing power was blinding. Everyone had to shield their eyes. Duke Agnes shot to his feet. Stop. I will not forgive you if you continue this battle. Young Master Babel was so enraged, his entire body shook uncontrollably. From a distance, Chiffon broke into a cold sweat. Impossible. He's only 9, yet his mana is this immense. This will shake the world. The Duke turned to him. Chiffon, is that enough for you? Ah, yes, my lord. However, I've never seen mana like this. Countess Ponson spoke up. Your Grace, from my observation, that is definitely mana, and the amount young Master Joshua has is far greater than young Master Babel's. It's a type of mana I've never seen. The notable characteristic of this mana, he trailed off, hesitating. Acero exclaimed in shock. Wow, is he a mage? Ken was also stunned. This level of power was terrifying. The Duke looked at Joshua. Only 9 years old? How interesting. Chiffon still looked unconvinced. But your Grace, that mana flow. Chiffon, is there anything else you wish to say? Ah, no, my lord. The Duke focused his attention on Joshua. Joshua, I have something to ask you. Come to my room tonight. Hearing this, Chiffon's jaw dropped in shock. Young Master Babel grew even angrier. Father has never called anyone to his private chambers. Yet that bastard, a mere stable boy, gets that privilege. Joshua's eyes lit up. You understand? Duke Agnes. In the guest room, Princess Cheryl was jumping on her bed, cheering. Cox, wasn't that amazing? Princess, please calm yourself. Have some dignity. I can't believe it. A mage at just 9 years old? Isn't it unbelievable? All right, I've made my decision. What have you decided? That concubine's son. His name is Joshua, right? A scheming look appeared on her face. He will be mine. Golden sunbeams rained down on the magnificent castle. In another room, Chiffon knelt before a woman in a white dress. She had a noble air, but her face was ice cold. She slapped him hard. Chiffon, tell me again. What happened to Babel? This was the wife of Duke Agnes, Venus-born Agnes, King Marcus's older sister. Chiffon answered hesitantly. Young Master Babel, lost to Joshua. Lady Venus's face twisted with extreme rage. How? How is that possible? She immediately slapped Chiffon again, forcing him to clutch his cheek. Her voice trembled. That brat can use mana, and he's stronger than Babel? She then asked Chiffon. What did the Duke say? It seems he will take Joshua to the capital, Akkadi. Because he witnessed what Joshua can do, he wants to observe him. Whatever the case, things will get worse if we don't act fast. If you had completed your mission, it wouldn't have come to this. Please don't worry, Lady Vanessa. I will be sure to handle everything. Chiffon looked at her, trembling. Lady Vanessa asked again, so, what's the plan? Although this is just my speculation, it seems Duke Agnes is trying to inform the king that Joshua is a class mana user. You still think he'll do it? It wasn't just the Duke who witnessed it. 2 or 3 other nobles saw it too. Even if he couldn't use mana, they would have still pushed him into this test. The test? Yes. To be recognized as a class knight, one must fight a royal knight and demonstrate that they can use mana on the battlefield. Is that so? A glint appeared in the lady's eyes. It seemed she had an idea. That boy has to fight a royal knight? Good heavens, I must call your uncle. The scene changes. Someone was standing outside a room. They raised a hand and knocked on the door. It was Joshua. He called out, "It's me, Joshua." A voice immediately answered from inside. Enter. With permission, Joshua opened the door and stepped inside. His father, Duke Agnes, was already waiting for him. Joshua entered. He immediately knelt on one knee and bowed respectfully. You summoned me. Duke Agnes looked at him. He frowned and asked in a low voice, Who are you? Joshua hesitated for a moment, then spoke. I am Joshua Paul Agnes. He lifted his head to look at his father, speaking his own name clearly. Hearing this, Duke Agnes nodded once and said, All right. It seems you've changed a lot since I last saw you. Joshua looked at his father and replied, It's been a long time since then. Hearing his son's words, Duke Agnes asked him, Do you hold a grudge against me? Joshua immediately replied, Not at all, Your Grace. You have to worry about the royal family. It's natural you couldn't care for me. Joshua suddenly stood up and continued. However, I have a request. Duke Agnes raised an eyebrow. A request? An apology? Joshua spoke bluntly. Not something so useless. In this cruel world, an apology is useless, he thought. Joshua then said, It's about you taking me to the capital, Akkadi. The Duke tilted his head and asked, Are you sure I'll take you to the capital? Joshua answered without hesitation, I'm certain. His father then asked, And why do you think so? Joshua saw he wanted to know, so he explained his reasoning. There are 2 reasons. First, because Babel is your successor, but I appeared, affecting that. I think the best way to prevent family conflict is to send me elsewhere. Hearing his son, Duke Agnes looked at him in slight surprise. He thought, So the boy not only has talent, a shame I couldn't have trained him sooner. Joshua clenched his fists. He looked at his father and continued, And the other reason is that you want to possess me. I can bring great benefits if I can grow to surpass you. The Agnes family will rise once more. The key is that not even the royal family can interfere in this matter. After his son finished, Duke Agnes clasped his hands behind his back and spoke. I see. To say such words, you must know you possess some ability. Joshua looked at him with determined eyes. I only know that I will not disappoint you. The Duke praised his son silently. Very impressive. Very confident, even standing before me. He then asked, You mean you found a solution? Joshua then told his father, Yes. Take me to Acadie and send me to the academy. The royal children of the Avalon Empire, from ages 10 to 15, must attend the academy in the capital for 6 years. Some, like Babel, graduate early. Royal families use the academy to instill royal ideology in their children. They also use it to find hidden talents. Hearing his son, Duke Agnes frowned. As you say, I'll take you to the capital with me. I'll also visit often, since my work is nearby. Hearing that, Joshua thought, taught swordsmanship by Duke Agnes, a 100-year master. This is my chance. But then he cut off the thought and said, Everything will be fine. His father, Duke Agnes, asked, Fine? Joshua replied, I know you are a master of the longsword, but he pointed to a spear on a rack and said clearly, Use a spear as my main weapon. Duke Agnes was surprised. A spear? I was worried when he chose that stick in the fight. The Duke suddenly unleashed his power. A huge amount of mana was released. He asked in a loud voice, Why the spear? Overwhelmed by the Duke's presence and mana, Joshua raised his arms to shield himself. He thought, A massive amount of mana is radiating out. I can't stand. Despite this, Joshua held his ground. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing. But just as Duke Agnes was confident in his swordsmanship, he was proud that his spear technique was invincible. Joshua then shouted, I will show you. Those who stand in my way will taste my spear, even if it means I have to face a star myself. Duke Agnes seemed displeased. He said loudly, You say you'll defeat a star? Then prove that your spear is worthy. Facing his father's mana head-on, Joshua asked, Meaning? Duke Agnes looked at him with a frown. I will test you myself. Joshua just smiled faintly. He thought, Duke Agnes is one of the 9 stars. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. His father then withdrew his mana. He looked at Joshua and asked, Are you satisfied? The boy nodded to his father and said, Yes, there's one more condition. The Duke repeated, A condition. With determined eyes, Joshua said, If I pass your test, I hope you will accept the request I mentioned earlier. The Duke agreed. Fine. If you pass the test, not only can you use the spear, I promise to grant all your requests. However, if you fail the test, you must follow my orders. Joshua thought, his order will definitely be to go to the academy and learn swordsmanship. He agreed immediately. I understand. In his heart, he thought, that won't happen, because I will show him everything I have. The scene changes. Someone was communicating with a person elsewhere through a magic orb. The image of a man appeared within the orb. Babel's mother and another person were in the room. The cloaked figure spoke. Lady Vanessa, I've prepared everything. Babel's mother removed the hood from her cloak and replied, Good. She looked at the person in the orb and asked, Long time no see. Is everything well? The man laughed and replied, Of course. I'm enjoying myself in this lavish palace. How are things with the Duke? Vanessa continued, Actually, something has happened here, and I need your help. Scene change. Joshua stepped out of Duke Agnes's room. He stopped before the large door and thought, as expected, someone who reached the supreme realm is amazing. My body is still trembling a bit. Young Master Babel approached and called out, Hey, Joshua, let's talk. Joshua sighed softly and turned around. Do I have anything to say to you? Fight me again. Babel's eyes were completely different now. The fire in his soul was reflected clearly in them. He didn't want to taste defeat again. Joshua smiled faintly. Are you sure? The king's palace? Cantica Hall. Majestic and grand, it sat amidst towering mountains. A single glance was enough to feel the royal majesty of the Avalon Empire. Marcus Van Britten sat on the throne. Above him were 2 imposing golden dragons, exquisitely carved. He looked down. A subordinate knelt before him. Really? A shining talent in the Agnes family? Yes, that's right. Did Sister Vanessa have such a child? The king exclaimed in shock. What? Is it the concubine's child? The servant bowed his head and replied, You could say he's the child of a household servant. The king's eyes suddenly lit up. How interesting. He stood up and began to ponder. Babel alone is like a diamond in the rough, but it seems Duke Agnes possesses 2 diamonds at once. I'm jealous. The attendant added, The princess's talent also resounds throughout the country, Your Majesty. That was true. Recently, a few others had inherited the king's talent, but in terms of their current skills, none of them were weak. The king was cultivating those who carried his talent. The current princes were all quite outstanding. However, he set excessively high standards for them. His criteria for talent were incredibly strict, making them hard to reach. The king stroked his chin, seemingly deep in thought. He said, True. If Duke Agnes hadn't hidden his second son, his skills might be on par with Babel's. The attendant looked up at the king. Actually, There's a rumor that Babel was defeated by that kid. The king was stunned, unable to believe what he'd heard. What? Defeated? Is that boy older than Babel? He is only 9 years old. The king thought to himself, a child of only 9 possesses talent that makes the whole empire bow. Suddenly, the king burst out laughing. How very interesting. Then we must confirm it quickly. The attendant bowed his head again. Yes, indeed. This could be the plan of the Agnes family, requesting the dispatch of royal soldiers. I'm eyeing that boy at the level of a class knight. King Marcus frowned with interest. Class at 9 years old? That's a good thing. I'm curious how strong he really is. The attendant frowned, looking worried about something. He thought, the emperor wouldn't personally test the power of a 9-year-old, would he? Soon, he will have unimaginable power in his hands. The king spoke, I want to go too. You don't need to trouble yourself with such matters, but that would be humiliating. I can't do that. It would be like a dog waiting with wide eyes for food to appear. Anyway, send one of the princes there. Having an eye for people is one of the talents a king should have. Elsewhere, Joshua and Babel began a new match. They charged straight at each other. Flashes of light constantly shot out, surrounding them. Joshua used his bare hands to face Babel's sword directly. Babel's blade drew blood from his hand, but then Babel himself was sent flying back by Joshua's punch and fell to the ground. All his mana was poured into that punch. Is this guy that strong? Joshua spoke to him. I know what you're thinking. Get your emotions under control. I will show you what fear is. The technique you mocked. What? Joshua closed in on Babel, making him tremble slightly. Babel swung his sword at Joshua. Don't you underestimate me. Before the sword could even touch Joshua, he was sent flying by a blast of light, tumbling across the ground. Babel was completely unwilling to accept it. A thought crossed his mind. He focused mana into one part of his body. Damn it. I don't want to admit it, but this kid is really stronger than me. Joshua stepped closer, looking down at Babel at his feet. Not satisfied? Joshua? Then get stronger. Never forget today. After taking a punch from someone you've always looked down on. Babel glared at Joshua, his brows knitted in fury. Joshua continued, right now, I just want to end your life, for insulting and trampling on my mother. But I'll let it go just this once. From my perspective, you have potential. If you don't change that damn attitude, I'll make sure you can never hold a sword again for the rest of your life. Joshua's eyes seemed to blaze with fire, as if wanting to burn Babel to ashes instantly, making him tremble uncontrollably. Joshua turned and walked away, reminding him, and don't forget today's match. Babel was so angry he burst into tears. Damn it. The next day, at Agnes' palace, Joshua woke up feeling a bit unwell. My eyelids are heavy. I think I used too much mana yesterday. Although I can control mana after absorbing it, I still suffer side effects. Can my body not handle it? A knock came from outside. Is Can here so early? Joshua opened the door and said, You're earlier than me. But what greeted him was a red-haired girl standing outside. He sighed deeply. The girl spoke up. Hello, you're Joshua von Agnes, right? Who are you? I am Cheryl J. Pontier. I came from the Pontier Duchy. I heard you're 3 years younger than me, so how should we address each other? Cheryl narrowed her eyes and smiled, looking very interested and not hesitating to continue. Hello, little brother. You can call me big sister if you want. It's not convenient to talk out here. How about we go inside and continue? I have many things I want to know about you. As soon as she finished, she lifted her skirt, about to step into Joshua's room. Instantly, he blocked her. Hey, get out. After saying that, he slammed the door shut, leaving Cheryl standing outside. Cheryl looked extremely disappointed. Joshua had just gone inside when he heard another knock on the door. What is it now? It's early in the morning, and she still won't leave? Maybe I should just ignore it. But the knocking continued. Joshua started to get annoyed. Doesn't she understand plain language? He angrily opened the door and yelled, I told you to get out. But the person standing in front of Joshua now was Khan. He was a little taken aback. Ah, young master, are you busy? I'll come back later. Sorry, I mistook you for someone else, Joshua said to Khan with a slightly embarrassed face. How are things going? I've prepared everything, but I still don't understand why you're doing this. Joshua looked at him and smiled lightly. Just follow my words. When the time is right, you'll know. Khan. In the training hall, the squad captains were gathered and chatting. Hey Rose, where are Ghost and Lloyd? I heard those two were knocked out by Joshua. Is that true? George's face immediately turned pale. He grimaced in annoyance but didn't answer. The others continued to press him. What's with your face? Did someone steal your food rations? Those guys bullied Joshua. Maybe they caught a disease from that kid? Anyway, who gathered the knights here? I heard it was a knight from the Crimson Blood. Then today's training must be tough. Just then, a voice came from a distance. Attention! Knight Can of the Crimson Blood has arrived. Can and Joshua entered the training hall from outside. Can was carrying a spear. Whispers immediately broke out. What? That kid is Joshua. Rose's face turned pale. Why is young Master Joshua here? Can looked towards the knights and announced, today's training will be led by young Master Joshua. He will be assisting everyone. Joshua stepped forward, addressing them all clearly. I am Joshua Van Agnes, and I have been assigned to train all of you. Everyone below was stunned, unable to believe what they had just heard. Joshua continued, the knights standing here may one day become commanders leading the vanguard. To achieve that, skill is the most important thing. That is why today, I will personally inspect and evaluate your strength. Joshua's eyes turned cold. All of you, come at me at once. The crowd below was immediately shocked and began to murmur. What? Are you sure? Young master, you must be joking, right? Ken stood behind him, leaning in to whisper in Joshua's ear. Do we really have to do this, young master? Even if you are their young master, fighting against knights. The people below also started to speak up. He's right, young master. If you continue, you could get hurt. That's right. Although you are our master, doing this is an insult to the knights present here. Joshua tightened his grip on the spear and walked down closer to the knights. Do you really think so? The knight, Rose June, was startled. What? No, of course, I never thought that. Joshua showed his anger, shouting right in his face. Shut up. After seeing the reactions of the knights here, it seems you still haven't told them what I said, have you? Rose immediately dropped to his knees. I sincerely apologize. Please spare me, young master. Joshua pointed the tip of his spear right in front of his face. I let it go last time, but don't even think about it this time. The crime of threatening my mother was enough to put you in a coffin, but I let it go and gave you another chance. But you let that golden opportunity slip away. You want your life to end like Lloyd's and Gord's, right? The other knights began to whisper again. Maybe that's why Lloyd and Gort aren't here. Did they really die at the hands of young Master Joshua? Rose clasped his hands and begged Joshua. Please, give me a chance, young Master Joshua. I beg you. Joshua looked straight at him. There's no such thing as a second chance. But for the pride of a knight of House Agnes, I will give you one more opportunity. Draw your sword. If you defeat me, I'll pretend today never happened. Rose trembled slightly. He tightened his grip on his sword's hilt. The enemy is still a child. I can still win. He swung his sword towards Joshua. His eyes flashed, the corners of his mouth curving up slightly. The spear in his hand immediately swept out. With just one move, Rose was sent flying. He slammed hard against the wall in a pathetic state. He can use mana. Joshua looked at the others. Listen here. Judging an opponent's ability based on their appearance is a grave mistake on the battlefield. Anyone who still doubts my strength, step forward. I'm ready to fight. At that moment, one by one, the knights stepped forward and knelt on one knee before Joshua. The 23rd knight is pleased to meet you, young Master Joshua. The 35th knight is pleased to meet you, young Master Joshua. The 43rd knight. The 13th knight is pleased to meet you, young Master Joshua. The 65th knight is pleased to meet you, young Master Joshua. And stood behind, his face filled with joy. He really did it. My master. From now on, I will devote all my strength to serving you. In the guest room, Princess Cheryl was sadly hugging a teddy bear. The scene of Joshua telling her to get out replayed in her mind. Her eyes shimmered with sadness. Countess Cox rushed in from the door. Princess Cheryl, I have urgent news. I heard the royal knights will be here soon. Princess Cheryl listlessly dropped her head onto the bed and said to Cox in frustration, I told you to leave me alone. Princess, is something troubling you? You seem to have been sad all morning. Is something wrong? The princess turned and yelled at Cox. Cox, leave me alone. Have you forgotten my father's instructions? Countess Cox smiled sheepishly, full of awkwardness. Ah, I forgot what my master said. Princess Cheryl looked at him with angry eyes. Don't forget why you're here. Cox hastily retreated, closing the door behind him and saying, It's my fault. I'll leave right away. After Cox left, Princess Cheryl lay down on the bed again, burying her face in the teddy bear. It hurts so much. I want to see you. It seems Joshua left a very deep impression on the princess. In the Duke's office, the Duke sat at his desk. He looked at Joshua, who was kneeling on one knee opposite him. You punished a knight there? Yes, that's right. You know it well, Duke. Those knights slandered and gossiped about my mother. I punished them according to the law for insulting a noble family member. The Duke frowned in thought, and I understand that. If I were in his position, I would have cut off their heads with my sword. He let out a soft sigh. How shameful. Joshua slowly stood up and said to the Duke, Are you thinking this is the impulsive act of a teenager who can't control his emotions? What do you mean? Joshua looked directly at Duke Agnes. Just a few days ago, I was still a boy living in the horse stable, shoveling manure every day. Even if you say I've gained skills beyond imagination, gaining trust is very difficult. Duke Agnes looked at him with a puzzled expression. Then Joshua clenched his fist, his gaze firm, and said, Overwhelm them with power by instilling fear in them. In their hearts, they will never dare to threaten me or my mother. And I'm sure all the knights will see that I too have the Duke's blood. Duke Agnes stroked his beard. I understand your point. After speaking, the Duke stood up. Now, let's put that aside and get ready. We will evaluate your mana. The royal knights should be arriving soon. You must have heard the news, right? Joshua bowed slightly. his gaze unwavering, and replied, "Yes, I'll go prepare." The first knight of Duke Agnes was Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield, with a golden lion emblem on his left shoulder. He raised a hand to block the sun from his face and spoke with excitement. "How interesting. Our Duke is truly lucky to have two sons who are both young class knights." Chiffon, standing nearby, seemed displeased and said, "What's so great about one of them being a concubine's son?" Armstrong smirked, glancing at Chiffon with half-closed eyes. "You're afraid your position will be shaken now that you've seen young Master Babel defeated by young Master Joshua, aren't you?" Chiffon angrily clenched his fist and turned to glare at Armstrong. "What? Where did you hear that?" The Duke's voice cut through their argument. "The Royal Knights are about to arrive, and you're still standing there arguing?" Both immediately placed a hand on their chest and bowed in salute. "Greetings, Duke." Armstrong silently observed Joshua as he stood beside the Duke. "So that's young Master Joshua? He looks rather frail." Joshua suddenly spoke up. "They're here." "What?" A procession of carriages and knights in steel armor entered the Duke's castle. Chiffon was astonished at the sight of the large retinue. "Who else is coming? Why did the Royal Knights bring an entire battalion?" The gilded carriage stopped. A handsome young man with golden hair and a noble aura stepped out. "So, this is Duke Agnes, one of the 9 stars." The Duke was somewhat surprised to recognize him. "Your Highness, the 4th Prince." Joshua looked at the young man, his hatred clear. His lips tightened as he thought, "4th Prince Kaiser Van Britten. I didn't expect this day to come so soon." A knight fell after taking a direct hit. He was trembling and begging, "I'm sorry, Sir Joker. Please, stop." Despite the plea, he swung his sword decisively, his face showing no mercy. "A weakling like you dares to challenge me." This person was Joker, the captain of the Royal Knights. Just then, a voice came from behind him. "I knew you'd be here." He immediately turned his head. The person continued, "If you keep bullying the newcomers like this, who will dare to join the Royal Knights?" The power radiating from him didn't cease. "I can't stand by and watch them act like knights just because they can use a little mana. Why are you here?" He smirked and asked. The other person slowly emerged from behind a blue screen of light. "There's a mission from Lady Vanessa. You must take it." Back to the present, 4 people Joshua, the Duke, Chiffon, and Commander Armstrong stood solemnly before the Royal Knights. Among the Royal Knights, of course, was the commander, Joker, whom I introduced a few seconds ago. "So I just need to make sure that kid, Joshua, can never hold a sword again, right?" He wore a sinister smile. This was his mission. The 4th Prince spoke up. "I assume that is the rumored young Master Joshua." Our protagonist was furious but didn't show his discomfort. "Kaiser, that bastard." The man in the helmet next to the 4th Prince spoke up. "Young Master Joshua, please watch your attitude. You are in the presence of the prince." In response to the rebuke, Joshua smirked. "How ridiculous. There can't be 2 suns in the Empire's sky." "Unlike what you say, the only person a knight should show respect to without being prompted is Emperor Erlon. What reason do I have to pay attention to the 4th Prince, whose identity is unclear?" Before Joshua's retort, the 4th Prince maintained a smile, showing no signs of displeasure. The knight stepped forward. The red-haired man spoke, his hand on the hilt of his sword, ready for battle. "It seems this kid can't control himself anymore." He shouted, "You're just a bastard who shovels horse manure," as he drew his sword. He was Benmong John Brown, the 9th Knight and Vice-Captain of the Royal Knights. "Did you fall into a pile of manure and go crazy?" He growled with a voice full of contempt. Immediately, Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield refused to be outdone, drawing his sword to protect his young master. The red-haired man saw this and continued, "I'd understand if he were Duke Agnes, but why must you defend a lowly person like him?" He asked Commander Armstrong. "Young Master Joshua is also a part of the Agnes family," he replied decisively. The atmosphere grew tenser than ever, as if a battle could erupt at any moment. But just then, Duke Agnes's voice broke the tense atmosphere. "You are in the presence of the prince. Do you want to die?" The red-haired man laughed nervously, somewhat afraid. "That's one of the 9 stars, Aiden Van Agnes. This pressure is terrifying." Then, the Duke turned to Joshua and scolded him. "You are the one behaving improperly. Apologize to the prince immediately." The Duke immediately gave the order. The 4th Prince intervened. "Ah, it's all right. He's not wrong." The man in the helmet next to him spoke sternly. "Prince, this is an event that everyone will be watching. If things go sour because of this, the royal family could lose its authority." The prince looked at him and replied, "I was only ridiculed for my own pride, and just because I am the 4th Prince, an incompetent one." And as he said, the prince stepped forward. "The only one deserving of respect from the knights is Emperor Erlon." Standing before Joshua, the prince said, "I'm fine, so please don't mind the knights from earlier. Furthermore, knights should prove they can protect others with their abilities." The prince smiled and continued, "I'm sure he only knows meaningless words. You only talk without being able to do anything to others." The prince's words might make others think he was generous, but to our protagonist, it was just a way to twist the situation. However, in this life, that was all he could do, because things would be different. Our protagonist knew him too well. I will cut off your head. That's the best thing for you. The protagonist thought, I'm always ready. Joshua replied bluntly. Joker, standing beside him, couldn't hold back any longer and yelled, Hey, you arrogant brat. You're still being rude to the prince until the very end. After speaking, he gently turned to the prince and said politely, Prince, I may be overstepping my authority by asking this, but I want to assess his mana capacity with a duel. He bowed his head, his hand on his chest. I want to see it with my own eyes. The skill that allows him to behave this way. Everything was going according to plan. At the suggestion, the prince spoke up. For your safety, as well as fairness to me, Sir Joker, you are B-class. Perhaps that would be more suitable for him. After receiving the prince's permission, Joker flashed a murderous smile and replied, Thank you, Your Highness. In that case, I will do a good job of evaluating young Master Joshua's mana. Not long after, at the Agnes family's training ground, both Duke Agnes's side and the Royal Knights team watched the match between Joshua and Joker intently. Are you still trying to fool everyone around you? Joker spoke up. His weapon was a sword. Our protagonist was only using a steel rod. A steel rod? Do you think this is a game? His face clearly showed contempt for his opponent. You look down on others just because people say you have a little talent. You even dared to insult the prince and the royal decree. Not letting him continue his smug mockery, Joshua replied, You talk too much. I guess the Royal Knights are chosen for their speaking skills. The remark was like a bucket of cold water thrown in his face. With his arrogant nature, he was probably furious by now. I will make you regret what you said. Do you know how the test will proceed? You will fight me, and I will decide whether you can use mana or not. With that, he slowly approached Joshua, but before he could strike, the protagonist's steel rod was already pointed at him. Joshua was the first to attack. Joker was in a defensive stance. Just blocking the blow made him grimace because Joshua's mana was immense. Still, he didn't easily admit defeat and growled, Even so, it's still nothing but a toy. After speaking, he swung his sword towards Joshua. I just need to shorten the distance to finish you. If that was his strategy, he had likely already sealed his defeat, because that was exactly what our protagonist wanted. Most people who fight me think they just need to close the distance to attack, but I've overcome that weakness through long periods of training. The protagonist smiled confidently, as if victory was certain. A direct blow aimed at the head, but Joker managed to block it in time. The protagonist relentlessly counterattacked. Once again, Joker blocked it. Both fought with all their might, making the match more intense than ever. Meanwhile, in the stands, the prince said to the red-haired man, Impressive. To think he can fight on par with a B-class knight at his age. The red-haired man replied mockingly, Your Highness, it may seem so, but Joker is limiting his abilities to class. He then turned back to observe the match with a thoughtful expression. Their mana cannot be underestimated. Joshua has the advantage in technique. What is that technique? I've never seen it before. Down below, Joker was still attacking frantically. Damn it, if this continues, the match will end. If that happens, Lady Vanessa will have my head. I have no choice. I have to bet it all here. As for Joshua, he was also attacking with all his might. As expected, at B-class, he's on a completely different level than Babel. My mana is getting harder to control. My strength and mana are reaching their limits. Joker, almost crazed, launched a decisive blow at the protagonist. He frowned. The only one who has beaten me so far is Agnes, but I'm faster at this range. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately launched his attack, intending to end the match. The terrifying speed left our protagonist unable to react in time. He was hit. Blood spurted from his mouth. At that moment, in the Duke's section of the stands, Commander Armstrong jumped up, his face filled with worry. Your Grace, Joker's mana has surpassed B-class. Young Master Joshua is in danger. Contrary to Armstrong's excessive worry, the Duke remained calm, watching the battle. Wait and observe. After landing a hit, Joker seemed extremely pleased, mocking his opponent. It seems you didn't resist it, but just focused your mana. But this time, it won't work. He continued to charge forward. At this moment, our protagonist was pouring all his mana into the steel rod. Seeing this, he said, It's useless to accumulate your mana into that rod. Before he finished, he lunged at the protagonist with all his strength. From the stands, the red-haired man shouted, Joker, what on earth are you doing? Stop immediately. But it was too late. An intense blue light erupted, shaking the entire training hall. Debris flew everywhere, stunning all the witnesses. The red-haired man shielded the prince while looking back to assess the situation below. The floor was no longer intact after the collision of the two mana blasts. Joker was forced back. His face showed clear annoyance. What the hell just happened? The protagonist stood in a ready stance. The weapon in his hand had transformed into a different shape. It was no longer an ordinary steel rod. We're now watching the match between Joshua and Joker. Instead of fighting fairly, Joker used B-class skills, injuring our protagonist significantly. Then, they both launched decisive blows, creating an extremely powerful burst of light. This was Joker's plan. The collision between class mana and a B-class sword technique would cause his opponent to suffer severe additional damage from the initial shock, and thus, his mission would be complete. Meanwhile, to block Joker's power, our Joshua poured all his mana into the steel rod. At this moment, in his current state, this was extremely difficult, but he had no other choice. Obey my command, awaken, and as you saw, an extremely powerful burst of light. A powerful explosion shook the entire training hall, deforming the floor. Neither side was knocked down, but perhaps due to excessive exhaustion, our protagonist was panting heavily, his limbs beginning to tremble. The steel rod had now transformed into a new form. In the stands, Chiffon exclaimed in shock, That's an artifact. For those who don't know what an artifact is, it's simply a weapon infused with magic. The fourth prince was also extremely surprised by the turn of events and said, Ingall Blader. The red-haired man had no idea what his prince was saying. Has this fight satisfied you yet? What? Although he still has a long way to go, I can say his skills are very impressive, the prince said. Realizing the prince's intention, the red-haired man bowed and replied, Yes, I understand. At this point, I see the fourth prince is truly skilled at turning situations around. Down below, our protagonist asked his opponent, How was that? Joker replied blankly. What? Still panting heavily, the protagonist continued, I just blocked your attack. Joker grimaced and shouted angrily, I don't know what you did, but this is your end. From the stairs, the red-haired man descended, speaking up. The match ends here, Sir Benmong. Joker immediately exclaimed. The red-haired man looked at our protagonist with eyes full of admiration. Someone who passed the class test and even blocked an attack from Joker. His strength surpasses B-class. Although he had previously witnessed Babel Van Agnes, considered the greatest talent in the Empire, he had never been so astonished. What was this child hiding? The red-haired man pointed his sword at the protagonist. In the name of the heavens, from this moment on, the son of Duke Agnes, Joshua von Agnes, is officially a class knight. Receive the Emperor's sword. At this declaration, our protagonist thought quietly. At first, I didn't really care about becoming a class knight, but if I do something stupid, it could lead to my end. The space was silent, with only the sound of the prince's applause echoing. The protagonist stared into the distance and thought, I don't want to show them my weakness. I will definitely make everyone here pay for what I suffered in my past life. Cutting through his thoughts, the Duke approached from behind and asked, Joshua, are you okay? At the Duke's question, the protagonist looked at him with a meaningful gaze. I've never seen that face before. To think he would look at me like that. I'm fine. After speaking, the protagonist stepped forward to receive the sword from Sir Benmong. Under the Empire's witness, an unprecedented event on the continent had occurred. The protagonist raised the sword high in the air with pride, marking the birth of the youngest mana user. That night, the Agnes family gathered for a meeting. In Duke Agnes's meeting room, everyone wore serious expressions. Report anything noteworthy. Baronon Heo Vatson of the Agnes Duchy spoke up. Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield said, We recently received a report that the exploring knights have suddenly returned. Baron Heo Vatson was slightly surprised. The Knights of the Golden Shield returned so soon? Armstrong continued, Yes, for several reasons. In the Northern Territories, they reported that the number of monsters approaching the villages has doubled, and the biggest reason they had to return is because dark elves have appeared along with the other monsters. Dark elves. Even in the Shadow Forest, they are considered the strongest species, possessing enough strength to tear apart even dwarves, famous for their steel-like skin. Even fourth circle mages and knights with swordsmanship above B-class have great difficulty facing them. Baron Heo Vatson exclaimed in horror. What did you say? Dark elves. Someone in the meeting began to discuss. Is it that bad? If something like that appears near the town, what can be done to deal with them? Amidst the chatter, Duke Agnes spoke. I will handle this matter myself. Let's move on to the next issue. The Baron looked towards Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield. Yes, Armstrong replied. The second issue concerns the family of the five dukes. Armstrong looked at the Duke with a sharp gaze. Immediately, the Duke showed surprise. The family of the five dukes. Is that the Pontos family? The Duke was surprised because that could be the reason Cheryl and Cox were here. Give me the report on that matter after the meeting, the Duke said. Yes. At this point, Chiffon raised his hand to speak. I have something to say about young master, Joshua. Everyone immediately started whispering again. I heard he surpassed Babel and became the youngest class knight. Another person added, This is good news for the Agnes family. Baron Heo Vatson spoke up. Not now. Please be quiet and listen to Commander Chiffon. Chiffon presented seriously. Young Master Joshua was a forgotten person in this family. The main issue is that he previously had no mana to do anything. But how can someone suddenly become proficient and become a class knight? It can't be said that it's due to innate talent. So what are you trying to suggest? Commander Chiffon. Baron Heo Vatson asked. I personally think that young Master Joshua has borrowed power from some source, and this could endanger our future. If not, I don't know how else to explain it. Before Chiffon could respond to the suspicion, Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield, standing next to him, spoke up. Another source? You saw it with your own eyes. The weapon, young master, Joshua used. That weapon that could change shape and had magic in it. Was it an artifact? But in reality, young master Joshua's weapon was merely a steel rod. Chiffon still firmly asserted his speculation. Impossible. A steel rod can't contain such power. When Joker attacked with his final blow, I felt something like another dark power. Baron Anheo Vatsan immediately interjected. Dark power? I suppose he couldn't use dark power to become stronger. But what's the connection to demons and dark magic? Although it's a taboo on the continent, I think the royal family won't like this. Duke Agnes, if this is true, will all be in trouble. I think we should find out the truth first. Faced with a barrage of pressing questions, Duke Agnes just quietly bowed his head without saying anything. Just then, Chiffon spoke again. Anheo is right. We need to find out the truth before it's too late. I suggest that we send young Master Joshua somewhere far away from here. Immediately after, the door burst open. Young Master Joshua slowly entered, causing everyone to fall silent in surprise. As he walked past Chiffon, Joshua didn't forget to look at him and say, Dark power? If you're so curious, why don't you verify it yourself? Hearing this, Chiffon showed clear annoyance. What did you just say? Joshua repeated without hesitation. Why don't you check for yourself whether I really borrowed dark power or not by challenging me? Or are you scared? At the challenge, Chiffon, though visibly annoyed, remained silent. This kid dares to challenge me when he has the Duke's support. If I make a mistake, I'll have to pay for my words. If that power is really his, I'll lose. Why are you thinking so long? Joshua asked confidently. If you're one of the most skilled knights in the family, don't you think you should at least be confident after saying those words? Chiffon finally couldn't hold back anymore. He jumped up, channeling his mana, and growled. Your words are hard to listen to, young Master Joshua. Everyone present in the meeting cowered before the pressure radiating from Chiffon. Calm down, Commander Chiffon. You are in the presence of Duke Agnes. The Duke spoke up. Both of you, stop. Chiffon, there's something you might have forgotten. Don't you remember who evaluated Joshua's mana? Commander Armstrong of the Golden Shield immediately added, it was the Mage of the Royal Knights. If he had borrowed power from demons, everyone there would have noticed. The Duke continued, and with that, the issue of Joshua is resolved. Does anyone disagree? However, Joshua, that doesn't mean everything is resolved. There are a few things I need to verify. The Duke said sternly, your sudden increase in strength not only surprised everyone here, but me as well. Therefore, to explain your abilities, we will go to the Shadow Forest. Hearing this, everyone became agitated again. You intend to go into the Shadow Forest yourself? Such matters should be left to the knights. That's right. There's no need to put yourself in danger like that. Why don't you keep yourself safe, since you'll soon be heading to the capital, Arcadia? While everyone was giving their opinions, Commander Armstrong spoke up. I agree with the Baron. If anything happens to you, the Duke's voice turned cold. Who do you think I am? Armstrong knew he had misspoken and could only remain silent. The Duke continued. When the Shadow Forest is cleared, I intend to take Joshua to the Royal Academy in the capital. No matter what you may suspect, Joshua's talent is an undeniable fact. According to the rules of the Agnes family, he too is given a fair chance. Chiffon was still not content with the decision. Damn it. If that kid's talent returns after he hones his skills at the Royal Academy, no one will be able to touch him. Sir Babel might be pushed out of the competition for succession. I need to think of a reason to keep him here. No, I need to eliminate him. At this moment, Joshua spoke up. Duke, I have a request. What is it? The Duke asked. I want to go to the capital with my mother. Chiffon immediately snapped. That's not possible. Duchess Vanessa will not stand by if you take Lucia to the capital. What will happen to me if she doesn't stand by? Joshua retorted to Chiffon. Are you saying the Duke needs her permission for such a small matter? Question like that, Chiffon froze for a moment. If I disagree, it will sound like I don't respect the Duke. I can't let this happen. I'm being played by that kid. Not wanting to be cornered, Chiffon quickly explained his intention. Duke, I was just worried that if this gets out, you and Lucia will be affected. But before he could finish, the Duke cut him off. Forget about it. Then, he turned to Joshua. I allow you to bring Lucia. Thank you, sir. Joshua bowed, his hand on his chest. Duke Agnes looked at Joshua with quiet pride and thought, as I thought, he's not an ordinary child. How long has it been since I felt this way? Even Babel doesn't make me feel this way. To conclude the tense meeting, the Duke asked, does anyone else have an opinion on this matter? Everyone agreed with the Duke's decision. Even Chiffon was forced to obey. As you wish. Then that matter is settled. The Duke stood up and looked towards Commander Armstrong. Armstrong, come to my room and bring the knights you sent out. When you've arranged the report on Japontier, bring it. As you command, Armstrong bowed and replied. Before leaving, the Duke added, Joshua, you will come too. Suddenly, the door opened again. Young Master Babel appeared. Chiffon spoke up as he approached the Duke. Babel Van Agnes greets the Duke. Babel bowed to the Duke. So you finally decided to show up after all this time in hiding. The Duke sounded reproachful, but not surprised. I'm sorry. I needed time to reflect on myself, Babel replied. Babel has changed too. His energy has changed. The Duke silently assessed his son. This feeling isn't bad. All right, you must have a reason for being here. What is it? The Duke asked. Babel looked towards Joshua. Joshua, do you have something to say to me? Joshua asked. Once again, Joshua provoked Chiffon. Joshua, young Master Babel is of a higher rank than you, so show some respect. At Chiffon's overly aggressive attitude, Joshua made a sarcastic remark. Are you Babel's spokesperson or something? This left Chiffon speechless. What? Chiffon exclaimed. I've noticed for a while now, you act as if you're Babel's subordinate. The only master you should serve is Duke Agnes. In fact, there is always a line between a knight and his master. A knight, no matter how skilled, will be exiled if they cross that line. At these words, Chiffon spoke irritably. What are you talking about? I'm just helping you correct your etiquette. Anyone can stand at the top if they have the skills. If you want to express your opinion, you should improve your own skills more. Isn't that the law of the Duke's family? Joshua's words struck Chiffon's heart, making it hard for him to swallow his anger. Babel then spoke up. I'm fine, Sir Chiffon. He's not wrong. Meanwhile, the Duke observed from the side. This pride and boastfulness is different from before. Finally, the eyes of a knight have appeared. I will improve myself. I will take that advice myself. I will soar even higher. Babel said to Joshua, Don't think I'll give up in despair. His eyes had completely changed in a short period of time, Joshua thought, then smiled faintly. Joshua replied, I know. Babel turned to the Duke. Duke, from this moment on, I will officially renounce my claim to the succession of the Agnes family. Those present in the room were stunned. Renounce the inheritance? You're giving it up yourself, young Master Babel? Baron Anhio asked. At Babel's declaration, the Duke asked, Have you lost all confidence because of your younger brother's talent? Babel answered decisively, No. I just want to follow the laws of House Agnes and compete honestly and fairly. I will think about it. The Duke spoke. My request has been accepted by the Duke. Babel bowed his head. Thank you, Your Grace. With that, the Duke left, and the meeting concluded. While walking out of the study, the Duke rarely smiled. Slowly but surely, there will be change. I don't know how things will change, but I don't think it's bad. In Vanessa's room, a woman was covering her face, laughing bitterly after hearing Chiffon's report. Babel gave up the inheritance, and that brat is taking Lucia to the capital. Yes, it's all true, Chiffon replied. The woman angrily swept a wine bottle off the table. Please calm down, Chiffon said. I lost my cool when I heard about it. My uncle's work failed, and now this. Do you know Babel is everything to me? The woman covered her face, revealing a look of helplessness mixed with anger. Chiffon, at her side, could only bow his head and say, Yes, of course, I was there. I should have stopped him by any means. I'm sorry. The woman glanced at Chiffon and said, No, Chiffon. I know better than anyone that Babel is as stubborn as his father. You did nothing wrong. But right after, her expression changed. However, if that brat does anything to affect Babel's power, I will tell my husband all these secrets. Her eyes held a threatening glint. Chiffon replied nervously, Please don't worry about that. Something like that won't happen again. All right, about that child. Does he have a plan? The Duke intends to take him to Lock Palace? Lock Palace? The woman asked doubtfully. It's in the far north and takes 2 days to get there. At her question, Chiffon spoke up. The monsters from the Shadow Forest are on a rampage, so the Duke intends to go and destroy them himself. The woman continued to ask, Perhaps after returning, the boy and Lucia will set off for the capital. Chiffon replied. He asked if they wanted to eat with him before leaving. The woman gave a sinister smile. She was clearly scheming something. This might be their first and last meeting. Everyone was rushing to prepare for the trip. A knight in armor spoke up. The knights here for the mana assessment would also leave today. Another person shouted, Hey, focus. We're departing today too. Yes, understood. Everyone was busy. The Duke Agnes estate was bustling with activity. Get the horses ready now. Hey, we need help over here. I'll be right there. Meanwhile, our main character didn't seem rushed at all. He quietly looked at the ring on his finger. He remembered meeting Duke Agnes. We'll head to Akati right after we destroy the monsters in the Dark Forest. Before that, you must renounce the Agnes name. The Duke's words stunned him. What? The Duke continued. Instead, I'll give you a gift. He gently placed a box on the table. He then pushed it toward Joshua. I once assisted the Magic Tower. I received this magic ring as thanks. It's the ring of the Magic Tower's master. It was one of the magic-infused weapons he created himself. It allows the user to summon armor just by channeling magic into it. You'll know how to use it when you infuse it with magic, the Duke added. Joshua asked naively, Isn't this only given to the successor? The Duke's face turned serious. Don't misunderstand me. I'm only lending it to you. It was just gathering dust in the warehouse. That wasn't all. Is there another reason? Joshua asked. The moment you use the ring, your entire body will be covered in magical armor. That armor bears the family crest. It will protect you from prying eyes and help you hide your identity. I hate it when others take what is mine. On the other hand, you will be the heir of an unknown ducal family. Choose a suitable name for yourself. The Duke had explained it clearly to Joshua. But deep down, Joshua believed there was another reason. Wasn't he just being told not to cause more trouble for the Agnes family? This ring was too easy to use for someone of a high level, like an imperial prince. I hate them both. Suddenly, the Duke called out, Joshua. Yes? Do you resent me? The Duke asked. Joshua couldn't give a clear answer. He never expected anything from the Duke, but he was surprised to have witnessed the man's death. The Empire's civil war would break out in 10 years. When he thought about it, the man had abandoned him and his mother, and because of that, his mother had died. He'd met the Duke so few times in his past life it wasn't worth counting, so his mother. Any resentment he had for the man seemed to have faded. They say time is a great healer, or perhaps there was never a bond between them to begin with. Joshua looked at the ring on his hand and smiled. Something amusing. Young Master Joshua, the prince asked. Perhaps I should just call you Joshua now. Joshua asked back, What do you mean? You're going to Akadi after the mission in the Dark Forest, right? Come find me when you get to Akadi. I will definitely help you, the prince said with confidence. You'll help me? Joshua asked. Yes. Of course, the royal family can recommend a knight that will protect you from the other knights. They can become official knights without taking the annual evaluation exam. They also receive special benefits as official knights. Accepting means they aren't required to serve for 10 years. Furthermore, if you wish, there's no problem with using the royal knights as you please before you leave. Please understand this offer is a kindness I'm showing you. After speaking, the fourth prince gave a very friendly smile. But he couldn't fool Joshua. That smile was full of hypocrisy and deceit. It was disgusting. Joshua thought if it weren't for the men behind him, he would have already shoved his spear through the prince's mouth. Still, he had to join the Royal Knights to see his best friend from his past life. He needed to enter the Royal Knights and become a battalion commander. Only then could he enter the royal secret vault where his friend was sleeping. But first, he needed to handle this. Joshua responded calmly to the offer. I'll think about it. I'm busy. I'll be going now. See you. The red-haired man behind them spoke. If he could just be as polite as he is skilled, his promotions would be much faster. Hearing that, the fourth prince spoke up. Don't see it that way. We should return, Bayman. In the end, he will fall into our hands anyway. With that, the two of them turned and left. Kaiser, I won't be your pawn this time. This time, it's your turn. Joshua wore the confident expression of someone who had already won. Under Duke Agnes's command, an expedition team was quickly formed to enter the Dark Forest. The composition of the expedition team was quite simple. It was led by the Imperial Duke. It included a Blood Knight, a level 4 mage named Aceman that Sion had scouted, Aceman and 100 others, besides Babel and Joshua. That Babel guy, why does he keep staring at me? Joshua felt a little uncomfortable as he rode his horse. Over 100 riders passed through the city gates one by one. A voice called out, Everyone, halt. Greetings to the Duke. A soldier placed his hand over his chest, showing loyalty to the departing troops. Lock Fortress is right next to the Dark Forest, the Duke said, reining in his warhorse. Whoa, easy. After stopping his horse, the Duke turned to the soldier and said, It's been a while. Reuben saluted the Duke with a solemn posture. He was the Duke's former high-ranking knight, a member of the Three-Leaf Knight Squad, and had served the Duke for a long time. I've always felt sorry for you. I left you in this barren land after your retirement, the Duke said as he dismounted. This flustered Reuben. Please don't say that. It is my honor to serve you, even after retirement. And I told you I wanted to spend time with my family. The Duke replied, Thank you for saying that, with deep appreciation for the warrior. Suddenly, two people emerged from the fortress. Oh, my Duke. You've finally arrived. I'm deeply moved that you've come personally to support us. Greetings, Duke, said the girl beside him. The man was Viscount Bitch, the lord of this land and a relative of Vanessa. The girl was Anna, Viscount Bitch's daughter. Duke Agnes looked annoyed by the welcome. He thought to himself, This is a headache. I should have entered the forest immediately. Viscount Bitch turned to scold the old soldier, Reuben. Reuben, have you gotten so old you've forgotten? You were supposed to inform me immediately when the Duke arrived. Faced with the baseless accusation, Reuben could only bow his head and apologize. I apologize, my lord. Not stopping there, Lord Bitch raised his voice. I thought your skills would be better than your age. How will you take responsibility for the safety of this place? Reuben remained silent. The Duke broke the tense atmosphere. Bitch, it seems you've adapted well to this place. You look fatter every time I see you. The Viscount flinched at his words. Oh, Duke, he blurted out, then immediately put on a fake expression. How embarrassing. Not at all. It's because you've taken such good care of me. What the hell? Is this guy an idiot or just shameless? Joshua thought. Then the man suddenly turned to Babel. Oh my, young Master Babel is here too. You're even more handsome than before. Even I, who knows nothing of swordsmanship, can feel your spirit. It's been a while, uncle, Babel replied. He then let out a fake laugh. It seems a new master will soon be born in the ducal family. His laugh was so insincere. Rubbing his hands together, he looked over at Joshua and asked, And who is this? Chiffon spoke up. He is young Master Joshua, Viscount Bitch. Young Master Joshua, he asked in surprise. He is the Duke's second son. The man stammered, the second son. He turned to the Duke, scratching his head in embarrassment. Please forgive my rudeness. I must have misheard. Since when was Vanessa pregnant again? Chiffon whispered, Viscount Bitch, he's not Vanessa's son. At this point, the man probably wished he could find a hole to crawl into. What? How surprising. I didn't expect that. His face became incredibly ugly, but instead of changing the subject, he continued to pry. So, what noble bloodline does our young master possess? Chiffon, at a loss, could only reply helplessly. She did not come from a noble family. Ah, is that so? The man muttered as he looked at Joshua. Then his expression suddenly changed. His eyes were fixed on Joshua. You filthy pig. You dirty brat. Hearing those words, Joshua started to get annoyed. Everyone else just stood there in silence. Duke Agnes sighed softly and said, That's enough questions. Are there any urgent matters to attend to? The man replied, Nothing serious. We've prepared a feast. Why don't we rest for a bit? The Duke immediately showed his displeasure. This wasn't what he wanted to hear. My knights are not that weak. They rested enough on the way here. Then the Duke turned to his soldiers and asked, Does anyone need to rest? Anyone? Everyone was silent for a moment, then replied in unison, No, sir. Then let's go. With that, the Duke turned to leave. Suddenly, Viscount Bitch spoke up. Duke Agnes, I want to go with you. His expression changed. Showing great determination, he said, Although I can't be of much help in battle, I am a Viscount. How can I just stand by and do nothing? I believe all my knights and people feel the same way. His soldiers shouted in unison. That's right. We want to go with you. For the honor of working for the Duke. Seeing their spirit, the Duke looked at the Viscount and asked, What will you do with Anna? Are you planning to leave her alone? The man looked incredibly proud as he replied, Oh, you don't need to worry about that. My daughter can be useful, even if only a little. Hearing her father's praise, the girl couldn't hide her joy. Intrigued, the Duke asked again, You want your child to go on this dangerous journey? Without waiting for her father, the girl answered herself, I want to go with you, Your Grace. Please look at this. Then she revealed her ability. Thank you. A spirit appeared and sat on her shoulder. A soldier couldn't help but be amazed. Is that a spirit? The Viscount answered with a far from modest expression. We recently discovered my daughter can summon spirits. It is similar to magic. It's an ability only the chosen can use. No, considering the number of spirit users, it's even rarer than mages. The entire empire has only about 100 low-level spirit users. Joshua watched intently, not expecting to see one here. Babel, standing beside him, also stared at her. I don't know any spirit user named Anna, but that child looks very familiar. Have I met her somewhere before? Joshua wondered. All right, then prepare to move out. The Duke spoke up. However, the Blood Knights will take the lead. Lock soldiers will be at the rear, and the rest will be in the middle. I understand. Thank you very much, Duke. The Viscount and his daughter couldn't hide their joy. Then let's go. The Duke walked away, his mind full of calculations. Having a spirit user on our side won't hurt. The Viscount's daughter seems to have a crush on young Master Babel, doesn't she? I see her smiling at him all the time. They look quite cute together. Meanwhile, Joshua couldn't take his eyes off the girl. Since we'll be traveling with her, I should think about this slowly. If she interferes with my plans, I'll have to keep an eye on Anna. Viscount Bitch called out to Joshua. Hey, you, I'll be watching you. Was he threatening Joshua? But soon enough, he would likely regret this. The scene shifts to the throne room of King Avalon. So that's what happened, the man on the throne said, one hand on his chin in thought. Interesting. So his talent is real. He wasn't even hit by Joker's attack. He even commanded a battle. That's right, the cloaked figure replied. Evergrande, what do you think of this? He asked. I want your opinion as the Grand Magus of the Empire. The hooded figure answered. As you said, it's hard to gauge the boy's abilities, since knights and mages use mana differently in their mana cores. I want a general opinion, he said. How talented is that brat? The hooded figure replied. Without evidence, it's hard for me to explain. For example, comparing him to the royal knights. Hearing that example, the man on the throne showed interest. Good. The hooded figure spoke up. A few days ago, Sir Bayman and we didn't fight, but if it were one-on-one, I wouldn't lose, the person said confidently. That makes perfect sense. Even if Bayman achieved his rank at this age and has superior skills, It doesn't matter if you're his opponent. The man on the throne continued. However, what I feel from Bayman and Joshua is different. Are you afraid you can't beat that Joshua kid? The man on the throne asked. Not exactly, but there's definitely a difference there. In the next 10 years, or even sooner, it might be difficult to change. But right now, there's no way I can lose. The man on the throne smiled slightly. I'll ask you one more thing. If you and I fought one-on-one, what do you think would happen? The hooded figure did not reply to this question. After a moment, the man adjusted his posture and said, Interesting. Very interesting. I shouldn't let others witness it. I should have verified it myself, he said in a serious tone. It has come to this. I will observe that brat myself. Then he snapped his fingers, summoning someone. Immediately, a blurry figure appeared. You called for me, Your Majesty? The person bowed respectfully. Jaqen, can you keep that kid here for a while? The king asked. The other replied, The fourth prince has already prepared the plan as discussed. The man seemed surprised by the answer. Kaiser, the person continued. Just now, the royal knights received an invitation from the fourth prince. Naturally, the target will be Joshua von Agnes. An invitation. That's a good way to do it, the king mused, stroking his chin. Although I understand the reasoning, in reality, the 11th and 12th battalions are comprised of people who don't cause me trouble. Report back if any problems arise. The summoned person bowed and replied, Yes, Your Majesty, I shall take my leave. Mid-sentence, the person's body gradually faded away. After the person left, he laughed loudly. Joshua von Agnes, with that talent, he will become perfect for it. The scene changes to the dark forest. The sky was stained a blood-red color. The monsters roared incessantly. They appeared in terrifying numbers. Joshua held his spear in his hand. He was fighting off waves of monster attacks. We're surrounded. As dusk fell, everyone hurriedly set up camp. The key members gathered to discuss their strategy for the upcoming battle. Duke Agnes. Viscount Bitch spoke up. Why are we setting up camp here instead of going further? We're right in front of the dark forest. If we stay in such an open space, we could be ambushed by monsters, he said with a worried expression. Reuben, who was part of the discussion, looked at him with contempt. He thought that only the Viscount didn't understand what was happening. His head was filled with nothing but his own endless greed. The Duke spoke with annoyance. Didn't you research this place before spouting such nonsense? Can you tell what's special about this forest just by looking at it? Questioned by the Duke, he answered awkwardly. What's special about it? The Duke repeated, I'm talking about the time when the monsters become aggressive. When night falls, the monsters will head to the towns as if they're possessed by something. Especially during the blood moon, the monsters become even more ferocious than usual, the Duke continued. What's more worrying is that now, even without a blood moon, the time it takes for monsters to reach the town is shortened, and they are even attacking civilians. Night will fall soon. In a situation where our abilities are reduced and the monsters become more aggressive, there's no way for us to approach them first. Hearing the explanation, he could only give a weak laugh. He rubbed his hands together again. The Duke is as brilliant as expected. I couldn't even think of that. I'm very impressed with your wisdom. If you understand, then go set up your tent, the Duke said. Of course. Then the Duke turned to his two sons. You two should also find a place to sleep. Yes, understood. Both Babel and Joshua replied in unison. Then the scene changed. Our protagonist, Joshua, and a few others were gathering firewood in the forest. One of them spoke up, Young Master Joshua. I think that's enough, Joshua replied. I still haven't gathered enough. You guys go on ahead. After he spoke, the others left, but not without a word of caution. I understand. Please don't come back too late. When everyone was gone, Joshua put down the bundle of firewood in his hands. He used his ability to summon his weapon. Then he slowly ventured deeper into the forest. Unfortunately, his actions were seen by Viscount Bitch. The elemental stone. It is born from primordial power. It also contains magical elements. Ancient mages called it the elemental stone. It exists in elements like water, fire, wind, lightning, earth, and more. The stone exists because of these things, but only 5 elemental stones have appeared in the world. However, the appearance of those 5 stones is a distant future. An elemental stone has the power to raise a level 1 mage to a level 3 mage. It's an item that not only mages, but also knights would covet. If my memory is correct, one of the elemental stones is in the deepest part of the dark forest. Joshua recalled its location as he walked. This place is so dark. Just one elemental stone could help me control my power so I don't lose control. He looked down at the weapon in his hand. I've been walking for almost an hour. How long will it take to reach the center of the forest? I feel like I'll be there after I pass this area. Suddenly, a monster appeared, but Joshua managed to hide in time. The monster was a dark elf. It blocked the path deeper into the forest. Joshua watched from a hidden corner. Dark elves. They can take down most low-level mages. They say you need to be at least a B-rank knight to fight one, but dark elves usually operate alone. If I can use that energy like last time, I could defeat it instantly. Joshua got into a fighting stance. It will notice me when I get within 10 meters, so I'll close the distance quickly and strike its neck. As if sensing the danger, the dark elf let out a loud roar. Joshua, behind it, felt the immense pressure it radiated. Just a roar carries that much pressure. I need to finish it in one blow. Just then, the monster turned around and looked towards Joshua. It caught him off guard. I'll definitely die if I don't move. The situation was extremely dangerous, but thanks to his nimble movements, Joshua quickly dodged a blow from the beast. However, just one of its strikes was enough to show its terrifying power. His counterattacks couldn't even touch the monster. Suddenly, Joshua looked up at the sky. The moon had turned into a blood moon. It was the time when monsters go berserk. The moon has definitely turned red. The time when monsters go berserk. I'll surely die if I fight it in this state. I need to hide first. Joshua immediately vanished into the trees. I need to erase all traces of myself as quickly as possible. He was hiding behind a large tree, waiting. That stupid dark elf passed by. I'll use the technique from my friend in my past life, the king of assassins. Joshua closed his eyes to summon his power. It's been a while, so I don't know if it will still be effective. Instead of channeling mana into one part of the body, I have to control the mana and spread it throughout my entire body. Blue streams of light immediately envelop Joshua. Slowly, as if I'm merging with nature, control my breathing and forget everything around me. Then suddenly, Joshua opened his eyes. The beast with red eyes was standing right behind him, yet it didn't detect Joshua right next to it. This proved that Joshua had successfully used the assassination technique. Instead of attacking, he used it to search for the elemental stone. It's taking a toll on my body, but if I can maintain the mana, it will help. I'll reach the center of the forest where the elemental stone is. Lost in thought, Joshua missed his landing. He slipped and fell to the ground in pain. To his dismay, the monster was staring right at him, and this time, it wasn't just one. There were a whole pack of them. Joshua was surely done for this time. Like a pack of mad beasts, the monsters charged at him, but instead of being scared, Joshua saw this as a good opportunity. I wanted to try this anyway. Magic, Spear Arts, Second Form. Second Style, Gale. A brilliant burst of light erupted. The pressure was so strong that many monsters were thrown to the ground. However, in a short amount of time, using such a large amount of power had taken a significant toll on Joshua's stamina. I thought I had mastered the second form of the magic spear arts. I guess I'm still not proficient enough. At this point, Joshua could barely stand. He had to lean on his spear, panting heavily. That wasn't even a quarter of its true power. I guess a child's body has its limits, but I can't stop here. Based on the monster's movement, they'll encounter the knights at the camp. Time is of the essence. I need to find the elemental stone as fast as possible and regroup with the knights. At the campsite, the tents were almost completely set up. Suddenly, a sound caught a soldier's attention. Immediately after, a monster appeared. With a sword in one hand and a shield in the other, it charged. The unlucky soldier was struck down by the monsters before he could even react. Emergency! Everyone immediately got into a fighting stance. The monsters are ambushing us, a soldier shouted. The campsite became chaotic. Someone's injured. Medic, form a line, block the monsters. Meanwhile, in the distance, a whole pack of monsters was still silently watching. Babel used his power. He attacked the monsters with a single blow. One monster was cut down, but their numbers were too large, creating a significant obstacle. A warrior appeared from behind. With just a few strikes, he took down many beasts. This caught young Master Babel's attention. Who is that? There's someone that's skilled in the Blood Knight squad. Based on his skills, he must be C rank. Damn it, there are more than 100 of them. A roar echoed. Behind them, a whole horde of beasts was charging. Damn it, there must be at least 1,000 of them. A soldier spoke up. There are too many of them. We need to retreat. Just then, Commander Chiffon rushed forward and yelled, "Silence! I will punish anyone who dares to step out of this camp. Blood Knights, form a line. Prepare for battle." Commander Chiffon roared. All the soldiers got into a ready stance. The monster horde was just as fierce. They also roared, ready to charge into battle. It was hard to tell who would win. Both sides were giving their all for this fight. Before they could even rest, another wave crashed upon them. They're relentless. This is beyond my imagination. I predicted the blood moon would happen tomorrow night, but it's happening today. In the sky, the moon was larger and rounder than ever. The scene was soaked in the color of blood, the color of death. The strongest monster finally appeared. The pressure from its power was immense. Damn it. At that moment, Chiffon spoke helplessly. I'm the only one here who is B rank or higher. Whether we can defeat it or not all depends on me. I will tear you in two. As soon as he finished speaking, Chiffon launched an attack, but he was quickly knocked back. Chiffon's strength was clearly not enough to face that monster. Commander Chiffon, Babel called out. Another soldier screamed, "The dark elf is coming. Run. We'll be torn to shreds if we're caught." Damn it. The number of elves isn't decreasing. Retreat. Why is this happening? Despite his injuries, Chiffon struggled to get back on his feet. A knight must never lose his composure in any situation. Just then, the Duke appeared. "Duke Agnes," Chiffon exclaimed, "I'll take it from here." With that, the Duke brimming with killing intent, advanced towards the beast. If you're curious about the Duke's true power, I'll give you a visual treat with just one powerful blow. Duke Agnes wiped out countless monsters. The terrified beasts could only growl, not daring to advance. Witnessing this, Commander Chiffon was stunned. With just one blow, hundreds of monsters vanished. This was the power of a master. Duke Agnes, one of the 9 stars of the Empire. The scene shifts to Joshua, who had also just defeated several beasts. He strode confidently towards a deep cliff and called out, "Bronto!" A powerful purple light erupted at the campsite. Babel couldn't help but tremble as he witnessed his father's power. Viscount Bitch, standing beside him, spoke up. "That man is your father, Aiden von Agnes. I'm sure you can do the same since you inherited his blood." The Viscount looked at Babel with a sinister gaze. I guess he's still a child. No matter how talented he is, this must be his first time experiencing something like this. It's understandable. Now, I should think about it. He then ran to Commander Chiffon. "Commander Chiffon, where is that kid?" "That kid?" Chiffon asked in surprise, "The concubine's son, Joshua." The man's face darkened as he spoke. "Ah, now that you mention it, I haven't seen him. Maybe he ran away to save his own life." As expected of Trash, he spat. Other soldiers began to whisper. "Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him for a while." The person next to him was shocked. "What? Did he really run away? Isn't he so different from young Master Babel? How shameful. He's the successor to the Duke's great bloodline. What are you all doing? The battle isn't over yet." The Duke roared, "For the honor of Agnes." Babel raised his sword and charged. "The Duke is with us. Follow me." Immediately, everyone charged forward to attack. Look at them run with their tails between their legs. "We'll make sure you never leave this forest." But before they could celebrate, a sharp clang rang out. The monster collapsed to the ground. "What happened?" a soldier shouted. Just then, a whole army of giant monsters appeared. Every single one of them charged forward aggressively. It's a group of dark elves, the strongest monsters in this dark forest. Meanwhile, the smaller monsters were also frantically attacking the soldiers. "Don't retreat. Face them," a soldier yelled. The scene was utter chaos. Watching his comrades fight, Commander Chiffon could only watch helplessly. "Damn it, I thought we could wipe them out easily. But this is a pack of dark elves. If you remember when Joshua went into the forest alone, he clearly said that dark elves fight alone. So why are they fighting in a pack now? You're wondering too, right? Keep watching with me to find out." Suddenly, several streaks of white light flashed in the air. Our protagonist Joshua suddenly appeared, landing a direct blow to the dark elf's head. A series of bright flashes erupted simultaneously. The dark elf was instantly defeated, leaving Chiffon and Viscount Bitch speechless. "Young Master Joshua," a soldier's voice rang out. "He defeated a dark elf, which is twice as strong under the blood moon, with a single blow," Chiffon exclaimed. "Young Master Joshua." Viscount Bitch, standing beside them, roared, pointing straight at Joshua. "Impossible. What was that? What trick did you use, you insect? Showing up just in time after running away?" "Yes, that's impossible. It has to be." He roared. "The Duke was the one who killed it with one blow. What are you all doing? Lock Knights. Support the Duke immediately." He turned and glared at his soldiers. As expected, it was just a coincidence. No matter how talented young Master Joshua is, he's still just a D-rank knight. He can't defeat a dark elf that even a B-rank knight would struggle with. Despite Viscount Bish's words, the soldiers continued to gossip about Joshua's power. "We should take this as motivation to destroy the monsters. Everyone, support the Duke." Joshua smiled helplessly. It seemed he was used to being ignored. With that, Joshua brandished his spear. "Then I'll give you all a little surprise. I might not be able to stand after using this. Anyway, that monster will save me. Just one dark elf is hard enough to deal with, but now there's a whole pack. What should we do?" a soldier asked instinctively. Joshua charged from behind. "Everyone, run if you don't want to be caught." "Young Master Joshua," the soldier turned instinctively. "I can use a portion of Bronto's power, but I'll be injured right after. I wonder if my body can handle it." Joshua unleashed his attack, Thunderclap phase. An extremely powerful light burst forth once again. A dark elf was instantly defeated. Witnessing this, Viscount Bitch collapsed, muttering, "Impossible." The soldiers who saw it couldn't believe their eyes. Young Master Joshua really defeated the dark elf. The skin of the dark elves isn't even scratched by the slashes of B-rank knights. "This is the skill of a C-rank knight," another said. "No, I've never heard of or seen elemental mana before. Maybe young Master Joshua is a peerless knight. He can handle it after doing that." The Duke found it hard to believe but couldn't deny it. He must not want to show any weakness. Impressive. It's no wonder he has high expectations for him. Aceman approached. "What do you think of it, Aceman?" the Duke asked. "I'm not familiar with the ranks among knights, but as a mage, I can see that he is a level 3 mage and possibly a peerless one. He's a monster with enough talent to change the country. No, the entire history of the world. For those who don't know, peerless is a gift from the heavens. Only a few people can use it. The ability to use two types of magic at once using complex magical formulas without interruption. Suddenly, Aceman seemed to realize something and exclaimed, "He can fulfill your long-held dream. I understand your thoughts." The Duke rushed towards Joshua. At that moment, Joshua had reached his limit. He was no longer conscious enough to fight. Just then, a dark elf prepared to attack. But before it could reach Joshua, the Duke rushed in. He held Joshua in his arms. A satisfied smile appeared on Joshua's face. The Duke held Joshua with one arm. He fought relentlessly. He looked so cool before completely passing out. Joshua still managed to see the man's face clearly. Not bad. Then he officially lost consciousness. In the dead of night, screams and cries for help echoed throughout Duke Agnes's domain. Joshua slowly opened his eyes. The scene before him was the Duke's burning castle. What the hell? Joshua was floating in midair. Looking down, he saw that fire had engulfed the entire castle. This is a dream. Joshua thought he was dreaming, but the scene was too real to be a mere dream. A figure emerged from the sea of flames, holding the Duke's sword. Joshua thought it was Duke Agnes. However, the figure was not Duke Agnes, but Babel. His eyes were filled with hatred. Joshua, floating in the air, couldn't help but wonder, is this when Duke Agnes's domain is wiped out? Is this what will happen in 10 years? How am I? This is a special dream. I'm having a prophetic dream with Bronto's power. If it's an elemental stone, then it's possible. Even the great mages of the magic tower couldn't fully explore the abilities of the stones. What's with this wind? A gust of wind shot straight towards Babel. It made him scream in pain. A girl appeared before him. "Anna Belgrade," Joshua exclaimed, "and the high-level spirit, Cillian. Although I don't remember anything about Anna, I'm certain of one thing after seeing Cillian. Something happened between Duke Agnes and Anna. Wait, and if she's here, if Anna Belgrade is a master, then that person must be here too." Both Babel and Anna were saying something to each other. Babel's expression was intense, but Joshua couldn't hear what they were saying. Joshua guessed they were using a silence spell or something to communicate. "This is frustrating," Joshua said. Another person appeared. The three of them seemed to be discussing something. Joshua couldn't see the person's face or hear their voice. "I'm sure it's him." Joshua flew towards the source of light but stopped when he heard Babel's voice. "Silence. You think you can make Duke Agnes kneel just because you have a few hunting dogs?" Babel struggled to his feet. He got into a fighting stance. He only saw the mysterious person smile. "What did you say?" Anna's spirit suddenly lunged at Babel. He took a heavy blow. His expression alone was enough to show how much pain he was in. Before leaving, the person added something else. His face showed a contemptuous smile. Joshua witnessed it all. You bastard." "Gracia," Babel exclaimed when he saw the man's face. Suddenly, a powerful light appeared, throwing Joshua away. At the same time, Joshua's eyes shot open, and he screamed, "Gracia Belgrade." That was definitely a prophetic dream, not a normal one. Joshua sighed. He sat up. More importantly, how much time has passed? Joshua tried to get out of bed, but it seemed his body hadn't fully recovered. He grimaced in pain. Has my body still not accepted it? Joshua looked down at his bandaged arm. Although I've passed the first stage of the magic spear arts and entered the second, Joshua's hand clenched. It's only at the highest level of a C-rank knight. To unleash the power of the magic spear arts and fight monsters, I need to start at around B rank. Maybe it's thanks to Bronto's life attribute. And moreover, if the prophetic dream is another power that Bronto possesses, then I need to learn more about the elemental stone. Is it fascinating? Duke Agnes, sitting beside him, spoke up. "Duke?" Joshua exclaimed in surprise. Even though it was just a few hours ago, that red moon seemed about to swallow the whole world. The world seemed to radiate a strange energy, the Duke said, his eyes fixed on the moon outside the window. But now, it has a cold, unusually captivating light. Suddenly, Joshua also looked up at the moon outside the window. "As soon as we reach the duchy, we will immediately go to Akkadi, just as I said before. You will not appear as Joshua von Agnes. From now on, you are the only son of Viscount Frederick, a fallen family. You are a nobleman trying to restore your ruined family. That will be your new identity," the Duke said. "I understand," Joshua replied. "If that's what's necessary, I'm more than willing to do it. Being noticed too much brings nothing good. The most important thing for me right now is to regain my former strength and..." The Duke glanced at Joshua and spoke. "I didn't expect you to talk in your sleep, but you mentioned a very interesting name, Gracia Belgrade." The Duke said in a serious tone, "How do you know that cursed name?" Duke Agnes was now curious. He couldn't understand how Joshua knew that name. A cursed name. The atmosphere in the room was eerily quiet, with only the crackling of the candle on the wall. After a long time, it seemed Duke Agnes could no longer bear the heavy silence and stood up to leave. But before leaving, Duke Agnes didn't forget to tell Joshua to go to bed early, as they would be returning to the main capital of the domain tomorrow. Hearing this, Joshua just quietly watched the tall figure disappear behind the door. A few hours later, night slowly enveloped Locke Palace. At the same time, in a secret room, a private conversation was taking place. Viscount Bitch was very confused as to why Vanessa was letting things unfold right before her eyes, because Joshua was a real threat to Babel in the fight for the succession. Hearing that, Chiffon didn't know what else to say. He knew very well that Lady Vanessa had no opportunity to act. Moreover, Joshua had always been just a stable boy. Who would have thought he was hiding such a talent? Hearing this, Viscount Bitch became even more contemptuous. He believed that the son of a maid couldn't be that talented. Even Babel, considered the #1 genius of the kingdom, needed the massive backing of the Agnes family to achieve that position. Furthermore, Babel's swordsmanship was personally taught by Duke Agnes. But Joshua was completely different. He had no powerful support behind him. Therefore, it was impossible for him to defeat a dark elf with skills beyond C rank. Even the other knights, the C rank knights present there, couldn't do it. Hearing this, Chiffon agreed with the Viscount. He knew all too well that it was an impossible feat for a C rank knight, but since they had witnessed Joshua defeat the dark elf with their own eyes, they simply concluded that he was a magic knight. The Viscount still didn't believe it, as he had a more plausible theory, that Joshua had made a pact with a high-level demon in exchange for this power. Chiffon disagreed. Joshua had been recognized by Duke Agnes and the royal knights. Moreover, Chiffon himself was there, so he knew very well that Joshua didn't have even a spark of demonic power. Viscount Bitch didn't care. To him, whether Joshua had really made a pact with a demon wasn't important. Hearing these words, Chiffon immediately understood that Viscount Bitch wanted to pin this crime on him to ruin his reputation as a genius. In fact, he felt quite lucky that Joshua had revealed his power so early. If he were allowed to grow for a few more years, Babel's faction could very well be overthrown. Therefore, Viscount Bitch decided he had to teach Joshua a lesson about tall trees catching the wind. Hearing this, Chiffon didn't quite understand what the old man intended to do. It turned out he wanted to continue monitoring Joshua, because they could do something to him. Coincidentally, Viscount Bitch's daughter had also received an admission letter to the Royal Academy. Therefore, they could completely observe Joshua's every move right there. With that, Viscount Bitch turned and left. But before leaving, he didn't forget to remind Chiffon to pay more attention to this matter, because if Joshua aimed for any position, it would become an even bigger problem for them. Chiffon understood. It was better to be prepared. It was better than dealing with things after they happened. Therefore, they could only eliminate this threat as soon as possible. And at that moment, only Chiffon was left standing in the room. In his mind, a plan was forming to drag Joshua down into this filthy mud. The next morning at the Agnes estate, Cherry stood lost in thought, watching the leaves fall. Just then, the door behind her was suddenly pushed open. It was Khan, rushing in to report something urgent. Cherry didn't understand what could make him so panicked. It turned out Joshua was on his way back from the purification in the dark forest. He heard the Agnes family was holding a party, a cleansing feast for the Duke, so he immediately came to inform Cherry. But hearing that, her face showed no joy. She just turned away and continued to stand there, lost in thought. Seeing this, Khan was confused. He had thought Cherry would be so happy she'd jump for joy at this news. She found it even more strange that Khan would think that. From what Cherry knew, he didn't have a very good impression of Joshua either. Actually, at first, Khan really didn't like him, but only because he was the son of a maid. But now, Joshua had become the youngest mage in history. He was the kind of existence that even the wealthy and prestigious Fontaine family couldn't buy with money. Cherry was even more confused. Khan then asked her back, wasn't the reason Count Fontaine sent them to the Agnes family for that very purpose? How could she not know? It was because the mercenary king wanted to use every means to establish a relationship between her and Babel. Still, no one expected him to side with the Gombel family. The mercenary barbarian is a master swordsman. He's a commoner who reached A rank. More accurately, he mastered the axe. Not only that, the mercenary king barbarian is also one of the 12 superhumans. He can fight on par with the 9 stars. He has become a symbol of the mercenary world and has set the rules for this entire community. This completely separated them from other forces, making them an independent organization within the kingdom. That is the mercenary king. What's worth mentioning is that, according to a source from a Fontaine family spy, the mercenary king had secretly joined forces with Marcus Gorman, the second richest man in the Avalon dynasty. Since both were merchants, clashes in the market were unavoidable. Moreover, the conflict between them had grown so large that even a small spark could ignite a territorial war at any time. Although it was still just a rumor circulating among merchants, if it were true, the Fontaine family absolutely couldn't handle it alone. At this point, Khan smiled, realizing his young lady had matured. All from just one dream. In the current situation, everything was exactly as Cherry had said. Both families were renowned merchant powers in the dynasty. Therefore, the rumors became an extremely sensitive issue. Once they spread widely, it was hard to tell. They could become an unavoidable reality. If other families heard this news, they would surely act to seize a piece of that fat pie. The undercurrents in the Avalon dynasty were still raging fiercely, but on the surface, everything seemed peaceful and prosperous because the government, the central government did not allow war to break out. However, if these underground struggles surfaced, the Avalon dynasty would surely face a great disaster. Hearing those words, Cherry also understood. If superhumans like the mercenary king couldn't be bought with money, they could be bound by political marriages. And once Cherry and Babel were engaged, the Fontaine family would receive the support of Duke Agnes. Therefore, Cherry couldn't help but feel bitter, realizing she was being used as a political pawn. Seeing this, Khan just shook his head. From his understanding of his young lady, she should have been cheering with joy to know she was the key point. Just then, she suddenly spoke, interrupting Khan's thoughts. I don't have to ask for his help, do I? Khan had to explain. For nobles, honor is the most important thing, especially for the 5 great families. So even though the Fontaine family desperately needed Duke Agnes's help, they couldn't bow their heads for it. The current situation was still under control. At this point, Cherry pondered and asked, Do you think differently, Khan? He frankly expressed his thoughts. At least, this subordinate wouldn't do something as foolish as putting pride above the family's safety. Khan had long realized that although Cherry was interested in Babel, her heart wasn't in it. Therefore, he hoped Cherry wouldn't have to sacrifice herself for the family's benefit. But it still wasn't enough. The current problem was that the Fontaine family was in imminent danger, so Khan wanted Cherry to try talking to Joshua one more time. Hearing those words, her eyes immediately welled up with emotion. Seeing this, Khan also realized in embarrassment that he had said too much. However, Cherry didn't blame him at all. On the contrary, she agreed with Khan's suggestion. Hearing this, he was overjoyed and immediately went to find Joshua. After Khan left, Cherry sighed softly for a long time. In her heart, she didn't know if this would be okay or not. That day, the sky above the Agnes estate was lit up by brilliant fireworks. Today was the day the Jameson Knight Squad returned from Lock Fortress, so a grand feast was held to celebrate their return. Inside the estate, the knights were loudly boasting about their exploits on the battlefield. But, amidst the bustling hall, Joshua quietly left, which Ken found a bit strange. After all, Joshua was the main character of this party. Why would he leave so quietly? Hearing this, Joshua just smiled faintly. The way Ken called him master was too natural. If others heard it, it would quickly become a topic of gossip during afternoon tea. Hearing this, Ken didn't see it as a problem. After this purification, he truly saw Joshua as his master. Joshua smiled teasingly. Do I have no other choice? I have the right to refuse a knight's oath. Hearing this, Ken immediately jumped forward and chuckled. He knew Joshua wasn't foolish enough to refuse a subordinate who was a master. Hearing that, Joshua couldn't understand where Ken got such confidence. Then he sent the man home. After a long journey, he was also feeling a bit tired. Hearing that, Ken had no choice but to bow. But he still hoped Joshua would consider his earlier offer. He knew he could learn a lot from this young master. Then, he turned and left. Watching Ken's back disappear, Joshua involuntarily remembered his past life. There were also a few people who wanted to become his subordinates, but he skillfully refused them all. Because Joshua wanted to be that person's personal sword. He was afraid that if he had subordinates, that person would become wary. But in the end, Joshua was betrayed by Kaiser, the person he considered his best friend, and was buried deep in the forest. The memory brought a sharp pain. Remembering it made Joshua's head throb even more. Just then, a voice suddenly interrupted his memories. It was the voice of an old man, one of Duke Agnes's retainers. He came to invite Joshua to another feast. Joshua was a bit confused. He had previously said he wouldn't attend any more parties. The old man didn't seem to care and replied, This isn't a party. This meal was prepared by Lady Vanessa herself for you. Your mother, Lucia, will also attend. Hearing that his mother would be there, Joshua's eyes widened as he looked at the old man. A moment later, Joshua was standing in front of the room and pushed the door open. Inside, Lady Vanessa, Chiffon, and Joshua's mother, Lucia, were all there. Seeing him, she called out happily, Joshua. Seeing his mother, Joshua quickly approached and greeted her. My lady. When Vanessa saw him enter, she curved her lips into a faint smile and said, Come in, Joshua. This is the first time we've met, isn't it? When Chiffon saw that he didn't greet anyone, he immediately spoke up to remind him. In his eyes, Lady Vanessa was the person with the highest status in the room. Hearing this, Joshua glared angrily at Chiffon, startling him. He broke out in a cold sweat. Chiffon never expected Joshua to dare look at him with such eyes. At that moment, Lucia also told her son to be polite. Joshua was silent for a moment. Then, he bowed according to noble etiquette and said, I am Joshua Agnes, my lady. As soon as Vanessa heard Joshua introduce himself, her face immediately darkened. She didn't expect him to brazenly use the Agnes name like that. Lady Vanessa was furious, but managed to suppress her anger and said, I heard you'll be going to the capital soon. It seems we won't have a chance to introduce ourselves properly. Lucia was extremely shocked by these words. She didn't understand why Lady Vanessa said her son had to go to the capital. Chiffon then stepped forward to explain. It turned out that because Joshua had been recognized as a C-rank knight, Duke Agnes would be sending him to the academy in the capital. Hearing this, Lucia was overjoyed. She couldn't believe her 9-year-old son had become a knight. Lady Vanessa also explained the reason for the meeting. She wanted to congratulate Joshua on becoming a knight. At the same time, she expressed her regret for not taking good care of Joshua and his mother before. In other words, this was a reconciliation dinner. Hearing this, Lucia awkwardly waved her hands. After all, her status had always been that of a maid. The word resentment had never crossed her mind when facing someone of a higher position. Hearing this, Vanessa smiled meaningfully. Then she gently shook the bell in her hand. At that moment, the door opened. Servants carrying steaming plates of food slowly entered. Joshua immediately looked at the dishes. He quickly realized something was wrong. So, Joshua gave a cold smile and looked at Lady Vanessa. A moment later, she still hadn't realized that Joshua had discovered the problem and continued to play her part. I hope the dinner I prepared for Lucia and Joshua isn't inconvenient for you too. Hearing this, Lucia looked very embarrassed, not knowing how to respond. Lady Vanessa was pleased and said with a smile, "Good. I was worried you had a grudge against me. I hope tonight's dinner will shorten the distance between us. I wanted to show my sincerity." Lucia was very moved and immediately thanked her. So, Lady Vanessa said nothing more. She quickly picked up a piece of meat to eat. Seeing this, Lucia immediately did the same. After all, the host had begun to eat. She had no choice but to follow. Lady Vanessa watched this scene with a crazed smile. Her plan was about to succeed, but just then, Joshua stood up and stopped them. "Before we eat, I must apologize, my lady. My mother and I have been in great trouble. I'm sorry. I apologize for not being able to greet you sooner." Hearing these words, Lady Vanessa's face froze. She couldn't believe this brat had stopped her at the perfect moment. But Lady Vanessa had no other choice. She continued urging Joshua and his mother to eat. Joshua seemed to ignore her darkening expression. He just kept refusing Lady Vanessa's kind offer. Lucia heard his words but was confused. She didn't understand her son's intentions. Seeing her confusion, he began to explain. Lady Vanessa's welcome feast was too obvious. She had piled a mountain of food on their side of the table, but on her own side, there was barely any food at all. Only then did Lucia realize something was very wrong. Joshua kept smiling and talking, but inside, he felt only contempt for Lady Vanessa's cheap tricks. In his past life, Joshua had experienced countless banquets just like this. And the one thing these feasts never lacked was, of course, poison. It was a substance that's hard to detect. It leaves almost no trace. So Joshua decided to turn the tables on her. He invited Lady Vanessa to eat with them. Hearing this, her expression turned extremely ugly, but she tried to explain that she was on a diet and couldn't eat much. Joshua casually praised Lady Vanessa, but he had no intention of letting her off the hook. He acted as if her not eating was a serious problem. On the surface, she kept smiling, but inside, she was grinding her teeth in rage. Lady Vanessa never expected Joshua to be this clever. She was caught in a dilemma. If she kept refusing to eat, she would be admitting the food was tainted. His words sounded like a joke, but they laid everything bare before Lady Vanessa. Back in the day, ladies used to poison food, right? At that moment, Chiffon stepped forward to defend his master. Seeing him appear, Joshua dropped the act. He immediately glared at Chiffon. After all, he was the son of a duke. Chiffon was merely a retainer. In other words, he was being insubordinate. But Chiffon didn't seem to care. He broke out in a cold sweat. He could feel the boy in front of him releasing a powerful killing aura. This left him completely bewildered. He couldn't understand how a C-rank knight could control his killing intent with such mastery. Joshua ignored Chiffon and turned back to Lady Vanessa. "What do you think, my lady? I was just speaking casually." But seeing Sir Chiffon's reaction, I guess it wasn't so casual after all. "Did you really put poison in the food?" Lady Vanessa was speechless. She had no idea how to explain herself. Chiffon knew this secret could not get out. He drew his sword, intending to teach Joshua a lesson in etiquette. However, Joshua didn't back down. He summoned his spear to face Chiffon. "First, it was the poison. Now you point your sword at me. I won't let you get away with this." Chiffon felt waves of mana crashing towards him. A knot of tension formed in his stomach. He knew this power was real. This wasn't the energy of a C-rank knight. With this much mana, he had to be at least B-rank. Moreover, the weapon Joshua held was a holy relic infused with spatial magic. Chiffon was immediately put in a difficult position. In any case, they both had their weapons drawn, and if Joshua was allowed to grow stronger, he would become a huge problem later. So Chiffon channeled his mana to confront him directly. The entire room felt like a powder keg about to explode. Wild mana swept across the room. It formed a vortex that blew everything away. Just as they were about to clash, a voice suddenly rang out. "What do you two think you're doing?" Meanwhile, in the capital of the Avalon Kingdom, the fourth prince, Kaiser, was casually reading in his manor. Just then, a figure stepped out from the void. It was Evergard, one of the Emperor's royal guards. He was here to deliver a letter from Duke Agnes to the fourth prince. Kaiser knew then that Joshua had made his decision. He took the letter from Evergard. He casually asked if he wanted to read it too, but Evergard refused. After all, it would be an act of disrespect toward the royal family. Since Evergard didn't want to look, Kaiser didn't press him. He happily opened the letter. He was extremely curious about Joshua's choice. Evergard thought it was only natural. After all, the Royal Knights was a place every knight dreamed of joining. Kaiser knew this well. He confidently opened the letter and slowly read each line, but the smile on his lips gradually froze. Then, Kaiser burst into a fit of crazed laughter. Evergard had no idea what was happening. He no longer paid any attention to the guard. He simply tore the letter in his hands to shreds. The usual gentle expression on Prince Kaiser's face was gone. In its place was a terrifyingly dark look. At the same time, Chiffon began to channel the mana in his body. He worried Joshua's growth would become a wild card in the fight for the dukedom. The tension between them was at its peak. A tall figure stepped forward to intervene. It was Duke Agnes. Chiffon was flustered when he saw him appear. He didn't know how to explain. Lady Vanessa spoke up. I invited Lucia and the boy here. I heard you were taking them to the capital with you, so I thought I should hold a farewell dinner for them. Duke Agnes fell silent after hearing her explanation. He then glanced over at Joshua and his mother. Then he looked at the table laden with delicacies. Duke Agnes knew there was something wrong with the food, but he didn't expose her directly. He just ordered Chiffon to leave. Hearing this, Chiffon could only sheath his sword. Seeing that, Joshua also withdrew his weapon. Duke Agnes looked at him and said, Joshua, we leave early tomorrow. Get some rest tonight. Joshua said nothing more and led his mother out of the room. When Joshua and his mother were gone, Lady Vanessa finally questioned him. Why are you suddenly acting like this? Are you fond of him? Duke Agnes didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, do you hate me? Lady Vanessa didn't deny it. She admitted it directly. Duke Agnes didn't understand why she hated him so much, but then he realized. His sudden attention to Joshua must have sparked her resentment. Her emotions had finally boiled over. Their marriage was never based on love. It was a union of two families for mutual benefit. The marriage was political from the very start, but Lady Vanessa could do nothing about it. Royal blood flowed through her veins. So, Lady Vanessa couldn't complain. But if anything happened to Babel, she would never rest. To Lady Vanessa, he was incredibly important. So she warned Duke Agnes to remember the basic rules of a nobleman. She also told him to make the right choice. Duke Agnes just chuckled. Would someone who knows basic etiquette do such a thing? Lady Vanessa was startled. She pretended not to understand what Duke Agnes was implying. His expression darkened. Do you think I don't know? Lady Vanessa and the others were extremely tense. They never expected Duke Agnes to find out so soon. The pressure radiating from him filled the room. The temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Elsewhere, Joshua had returned to his room, but he was at a loss for what to do. Joshua's mother didn't understand politics or schemes, so he didn't know how to explain the situation to Lucia. So Joshua could only sigh. After all, he had always made his mother worry. Just then, Ken came to ask about the party. It turned out he had come looking for Joshua earlier, but since Joshua wasn't in his room, Ken asked the butler. That's how he learned Joshua had gone to the party. Joshua was a little surprised to hear the butler was involved, but then he realized it made sense. After all, there was no place in this domain beyond Lady Vanessa's reach. Ken continued to speak. I heard you're going to the capital tomorrow. I think that's a wise decision. The academy is a safe place for you to grow. Plus, if you're with the Duke, you'll have the chance to learn a lot from him. Joshua felt a bit curious. If Ken had only come to say these things, it didn't make much sense. As expected, Ken then revealed he had a favor to ask Joshua. He then knelt before him. He expressed his desire to become Joshua's subordinate. Joshua hesitated at the offer. Having talented people serving under him would be very useful. But he had been betrayed once before, so Joshua wanted to know if Ken's loyalty was genuine. He asked, Do you know the path I intend to walk? If you wish to fulfill the noble duties of a knight, then I'm afraid you've come to the wrong place. My path will be soaked in blood and death. Do you still wish to follow me? Ken immediately declared his loyalty. He would trust and obey his master's commands absolutely, even if the path ahead was paved with blood. After speaking, Ken drew his sword. He respectfully offered it to Joshua. He wanted his new master to complete the knight's ritual. Hearing this, Joshua let out a small laugh. He reached out and took the sword. The next morning, Duke Agnes's party began their journey. They were surrounded by well-dressed soldiers. They held their gleaming swords high to see their master off. In the middle of the procession, Duke Agnes asked Joshua if he was all right. Although the house belonged to a fallen noble, things would be difficult for a single knight, but Joshua didn't see it as a problem. His life had been much worse before. For Joshua, having Ken alone was more than enough. Duke Agnes didn't press the matter. He continued to lead the procession forward. Just then, Am raised his sword, wanting to complete the ritual. But at that moment, Cherry suddenly ran up. The whole group was forced to stop. She was only there to see Duke Agnes off. Hearing this, he was a bit curious. When Bolson and Eli left, he didn't see her anywhere. Yet today she appeared. It seemed Cherry had learned some manners. Honestly, Duke Agnes quite liked Cherry's ladylike personality. After all, He didn't have any daughters of his own. Hearing that, Cherry put her hands on her hips and laughed, leaving him unsure how to react. Duke Agnes smiled with satisfaction. He invited her to come with him to the capital. However, Cherry had to refuse. She had promised to visit Khan's family. Hearing this, he broke into a sweat and wanted to refuse. But since Cherry had promised Anna, he couldn't do anything. Just then, she lifted her skirt slightly and approached Joshua. This made him very confused. He didn't know what this bold girl was planning. It turned out Cherry wanted to give Joshua something. It was the crest of the Fontaine family. Then, Cherry invited Joshua to visit her family when he arrived in Akati. Khan watched this scene, feeling like the sky was falling. Even he never imagined his lady would give that crest to someone else. Joshua had no idea what the leather crest was for. Cherry just said it was an invitation for him to visit the Fontaine family. The soldiers who witnessed this were all very curious. They couldn't understand why she gave the crest to Joshua. Some even secretly guessed that Cherry had fallen for him. Another soldier immediately refuted this. In the domain before, a rumor was spreading that Cherry liked Babel. But in the end, a rumor is just a rumor. The two of them were not yet engaged. Therefore, exchanging tokens between them was a perfectly normal thing. Joshua found this situation troublesome. If he rejected Cherry in front of her trusted knights, the rumors would spread even further. Then all eyes would be on him. That would disrupt Joshua's plans. He needed at least 5 years to return to his peak. Hiding his identity was crucial, but when he saw her teary eyes, Joshua had no choice. He accepted the watch engraved with the family crest. Then, he slowly walked forward. Duke Agnes saw this and casually said he would also visit Cherry's family. Then he bid her farewell and continued on his way. M saw this and stood up straight. He raised his sword to see the Duke off. Duke Agnes glanced at Joshua walking ahead and smiled. He knew very well his son didn't yet understand the meaning of a noble girl giving her family crest to someone. At the same time, in the Kataka Grand Hall of the Avalon Kingdom's royal palace, a servant of the king came to report that the Duke had departed. He would arrive in the capital within 3 days. However, there was another matter to report. Prince Kaiser's invitation to join the royal knights had been rejected by Joshua. The king was extremely surprised. He never expected Joshua to refuse to join the most powerful organization in the kingdom. Besides, he wasn't the firstborn son of the family. Joshua was only the second son. Joining the royal knights was an excellent opportunity to strengthen his position. Yet Joshua had refused, which the king couldn't understand. So, he asked his subordinate, "That boy doesn't think he can rule the entire Agnes family or something like that, does he?" However, the king's subordinate didn't think so. Based on the content of the letter Joshua sent to Prince Kaiser, he had said, "I don't need a recommendation from a prince. I will follow the laws of the kingdom and carry out the kingdom's will." Upon hearing those words, the king burst out laughing. It was as if Joshua was expressing his desire to be loyal to him. Not only that, it was also a bold declaration. He would enter the royal knights on his own merit. Because of this, the king was even more eager to see Joshua's performance in the capital. 4 days later, as the sunset fell on the Agnes family's residence in the capital city of Akati, Joshua's group finally arrived after a long journey. From now on, he could live here. Lucia was extremely anxious, wondering if she would be allowed to stay. Seeing this, Joshua reassured his mother. After all, she had never lived in such a luxurious mansion. Ken couldn't help but feel emotional. After so many years, this place hadn't changed at all. It turned out Ken had spent his entire childhood in Akati. He had also visited this place with Duke Agnes. Joshua was a little surprised. He hadn't expected Ken to be that close to Duke Agnes. Although Joshua admitted Ken was capable, it seemed things weren't that simple. In his previous life, Joshua had never heard the name Ken. That proved he had failed to overcome his limits. Or perhaps Ken had disappeared along with the fall of the Agnes family. However, Joshua wasn't too concerned. That was a matter of his past life. In this life, he would lead Ken to the pinnacle of glory. At that moment, he scratched his head in embarrassment and said, "It was just once. He brought me here to see how capable I was. As you can see, this place where the Duke rests has many guards. So, this is a good place for us to hone our skills." This suited Joshua's intentions perfectly. Here, he could train in peace without worrying about others. On the other hand, since there weren't many people around the mansion, security was also lax. After all, except for Ken, who was a knight, the rest were just servants Lucia brought with her. So if anything happened, it would be difficult for Ken to protect Joshua's mother. At this point, the mother and son had already entered the mansion. Joshua couldn't help but marvel at how spacious it was. Then he suddenly wanted to go out, which made Ken a little worried. This was his master's first time in the capital, so Ken was afraid Joshua might get lost. But his master paid it no mind. He only told him to keep an eye on his mother. So, Ken could only accept the order. Night fell over the capital city of Akati. In a small alley, Joshua arrived at a tavern. He marveled that the place hadn't changed in decades. Joshua was also curious to see how the people inside would react to him. Just as he was about to push the door open, a figure blocked his way. The person thought Joshua was lost and wanted to take him back. Seeing this, he simply said, I've come to find a red coin buried deep beneath the Jiao River. The other person was stunned to hear this, but without asking any more questions, he immediately led Joshua. Joshua knew he had found the right place. He needed an informant to recount his past. That person had to be able to deceive everyone and secretly gather valuable information. The man before him perfectly met Joshua's requirements. Most people wouldn't pay attention to someone with such an ordinary face. A moment later, the man led Joshua into the tavern through the back door. Inside, there was only one person casually drinking beer. The man in black approached and gave instructions. "Rianta, I'm leaving the bar to you." The man drinking said nothing, just slowly returned to the bar. But as he passed Joshua, he didn't forget to glance at him. That was only natural. Anyone would be curious to see a child in a place like this. However, they strictly followed the informant's code and didn't ask any questions. This was a mandatory rule to keep their work as discreet as possible. The man in black pointed to a door. There was a slot in it, big enough to see inside. After he announced himself, the door immediately opened. The person who opened it saw the two of them and didn't ask anything, just closed the door again. Then he continued to watch outside vigilantly. The man in black fumbled on the floor. There was a section with a different color from the surroundings. It turned out to be a trapdoor leading underground. Joshua was impressed. He didn't expect them to be so secretive. This was essential for those who operate in the shadows. Secrets like these were their only lifeline. Because of this, Joshua felt very secure. He no longer worried about information leaks, no matter how critical the news was. The two of them entered the passage. It was pitch black inside, with only a few dim lamps hanging along the walls. They walked down in silence, without exchanging another word. A moment later, they came across a person reading a book. As soon as that person saw them approaching, he bowed with great respect. The man in black simply said, "A client." The other person understood and quietly opened a door. Joshua was amazed by all of this. He hadn't realized the man in black's status was so high. Usually, secret operations were run from a different location. But even in this secret corridor, the others treated him with great courtesy. It proved the man in black's position in this organization was not low. Inside that room were many other rooms, which surprised Joshua. This time, he was taken to the third room, the place for information exchange. After entering, the man in black invited Joshua to sit. It was then that he noticed a small slot in the wall. It was probably used to pass information. The man in black directly asked Joshua what information he needed. He replied, "You sell information too, don't you? A branch manager has to be present when I only ask for level 3 information? That's ridiculous. Are you short-staffed these days?" The manager was shocked. He never expected Joshua to know so much about his organization. But at the same time, he was curious how such a young boy knew he was the branch manager. The fundamental principle of an information brokering organization is secrecy. To achieve this, members must hide the chain of command. Even members of the same branch don't know each other's true identities. That is the core of an intelligence organization. The main characteristic of such organizations is that the headquarters directly manages and maintains the other branches. Ordinary members have no way of knowing the identity or appearance of their branch manager. That's why from the moment he stepped in, Joshua noticed a clear difference in how people treated the manager. After putting the pieces together, Joshua had deduced the man in black's true identity. After considering everything, he came to his own conclusion. The manager sighed and spoke. "I always thought the rumors were exaggerated. But seeing it with my own eyes, it seems the rumors were a gross understatement. How can I help you?" Second son of the Agnes family, young Duke Joshua. Joshua was a bit surprised that the manager knew so much about him, but the other party didn't seem to think it was a big deal. After all, he was the head of an intelligence branch. Almost all the news on the continent passed through his hands. Moreover, Joshua's name was the most talked about on the entire continent. It was no surprise the manager knew of him. Hearing these words, Joshua was extremely shocked. He never thought his identity would be exposed so quickly. After all, this matter had been carefully concealed by Duke Agnes. This showed that the manager's information-gathering skills were truly reliable, but at the same time, it meant that information about Joshua could be traded at any moment. Seeing the wary look on his face, the manager spoke up. "From your expression, I know what you're thinking, but only I and a few of my subordinates know who you really are, so don't worry. Forgive me for not introducing myself. I am Zezo, the manager of the Akadi branch of Nguyen Monday. May I know the reason for your visit to our headquarters?" Joshua was a bit puzzled. Zezo bringing him to a level 3 room meant that only level 3 information was currently suitable. Hearing this, he explained that while that was usually the case, Zezo would make an exception. He would provide Joshua with first-class information, the highest level within his authority. Hearing that, Joshua was curious. After all, he and Zezo had just met for the first time. There was no reason for him to offer such valuable information. Zezo just smiled. His goal was simple. He wanted to build a relationship with Joshua. Joshua understood what this man was planning. He wanted to invest in the future. But nothing in this world is ever free. So, Zezo would offer first-class information and demand something of equal value in return. Joshua spoke with a hint of challenge. You use the alias Zizo. I thought you could provide me with special grade information, but it seems I was wrong. Hearing that, Zizo was extremely surprised. He didn't expect Joshua to know about that as well, but due to Nguyenmon's rules, Zizo couldn't ask further. He could only probe to see what kind of information Joshua needed. It turned out he was looking for an item, the heirloom of the Viscount Ovid family. The item had vanished decades ago. Gezo pondered for a moment. Most of the Ovid family's artifacts had been traded on the black market, so if Nguyenmon wanted to follow the clues, it would take at least a week to gather enough information. Joshua also fell silent. That would take a lot of time before anyone got news of him, but there were no guarantees here. This was a very sensitive issue. If someone found out he was looking into their past, it would be extremely troublesome. So Joshua wanted to use this opportunity to set a trap for them. If things went well, he could kill two birds with one stone. So Joshua said, "He who finds the red coin buried somewhere in history will be blessed by the moon. The one who carries that symbol will receive the blessing of Ngayat Monday." Hearing this, Dezo was stunned. That was just a legend that only a few people in the organization knew about. As soon as he heard those words, Joshua knew the fish had taken the bait, so he made a condition. If Nguyenmon accepted, within 3 years, Joshua would find that symbol for them. A storm was brewing in Zezo's heart. That symbol was no longer as necessary as it once was. After all, Nguyenmon's victory had ended a year ago, but it was still a symbolic treasure that the organization had been searching for decades. Moreover, that person had always desperately wanted to find it again. So Gezo asked Joshua to state his conditions before making a decision. His conditions were actually very simple. First, they couldn't reveal Joshua's information to anyone. Second, they had to tell him everything about Sebald Gray. Hearing this, Zizo was stunned. That was the name of the god of war, but Joshua didn't seem to think it was a big deal. He just asked if Zizo dared to invest. 2 months had passed since Joshua spoke with Zezo of Ngayat Monday. During that time, he had been constantly training to increase his strength. He also managed to move Lucia to another domain owned by Duke Arknotz. Compared to the previous remote place, it would be much easier to protect her from intruders there. Of course, Lucia didn't want to leave Joshua, but after some persuasion, she had no choice but to accept. So Lucia was finally moved to the new domain. In the moment of parting, they didn't hug and cry. They just smiled at each other. Then, a week before the entrance ceremony at the academy, in the royal palace's dining hall, Joshua was slowly enjoying a steak with Ken. However, from his expression, it was clear Joshua had no interest in the food. Ken was a bit curious about what was worrying him. Joshua had seemed very tense lately. It turned out he was concerned about the information he had entrusted to Nguyenmon to investigate. They had said it would only take a week. But now, 2 months had passed without a single letter. Now Joshua had to enter the academy early. This would greatly affect his plans. Just then, a figure approached. He casually sat down at Joshua's table. It was Zezo, the branch manager of Ngayat Monday, the man Joshua had been waiting for 2 months. Zezo saw someone else at the table and was about to send him away. After all, this information was crucial to the organization. But when he saw Ken's murderous glare, Zezo could only wave his hand and accept it. Joshua then spoke up to explain. "It's all right, Ken. I know this person." Then, Joshua asked about the information he had requested. And of course, Zizo had found it. If he hadn't, showing up here would only be an embarrassment. It turned out the Ovid family heirloom had passed through too many hands. It took Zezo a long time to track it down, and its current location was in the small bottle now in Joshua's hand. Hearing that, he didn't ask further. He just inquired about the service fee. Zezo replied that it was free of charge. "Nothing compares to being commissioned by you. It's an heirloom, but in our eyes, it's just an ordinary item. It would be a different story if it had some special power." Hearing that, Joshua immediately cut Zezo off. He knew this guy was trying to fish for more information. Zizo didn't press further. He just said, "Next time, I'll handle all your requests. This is also a service. Our organization requires payment for all transactions." Joshua fell silent. He knew this guy would take a mile if given an inch. Seeing his business was done, Zezo left and returned to his post. Only then did Joshua take out the piece of paper with the location of the Ovid family heirloom. The family of Viscount Ovid, just a few decades ago, was a renowned magical family, close to the Zeka family in the Avalon Kingdom. Many years ago, the members of the Ovid family were highly respected mages of the kingdom. The head of the Ovid family had easily defeated master-level knights and was the first to deploy a magic circle on the continent. After that event, it didn't attract much attention in Avalon, where most people were knights. But in the magic kingdom of Taegia, it made a huge impression. The king of that nation personally invited the head of Ovid to his country. Yet a few decades ago, the glorious Ovid family suddenly fell into decline at the hands of the Taegia royal family. According to statistical records, the Avalon royal family might have purged its own nobles to clean up the aristocracy and consolidate royal power. At that moment, Joshua's attention was drawn to the name Bajan Axel. Ken understood immediately. He was talking about the great shadow blacksmith, Baron John Axel Rovalum. He was a very famous figure in the underworld. Rovalum's influence was so great that every item that appeared on the black market had passed through his hands, and more importantly, Rovalum was Viscount Bach's older brother. When he heard that name, an image of a fat man with a despicable appearance immediately flashed in Joshua's mind. Just as he was lost in thought, a figure approached. It was Viscount Zeka and his daughter. In ancient times, the higher a noble's status, the closer their domain was to the royal palace, so the location of their domain was a sign of their noble status. But this remote domain was vast and luxurious. Despite being located in a desolate area, the fact that one person could own such a large domain in Akkadi, the capital of the kingdom, was a difficult feat. It was enough to prove not only his status but also his immense wealth. And that person was none other than one of the three most influential figures in the underworld, Rovalum. However, at this moment, he was acting extremely sycophantic. The person standing before him was the young Duke, Vaison Senvillat. He had come to press him about their previous deal. In Rovalum's mansion, Vaison looked at him coldly and said, "The deadline for our agreement has passed." Hearing this, Rovalum became extremely tense. Vaison wanted him to capture an elf, which was an extremely rare race. Therefore, catching an elf in such a short time was extremely difficult. So Rovalum asked for more time, but Vaison didn't care. He hadn't come here to listen to excuses. Rovalum grew even more tense and wanted to explain. But just then, Vaison stood up to leave. He gave Rovalum one more week to find an elf. Hearing that, he was overjoyed and immediately guaranteed he would find one within that time. Vaison spoke in a cold tone. "You'd better. However, if you still can't catch the elf, you will no longer be free to enjoy yourself in this capital." With that, Vaison walked straight out the door, leaving Rovalum behind with his back soaked in sweat. As his figure disappeared, Rovalum's fawning expression vanished. It was replaced by a heavy, grim look. Every time he met this man, Rovalum felt like a few years were shaved off his life. At that moment, the butler brought a glass of water with a worried expression. No matter how powerful Rovalum was, finding an elf was nearly impossible within a week. Rovalum had no choice but to try his best to find an elf for him. Otherwise, everything he had built over the years would collapse. Vaison was the only son of Duke Ville, a military figure and a confidant of the Avalon Kingdom's emperor. So, if Vaison issued a warning like that, it would surely come true. A little later, on the streets of Akkadi, a carriage was slowly rolling along. It was Vaison's carriage. Inside, his subordinate was curious if Rovalum could find an elf within a week. Vaison frankly admitted that it would be difficult. His subordinate was confused. He didn't know what his master was planning. Vaison smiled. He actually had another reason for giving Rovalum an extra week. Vaison wanted to use this week to intimidate him, to make him obey his orders. It was the classic carrot and stick tactic. To put it simply, to make others do your bidding, you must offer them benefits. But you must also have a stick ready to strike at any moment. And threats were just such a stick. It was also a crucial tool for a king to manipulate the masses. Vaison's subordinate smiled in understanding. He knew that if Rovalum couldn't find an elf within a week, Vaison would surely crush everything he had painstakingly built. That would be the moment he reached the peak of his fear. At that point, Vaison just needed to show a little mercy, and Rovalum would obey him like a puppet. Hearing that, the subordinate smiled obsequiously and said, as expected of young Duke Vaison, "You have seen through Baron Rovalum completely." Vaison didn't pay it much mind, but he still felt a little disappointed. He had really hoped to catch an elf today for his own amusement. Nevertheless, since he was already out, he didn't want to return empty-handed. So Vaison decided to find something to eat before going back. The subordinate immediately told the driver to find a good restaurant nearby. The carriage quickly changed direction. Soon, the carriage stopped in front of a tavern that was still lit up despite the late hour. It was the Royal Eatery. Inside, Joshua was greeting Zeka. He looked at the Viscount's rather pale face and smiled faintly. Baron Zeka was a common noble, but of course, Joshua had no intention of looking down on him. The reason was that Zeka had been born with a weak constitution and a pale complexion. A single glance was enough to see that. Zeka was not a man of strong will. He couldn't bring himself to say things others didn't want to hear, even if it meant he would suffer for it. He always treated everyone with respect and warmth, like a commoner. So even though he held a high position, it was because of this behavior that Zeka was often ridiculed by other nobles. However, he never showed any weakness. Not only that, Zeka was also a very caring husband and father, so although he wasn't very prominent among the nobility, Zeka was greatly respected by the common people. Just then, Iselin also stepped forward to greet the main character. Seeing her, he was a bit confused. Iselin, Zeka's daughter, was known to be very withdrawn, yet today, she was talking so much. Then, Iselin suddenly turned towards Joshua as if she wanted to say something. Just then, Vaison and his guard entered the restaurant, and as he walked past Iselin, a look of extreme interest appeared on Vaison's face. In his eyes, Iselin was like a radiant flower in this place. Her small feet were encased in jet black shoes, a dark dress hugged her slender waist. Not only that, Her fair neck was adorned with a pretty bow. She looked like a shy flower blooming in the deceitful city of Akkadi, so Vaison immediately approached her to start a conversation. But Iselin responded with silence. This angered Vaison's guard. He is the son of the Velat Matuk family. Vaison sen Velat. Pay your respects at once. Ken found this strange. Vaison was the son of the most powerful of the 12 families of the Avalon Kingdom. Why would he be in a place like this? Zeka immediately stepped forward to defend his daughter. He knew all too well what kind of person this kid was. Then Zeka bowed and introduced himself. Vaison didn't know who he was, but after his guard explained, he realized it was Zeka. So Vaison said, I don't want your apology, Zeka. I don't know how you raise your daughter, but she lacks manners. I cannot accept this insult. I must receive an apology from her. Ken felt Vaison was being unreasonable. Iselin didn't even know who he was. And this was a public place. Acting like this was a direct slap to Zeka's noble face. Seeing the Viscount constantly yielding, Vaison pushed his advantage. He insisted that Iselin apologize. She was flustered by his words, not knowing what to do. But Vaison didn't care. He demanded Iselin bow to him immediately. Just then, Joshua cut in. Stop causing a scene. Duke Velat must have his hands full, with a foolish son like you. Vaison was furious upon hearing this. No one had ever dared to speak to him with such a tone before. Vaison's guard had already drawn his sword. He looked menacing, as if warning Joshua not to be disrespectful. But Joshua didn't seem to care and spoke coldly. You dare draw your sword? If you've been trained as a swordsman, you should understand the weight behind your actions. Vaison's guard was enraged. He couldn't believe Joshua's arrogance. He didn't even pay attention, only warning the guard to take responsibility for his actions. The guard suddenly became extremely tense. He could feel waves of killing intent like a great sea surging towards him. Not only that, his sword arm was trembling uncontrollably. Joshua's eyes were filled with murderous intent. He was stunned. He couldn't believe those were the eyes of a child. Vaison had no idea what his guard was going through. He kept urging him to teach Joshua a lesson, but that was like forcing him into a corner. Right now, even moving a finger was incredibly difficult. Joshua spoke coldly. You ask who I am Avenged Digit. Vaison repeated the name, trying to remember where he had heard it before, but Joshua told him not to bother thinking, because he had decided to burn that name into Vaison's mind right now. At the same time, at the Locke mansion, Viscount Bach was sitting with a dazed expression, as if he were no longer aware of anything. He could only sit quietly in his chair, completely unaware that his daughter was busy talking with a person in a black cloak. The cloaked figure greeted Anna. His purpose for coming was to negotiate with the female spirit user. Anna heard this and spoke. It's been a while, Juan. You're earlier than I expected. Juan was a bit curious. He didn't know what was so urgent that Anna had to summon him here. Hearing that, she closed her eyes and thought. A monster had recently appeared in Vaison's domain. He had the potential to become a variable in Anna's plan, so she had summoned Juan to this place to discuss it. Upon hearing this, he immediately thought of Babel. After all, he was known as the #1 genius of the Avalon Kingdom. Anna knew right away that he didn't understand. The monster she was talking about was another one of Vaison's sons. That person's abilities surpassed even Babel's. Juan was shocked. He never expected such a monster to appear in Vaison's domain. Because of this, Juan blamed Anna for not informing him through the communication orb. She calmly told him not to worry. After all, Vaison had intended to spread this rumor himself. His goal was to enhance his family's reputation. So sooner or later, Juan would hear about it. Especially in times of peace like this, such rumors had no reason not to gather and form a special kind of power. Juan agreed with that perspective. Even though the world was at peace, beneath every empire, there were undercurrents waiting to swallow everything. After continuously building powerful armies, those nations would gradually sink into a warlike atmosphere. For the common people, this was actually a good thing. A country with a strong army meant its people would be better protected. However, this accumulation was a double-edged sword. A nation's resources are finite, and if the military consumed most of the domestic resources, they would be forced to find ways to acquire more. And the easiest way to get those resources was to take them from other nations. To do that, nations had to recruit talented individuals for war. Otherwise, no nation could win this war for resources. So every nation had to rely on such information sources. From there, this very information inadvertently became a barrier preventing war from breaking out. Juan understood then. Anna wanted to recruit that monster. However, that person was Vaison's second son, so this matter needed to be carefully calculated. A single mistake, and their entire plan would turn to dust. Anna reassured Juan not to worry. She already had another plan. Anna intended to enroll in the academy in the capital, Avalon. So, if Juan just trusted her, Anna could bring Joshua to their side. At the same time in Arkady, Joshua stood opposite Vaison. He looked thoughtful. Vaison had never heard the name Getazit before. Joshua didn't understand why this guy valued lineage so much. Vaison laughed cruelly. He wanted this backwater family to disappear from his sight. Vaison wanted Joshua to pay for his insolence. Then he forced him to kneel and beg. If he did, Joshua would escape death, losing only an arm. He laughed contemptuously, treating it as a joke. Vaison couldn't take it anymore. He ordered his subordinate, Moker, to force Joshua to his knees. Upon receiving the order, he immediately channeled mana into his sword. Moker had indeed been surprised by the main character's overwhelming killing intent, but in front of him was just a 10-year-old boy. So Moker dared to charge forward. He felt a little regret. Anyone who dared to disrespect the Vilas family was destined to die. So Moker intended to finish Joshua neatly with a single slash. Just as the sword was about to cut him in half, Joshua unexpectedly blocked it with his arm. Not only that, his other hand was clenched into a fist. Moker and Vaison were terrified by this sight, but before he could react, Moker was hit by a powerful punch to the stomach from Joshua. His body bent like a shrimp. Joshua's punch was so strong that Moker's entire body trembled. Then he collapsed to his knees in front of him. Vaison was stunned by the sight. He couldn't believe Moker was taken down with a single punch by a 10-year-old boy who still smelled of milk. Just then, Joshua decided to deal with Vaison as well. He had no intention of forgiving this guy. Vaison continued to demand to know the main character's family name, but all he got back was the name Avengedizit, which made Vaison scream in frustration. Don't lie. I've never heard of the Gedizit family. Do you know how severe the crime of impersonating a noble is? I am the heir of the Vilat family, one of the 12 great families supporting the empire. While Vaison was still bragging about his lineage, he was suddenly hit by a punch from the main character. 2 of Vaison's teeth were knocked out. Not only that, his punch was so strong that his mouth filled with blood. His body was sent flying several meters. Then Vaison lay unconscious on the ground. He couldn't move anymore, but Joshua wasn't going to let him off. He slowly approached Vaison, grabbed him by the collar, and prepared to land another blow. He had been annoyed by this guy's arrogant and condescending attitude for a long time. Just then, Moker struggled to crawl over and spoke. "Young master, please stop. We have offended you. Please grant us your mercy just this once." Moker's voice was filled with fear. Normally, someone who could cover their entire fist with mana-like, that was at least an A-rank knight. But if it was a child, he must be from a special, unknown family on the continent. Therefore, Moker could only beg. Otherwise, Vaison would be in danger. Joshua replied, "I warned you. If a knight draws his sword, he must be responsible for that act. I don't have enough weight to grant mercy to an enemy." Moker froze when he saw Joshua's face filled with killing intent. He knew he was determined to see this through to the end. So, to protect his master, Moker slammed his head hard on the ground, begging. He slammed his head so hard that his forehead bled. Not stopping there, Moker also offered his own arm in exchange for Vaison's safety. Joshua fell silent at his pleas. He didn't expect Moker to do all this to protect his master. He reminded Joshua of his past self, a fool who gave away everything beneficial to himself. But even so, Joshua had no intention of forgiving that arrogant brat. He reached for the necklace on Vaison's neck, then yanked it so hard it shattered into pieces. Witnessing that, Moker was stunned, unable to believe his eyes. Joshua then spoke. "I'll be staying in the capital. If he wants his family ring back, tell him to come find me. Otherwise, I'll sell it to the black market." With that, he coldly turned and walked towards the main door, leaving Moker sitting stunned next to his master. Ken, who had seen the whole thing, couldn't help but marvel at how unpredictable Joshua's temperament was. But perhaps that was his most captivating quality. Zeka spoke up. "No matter how many times I see him, it's always so shocking." Just then, Iselin seemed to want to say something, which made him curious, but she just shook her head and didn't say it. Then, Iselin happily left. She left her father still full of questions. Zeka glanced over at Vaison's 2 servants. Seeing them beaten to such a state, he just gave a wry smile and said, "Sir Moker, I'll direct you to the nearest hospital." The next morning, in a church somewhere in the capital city of Akkadi, 2 priests were devoutly praying before a statue of the goddess of mercy. Suddenly, the church doors were violently thrown open, and the person who appeared was none other than Vaison. His face was swollen, and he had lost all of his handsome features from the previous day. Vaison was furious and immediately wanted Moker to go settle the score with Joshua, but Moker was in a difficult position. He knew very well that with his strength, he was no match for Joshua. Hearing this, Vaison became enraged and kicked his guard. He couldn't believe how useless he was, unable to even defeat a 10-year-old boy. He should just go back to his hometown and go fishing. Moker had no choice but to bow his head and obey. After a while, Vaison calmed down a bit. He ordered him to investigate the Gediz's family. He wanted to drag out everyone with that family name and slaughter them in front of Joshua. Hearing this, Moker immediately advised his young master against it. They had no just cause for such an action. Vaison flew into a rage. He couldn't believe the day would come when the heir of the Mavilat family needed evidence to get things done. Moker could only look troubled. It was hard to believe that a knight like him was beaten up by a child. Even if someone believed it, The result would only be a steep decline in the Velas family's reputation. This would severely affect their political standing in the Avalon Kingdom. But Vezon didn't care. All he wanted was to vent his anger. Mukher immediately objected to that idea because this was a very important matter. After all, the Vlad family was not afraid of the Zeka family. Mukher then informed his young master of some bad news. Joshua had taken Vezon's family ring. He was stunned and couldn't believe his ears. Vezon then hurriedly checked his pockets. He discovered that his family ring was indeed missing. Not only that, Joshua also said that if Vezon wanted it back, he had to come and apologize in person. This was a serious problem. That's why Maka didn't want his young master to make more enemies. This time, it was clear that Vezon was caught in Joshua's trap. Upon hearing this, he became furious. Vezon couldn't believe Mukher wanted him to apologize to some nameless nobody. Mukher knew his master would never bow his head, so he advised Vezon to find someone else to apologize on his behalf. Vezon fell into deep thought. At the same time, at the royal eatery, Joshua was quietly admiring Vezon's family ring in his hand, lost in thought. Just then, Ken curiously asked, "Are you sure young Master Vezon will come looking for you?" Joshua just smiled. He knew very well that the arrogant Vezon wouldn't come here himself. However, since his family ring was in Joshua's possession, he guessed Vezon would send someone else instead. Ken was even more curious about who would be chosen as the replacement. Joshua just smiled and said, "There's a rumor in Akkadi. The one who runs the black market is Baron Rovalem. However, the one behind the scenes setting the rules is the young master of the Fillet family." Ken was shocked. He had only thought his young master had simply made an enemy of the Velas family. But it seemed this was just one link in a plan Joshua had laid out from the start. Therefore, Ken became even more determined to follow his young master. Just then, a figure approached, catching both of their attention. It was Iselin. She came to thank the main character, but he didn't think it was a big deal. Joshua didn't do it to help Iselin. It was all part of his plan from the beginning. Hearing this, Iselin was a bit flustered. Not only she, but the entire Zeka family had received help from the main character, so Iselin still wanted to express her gratitude to him, but she didn't expect Joshua to bluntly refuse her good intentions. Seeing Iselin's shy demeanor, Joshua was a bit surprised. He knew very well that the girl before him would one day become a famous witch throughout the continent. Yet now, Iselin looked so timid, completely opposite to her bloodthirsty appearance in his previous life. Back then, Iselin was like a snow flower, exuding a cold beauty in the harsh frost. That's why she was called the Ice Witch. Iselin had regained her composure and spoke, "If you get into trouble because of this incident, we will support you. If we testify as witnesses who are at the scene, even the royal family." But before Iselin could finish, Joshua interrupted her good intentions. He didn't think this incident was serious at all, but if Iselin really wanted to help, perhaps Joshua would need her in the future. Hearing this, a radiant smile bloomed on Iselin's face, like spring. Then she bowed to the main character. Just then, he seemed to sense something and turned to look at the window. Then Joshua gave a very enigmatic smile. He had spotted a figure that had just disappeared. At the same time, on the rooftops of Akkadi, a figure was killed. A figure was dashing at an incredible speed. It was Zizo. Even he didn't expect to be discovered so easily by Joshua. Zizo had always been extremely confident in his ability to hide, yet Joshua had noticed him so easily. So Zizo immediately decided to change his plan as soon as possible. Initially, he just thought Joshua wanted to use him through information about the Moon Gate, but it seemed things were much more complicated than he had imagined. A short while later, at the royal eatery, a bald figure appeared at the entrance. That person was Rovalem. He saw Zika and his daughter leaving from a dark corner, so Rovalem knew he had come to the right place. Joshua also recognized the old man he had met before had arrived. Rovalem then introduced himself to him. Not only that, but this big shot from the black market also bowed to the main character. Ken was stunned by this sight. He couldn't understand why someone as powerful as Rovalem would be so polite to a young master from a rural family. It turned out he was here to retrieve the ring Joshua was holding. Hearing this, he just smiled and said, "I believe I told him to come here himself if he wants it back. Tell him that. If he doesn't come, I'll melt it down." Rovalem cursed the main character in his heart, but on the surface, he tried to salvage the situation. Joshua sighed at those words. "He's weaker than I thought, isn't he? Bring the Night Moker here. We'll talk again when you bring him. Besides, you reap what you sow, don't you? Since I've accepted your request, you must also accept mine. Those rings on your hands look quite expensive." Rovalem was startled and looked down at the rings on his fingers. But before he could react, Joshua calmly demanded he hand them all over. A little later, in the outskirts of Akkadi, Ken couldn't help but marvel. This time, Joshua played a really dirty trick, robbing someone without even blinking. But Joshua didn't see it that way. In his eyes, it was just a fair exchange. A perfectly reasonable balance to give Rovalem a chance. Ken was a little curious. He didn't understand why his young master took his rings. Joshua remained silent. The ring in his hand was the Ovid family heirloom, the Elf's Tear. Elves were a race with stunning beauty, That was both their strength and their fatal weakness when humans set their eyes on them. Many elves lost their homes because of that beauty. Some even lost their lives. And from then on, humans became the enemy of this race. Finally, to protect their families and themselves, all the elves gathered in the forest at the southern end of the continent, a place called the Elf Forest. Not only that, to prevent humans from finding their location, the High Elves joined forces to create an invisible shield that covered the entire forest. However, no matter how powerful the High Elves' magic was, maintaining a shield that protected the entire forest was extremely difficult. As a result, they all died one by one. But one High Elf survived. From then on, all the remaining elves gathered around this last elf. Humans considered him the king of the elves and called him Olympus. After many centuries, the only person who knew the location of the elf forest was the best friend of the fifth-generation Olympus, who had disappeared with the fall of his family decades ago. That was the head of the Ovishazat family, who was considered missing in the eyes of others. But Joshua knew very well that Sizath had been murdered to extract information about the elf forest. Yet, the location of that place was never revealed. That proved Sizath had taken the secret of the forest to his grave. By the time the fifth-generation Olympus found out, it was too late. She had personally set foot on the continent to confirm the truth. Then she found Sezat's last student, who was then a maid in another noble family. When she had to hold hands and apologize to this maid, her tears fell and soaked into the family ring, and it became known as the Elf's Tear. But ironically, Sezat's last student died of illness. In the end, the lost ring was born from a tragic fate. It's rumored to hold a special power. Seeing his master lost in thought, Ket called out to him. He pulled the young man back to reality. They had arrived at the mansion. Joshua gazed at the lavish mansion before him. His face was grim. Then, he remembered something. This is for my sake, and for yours. I need a subordinate I can trust completely. I have no use for those who fall before me. So, leave this place. Hearing this, Ket understood. His master wanted him to become Lucia's knight, but he couldn't agree to that. After all, Joshua was a nobleman's son. It was unacceptable for him to be without a knight. If Joshua did this, he'd be despised. He would face contempt, and with Joshua's pride, he would never let that happen. That's why Joshua needed a knight. Besides, Veram was at the academy. Ket knew he would come for Joshua again. Joshua replied, "Don't worry. I just want to live a quiet life. You may not believe me, but I'm an expert at being alone. I have another favor to ask. Teach me the Duke's swordsmanship. This isn't an order. It's a plea. One I truly hope you'll accept." Ket was stunned by his words. He never expected his master to bow, especially not just to make a request. So Ket told Joshua to raise his head. He refused to let his master bow to anyone. Ket agreed to Joshua's plea, but he had one condition. Joshua smiled. He wanted to hear it. Ket said, "Become so great that I will never have to bow to anyone but you." Joshua swore on his honor he would never let Ket bow to anyone else. Hearing that, Ket laughed. "Then from now on, I am in your care, master." In the center of the Ivanvat continent stands a tower so tall it pierces the sky. It's surrounded by 3 great nations. It's a holy land, the pride of all mages. This is the Magic Tower. Right now, 4 powerful mages are in a meeting, but this meeting was missing some key members. The fire, thunder, and space mages were absent. The Tower Master couldn't understand why. He was the first 7th Circle mage. He was the leader of the 7 great mages. Marquette, the Earth Mage, took a sip of tea. As you know, fire and space never stay put. As for thunder, I believe he left on urgent business. The Tower Master had no choice. He began the 27th regular meeting without them. They couldn't delay it any longer. The main topic was the Resurrection Stone. Theta, the Storm Mage, spoke up, getting straight to the point. "Looks like you're getting old." Marquette was not pleased. He warned Theta to watch his tone. The Tower Master was just surprised. He never expected Theta to appear. The man rarely showed his face. Theta just smiled. This time, the matter was serious. Someone has taken the Mama Stone. Not only that, Proton has vanished as well. Theta was completely shocked. He couldn't believe Proton was gone too. Even the Tower Master was hearing this for the first time. The only woman in the meeting spoke. Only those inside the Magic Tower know their locations. The thief might not know what they stole, but if they do, this is a very serious problem. She was Elisa, the Ice Mage. The Tower Master agreed with her. He might know who took Mama, but the location of Proton was a complete mystery. Theta smiled. "Now I see why Thunder left in such a hurry. Actually, there is one clue. But Marquette isn't sure if it's related to Proton. He'd heard a strange rumor from the area. The Peerless Knight had supposedly appeared nearby. Everyone in the room was stunned. Elisa immediately asked, "He's appeared?" But Marquette didn't think so. This time, it wasn't the Peerless Knight. It was just a 9-year-old boy. The room fell into confusion. Then, the Tower Master spoke. "Silence. Something isn't right here. You mean Proton was found in the Avalon Empire, and Thunder went after it? Marquette is just observing the one who took Mama. If the rumors are true, our hands are tied." Elisa disagreed. "It could be his successor. When she thought of the peerless knight, only one man came to mind. The tower master tried to calm her, but Elisa insisted this couldn't be ignored. Marquette spoke up. Based on the situation, they're likely unrelated. I heard this rumored Joshua is the son of Duke Agnes. Theta's temper flared. He was annoyed by Marquette's vague answers. The tower master slammed his hand on the table. He demanded silence. Nothing was certain yet. He ordered them not to act rashly. They were to continue observing. Then, he declared the meeting adjourned. The room fell silent. They had no choice but to leave. The door closed. Only the tower master remained. He sighed. The world is changing so fast. This won't be easy. He didn't know if this change was for good or ill. At that moment, back at Joshua's mansion, a brilliant light erupted from a window. Inside the room, streams of light gathered. An invisible force pulled them to the center. Joshua stood before the orb of light. He ignored the raging winds gathering around him. He chanted a mysterious incantation. Cold sweat dripped down his face. The spell seemed to drain his strength. Nearby, Ket struggled against the violent winds. He was shocked. His master was fluent in the dragon language. Only the most powerful mages could speak it. The suspicion grew in Ket's mind. His master had to be the peerless knight. Just then, the elf's teardrop ring dimmed its brilliant light. It slowly floated towards Joshua's hand. Ket watched, filled with worry. He rushed over to check on his master. Seeing Joshua was all right, Ket asked curiously, "Was it really blessed by a high elf? Does it have the dragon language engraved on it?" Joshua calmly explained, "Actually, the elf's teardrop is a 7th-class magic tool. It activates automatically when the user is in danger. Not only that, it's rumored to greatly strengthen one's bond with elves." Ket grew excited. He immediately asked his master for a favor. He wanted Joshua to give him the elf's teardrop, but Joshua flatly refused. The ring was blessed by a high elf, but only women can use its power. For a man, it's nothing more than jewelry. Ket was confused. Why would Joshua keep a ring made for a woman? He planned to give it to Lucia as a gift. Meanwhile, somewhere else, a hand slowly tapped a crystal ball. As it tapped, the crystal ball began to glow. A magic circle slowly appeared at Zero's feet. A figure appeared within the magic circle. He immediately bowed his head. The woman was surprised to see Zero. She didn't expect him to contact her now. She guessed it was about that child. She was right. Zero contacted her about Joshua. He felt the boy was more than he seemed. The woman agreed. She knew Joshua was special. The mages from the magic tower have already started looking for him. Zero was shocked. He never expected the magic tower to make a move. The woman continued, "It seems you don't know. One of the 7 great mages is searching for Joshua. They suspect he's a descendant of the magic swordsman, Arlet. They've been searching for him for a while. The magic tower used the elemental stones to cover it up, but neither the stones nor Arlot are the real issue. The real issue is the Avalon Imperial Knights, the magic tower, and the secret existence of our organization, the Red Coin. Joshua is at the center of it all." Zero was stunned. He never realized how serious this was. The woman admitted she wanted to go herself, but the organization's war isn't over yet. She can't leave. Everything changes if Joshua gives up the red coin. Zero promised to find it, no matter the cost. The woman had no choice but to trust him. As she finished speaking, she vanished. The crystal ball's light faded. Zero was left alone, his eyes filled with resolve. Meanwhile, in a forest on Duke Agnes's land, the faint moonlight cast an eerie gloom. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning crashed down. A figure emerged from the light. He walked toward a man tied to a tree. The captive was Viscount Bick. His mouth was gagged, and he could only mumble, but the figure ignored the Viscount. He immediately took a fighting stance. A horde of orcs charged from the deep woods. He wasn't afraid. He slowly began to chant. Light filled the vast sky. "Lightning of judgment, gather in my hand. Strike down all who oppose me. A shower of light shall fall. Lightning rain." As he spoke, bolts of lightning rained from the sky. The bolts slammed into the charging orcs. It was a beautiful dance of light in the dark forest. Moments later, the lightning stopped. The orcs were nothing but charred corpses. Viscount Bitch watched in terror. He couldn't scream or run. He was tied tightly to the tree. He could only watch as the orcs fell, one by one. The man turned to Viscount Bitch and asked, "Now, tell me, how does my magic compare to Joshua's ability?" But the Viscount's mouth was still gagged. He couldn't answer. So the man slowly ripped the gag from the Viscount's mouth. He forced him to speak. But Viscount Bitch refused to talk. Instead, he threatened to make his captor pay. The man moved closer to him. He began to channel mana through his body. Bolts of lightning appeared like bloodthirsty snakes. This man had no fear of the Avalon Empire. Otherwise, he wouldn't have bothered kidnapping a minor Viscount. So, he asked directly, "How do I compare to that rumored peerless knight, the boy Joshua?" Viscount Bitch had no choice but to answer honestly. "In terms of power, your magic far surpasses his. Even I, a skilled mage, can confirm that." The man fell into deep thought. Elos's attribute wasn't lightning. He concluded that Joshua hadn't obtained Bruton yet. Because of this, the man decided to meet him in person. Duke Agnes's estate wasn't easy to infiltrate. but Viscount Bitch immediately warned him the plan was flawed. Joshua was no longer at the manor. He had gone to the capital to enroll in the academy. Hearing this, the man felt a bit troubled. The capital of Avalon was on a completely different level. Besides, Duke Agnes had many difficult people by his side. Just then, Viscount Bitch spoke up. I will help you, even though we didn't get off to a good start. If you're planning to eliminate Joshua, I'm more than willing to help. His ignorant arrogance is annoying. I can't stand it anymore. The man was curious. He wondered how the Viscount planned to help him. It turned out he already knew the man's true identity. It was Tober, a six-circle mage, and the thunder of the magic tower. Hearing this, he was a little surprised. A Viscount from the countryside knew his identity. The Viscount continued to persuade Tober to join forces with him. He claimed to have many connections in the capital, but Tober immediately refused. He had no desire to ally with a nameless Viscount. His killing intent began to show. He planned to kill Viscount Bish to silence him. At that moment, lightning gathered above the Viscount's head. He was terrified. He threatened Tober. If he dared to kill him, his identity would be exposed to Duke Agnes. But before Viscount Bitch could finish his sentence, a bolt of lightning struck him down, killing him instantly. Tober just said coldly, "Who would look for someone like you?" Time flew by. Joshua joined the academy when he turned 10. Of course, he wasn't alone. Thousands of other noble children were also enrolled in Avalon Academy. Here, students were divided into 6 levels. Each year, they took a promotion exam to advance. Only after passing the final exam could they officially graduate. Of course, Joshua was full of confidence. For him, 6 years was more than enough time. He would reach the 5th stage of magic spear arts, a level he had reached in his past life. However, that was just his personal plan. And plans never go without unexpected variables. Right now, Joshua was holding his admission letter from Avalon Academy. He walked leisurely among the noble children. He couldn't help but feel a little emotional. All of these noble kids had at least one servant with them. Just then, Joshua arrived at his room. This would be where he lived and studied for the coming years. He stepped into the room. Joshua was a bit surprised and blurted out, "A 3-person room this big?" As expected of Avalon. For Joshua, this place was perfect. But it would have been more perfect if Pharaoh hadn't been assigned to this room. Joshua wanted to spend his academy days in peace. Just then, a voice suddenly rang out. It caught his attention. A purple-haired boy stood at the door. He struggled to carry a heavy load of luggage inside. Joshua was at a loss for words. He went over to help the boy put his luggage down. The boy immediately thanked Joshua. He had brought way too much luggage. Then, the boy introduced himself as a Gazeth. Joshua silently judged the person before him. He seemed like a good guy. With a Gazeth's open personality, it would be rare for him to be a bad person. So Joshua shook his hand. He also introduced himself, using a fake name, of course. Although he had never heard of Joshua's name before, Gazeth was very happy to greet him. Just then, another voice spoke up. It interrupted their introduction. It was Icarus, their last roommate. Upon hearing this name, Joshua froze. In his past life, he had heard of Icarus. He was hailed as the genius of the era, the brain of God. In Joshua's memories of his past life, the first civil war between the princes was a bloody battle. The Avalon Empire was weakened by wars between empires. Not only that, Emperor Marcus died mysteriously. In that situation, the worst civil war in history broke out. It was between the first and second princes. Under the pretext of stabilizing the country, the two waged war throughout the Avalon Empire. The civil war lasted for nearly 10 years. It caused tens of thousands of casualties. In the end, the first prince won. And of course, after his victory, he purged all the forces and cabinet members who had sided with the second prince. In that civil war, 2 people made enormous contributions. They helped end the prolonged bloodshed. The first was the 4th prince. He later became a hero for ending the long war of fratricide, Kaiser Van Britten. The other was a genius of strategy and tactics. He was revered as having a brain created by the gods. He was a marquis who led the first prince to glory, the brain of God, Icarus. But right now, that genius was extremely awkward. Icarus had no idea why his 2 roommates were staring at him. Agazeth was the first to react. He walked over and put an arm around Icarus's neck. Agazeth was truly happy to see him at Avalon Academy. Icarus was also very happy. He didn't expect to be in the same room as Agazeth. Watching his 2 roommates greet each other so enthusiastically, Joshua was shocked. He didn't expect his 2 roommates to know each other. Furthermore, in his past life, he never knew this genius had any friends. Icarus was from the southern countryside of Avalon. For some reason, the Baron there had no heir, and a nobleman couldn't go too long without an heir, so they adopted Icarus. At that time, he was just their servant. But after recognizing Icarus's talent, they officially adopted him. Because of this, the Baron was ridiculed by many other nobles. No matter how talented Icarus was, he couldn't escape his commoner origins. Because of this, he was often bullied and despised. So, during that time, Icarus lived in solitude. The first person to help Icarus was the first emperor of the empire, Kaiser Van Britten. He was also his first friend. Not only that, Kaiser gave him the wings to soar to the heights of glory. For that reason, Joshua felt a deep sympathy for Icarus. After all, in his past life, he had also experienced a dark youth. At the end of his life, he was even killed by the person he trusted most, Kaiser. So Joshua wanted to befriend this person. He slowly walked over to Icarus and held out his hand to shake. Icarus happily returned the greeting. Honestly, Joshua was determined to bring this genius to his side, so he thought this was a fated encounter. Meanwhile, at Duke Agnes's mansion, a woman wearing the elf's teardrop stood by the window. She gazed outside with a sad expression. She really wanted to see her son's enrollment in person, but it was impossible. If Lucia appeared, Joshua's fake identity would be immediately exposed. She understood this well. So Lucia was very grateful to have Ket by her side. He replied, "It's nothing, my lady. On the contrary, I'm always grateful to serve him as my master. It might be impolite to say this, but you truly have a wonderful son." Lucia was overjoyed. No one had ever said that to her before. While the two were talking happily, a majestic voice suddenly rang out. It was Duke Agnes. Lucia and Ket immediately bowed. Duke Agnes didn't pay much attention. He just said, "If there's anything you're uncomfortable with, you can tell me anytime. Everything will be fine if you come to me." Just then, Duke Agnes's subordinate came over to greet Lucia. Then he slowly followed his master and left. Lucia and Ket didn't stand in their way. They just bowed and saw the two off. The Duke's subordinate was a bit curious. He didn't understand why his master let Lucia stay here. If Vanessa heard about this, she would definitely object. Duke Agnes didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "You know the color, right?" The subordinate knew Joshua had extraordinary talent, but in terms of genius, Babel was no less gifted. Not only that, he had royal blood, so the choice of an heir couldn't be decided lightly. Duke Agnes understood his subordinate's concern about the royal bloodline, and he didn't deny it. After all, the legitimacy of a lawful son couldn't be completely ignored. So if Joshua inherited the Agnes name, their family would surely face countless rumors. Duke Arnott said, "If authenticity is affected by bloodline," but before he could finish, he stopped. Duke Agnes wanted to observe for a while longer. The subordinate didn't ask any more questions. Duke Agnes's heart was heavy. He never thought he would be bound by the legitimacy of a lawful son. Sometime later, during the first class since enrolling, Joshua learned about the relationship between Agazeth and Icarus. It was because both of them were very famous in this academy, and of course, that fame didn't come from anything good. Right now, a group of students was blocking their way and hurling insults. After all, in the eyes of noble children, the top and second-ranked students were just trash, so they always had a reason to bully the two of them. The leader of the bullies was Amaru Branston, and this time was no different. He brought his gang along to satisfy his pleasure of trampling on others. Seeing Amaru, Joshua was a bit surprised. In his past life, he was one of the 5 great masters of the Avalon Empire. Amaru was famous for his skill with the rapier, and the kid in front of Joshua looked exactly like him, with his golden hair and sharp eyes. Amaru's group was very excited. In their eyes, Agazeth and Icarus were like chickens waiting to be slaughtered, looking at the yellow ties on their necks. Joshua realized they were upperclassmen. First-year students like him could only wear white ties, but Joshua didn't have time to worry about that. He had just realized Agazeth was also an illegitimate child, just like him. Amaru didn't pay any attention to Joshua. He was busy insulting Agazeth with a contemptuous tone. Agazeth could only lower his head, unable to say a word. Icarus couldn't take it anymore. He stepped forward to intervene. Amaru was spewing insults at his friend, but Amaru didn't care about Icarus's reaction. Just then, one of his lackeys stepped up and covered Icarus's mouth. His name was Duncan. Icarus clearly wanted to argue with this henchman, but before he could finish his sentence, a powerful punch landed on Icarus's handsome face. It sent him crashing to the ground. Duncan then said contemptuously, "You think you're a noble just because some nameless baron from the countryside adopted you? The blood flowing in you is like livestock. How dare you talk to us? Just doing that is an insult." Seeing the situation escalating, Agazeth rushed forward to stop the conflict. One of Amaru's cronies saw this and kicked him. He fell backward, and just then, he noticed someone slowly walking toward them. It was Joshua. Amaru's group saw him approaching. They didn't know who he was. Joshua's face was terrifyingly cold. All he wanted was a peaceful life in the academy, but the people in front of him had crossed his limit. He couldn't hold back any longer and decided to step forward. Just then, Amaru's group shouted in panic, "Wait, why are you here?" Joshua was confused by what was happening. At that moment, a voice rang out. "Looks like I wasn't mistaken. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Aren't you happy to see me?" The person who spoke was the 4th prince of the Avalon Empire, Kaiser van Brixton. Elsewhere, Mocker was stunned to hear his young master sit up. It turned out Veron wanted to know why Kaiser acted as if he already knew Joshua. Mocker didn't object. Veron understood that Joshua's identity was not simple at all. No matter how much he investigated, he couldn't find any information about the Gedazit family. And now, it turned out Joshua knew the 4th prince. So Veron wanted to use the crescent moon to investigate this. He wanted to find Joshua's weakness to deal with him once and for all. Hearing this, Mocker felt a bit troubled, because when he met Joshua, he had said, "I will return the ring to Veron. However, you must apologize to the Zika family on behalf of your foolish young master, and promise to always put your family and honor first. Don't let Veron cause this kind of trouble again." So, if Veron broke his promise this time, the whole world would make a laughingstock of the Marquis Fim's family. Hearing that, Veron angrily threw the wine glass he was holding at Mocker. He thought the promise had nothing to do with him, and even if it did, Veron didn't care. All he wanted was to find Joshua's weakness at any cost. After hearing this, Mocker had no choice but to follow his young master's orders. Meanwhile, at Avalon Academy, Joshua was sitting and listening intently as the respectable professor droned on. Icarus was doing the same, but there was one exception. Agarith was fast asleep on his desk, which made Joshua feel a bit emotional. At first, he didn't want to attract attention, but if Joshua wanted to win Icarus over, he had no choice but to change his plan. Moreover, Kaiser's friendliness towards Joshua had probably made many students curious. He had approached him just to show that he hadn't given up on recruiting Joshua. Not only that, Kaiser had also invited him to visit the royal palace before graduation. But even if he hadn't invited him, Joshua would have gone anyway, because that's where the royal knights and the palace's secret archives were, and there existed what Joshua was looking for. Just then, the professor noticed Agazith sleeping. He immediately shouted, startling Agazith awake from his drowsy state. He thought it was time for lunch. This made the whole class burst into laughter. They found it ridiculous that an illegitimate son of the Deuce family could be so foolish. The professor said, "Silence, Agazeth. Pay attention if you don't want to be sent home." He could only laugh awkwardly. When the class quieted down, the professor continued, "Let's continue the lesson. That's why the sword is considered the greatest weapon. There's a reason why most famous knights use a sword as their main weapon. Even the current king, the ruler of the Avalon Empire, has reached the master level. As has Duke Agnes, one of the 9 stars, the strongest in the empire. He also uses a sword, and of course, the 5 great masters as well. So why is the sword considered the strongest weapon?" Amaru eagerly spoke up. In his eyes, all weapons other than the sword were trash, and if compared, Amaru believed that a person using another weapon could never defeat a sword user. Joshua's expression darkened. He was a spear user. Moreover, he had reached the title of master. The professor ignored Joshua's increasingly grim face and continued, "However, in battle, most soldiers don't use swords. They use spears instead. According to what you said, don't you think soldiers should be trained to use swords rather than spears?" Hearing this, Amaru became even more contemptuous. In his eyes, soldiers were just disposable pawns on the battlefield. They didn't deserve to be considered human. Hearing that, Joshua couldn't hold back any longer and retorted, "In my opinion, the sword is the worst weapon, especially the rapier. It's not even good enough for a toothpick." Amaru flew into a rage when Joshua insulted the rapier like that. The professor tried to intervene, but Amaru wouldn't let it go. His family used the rapier as their main weapon. He couldn't let it be insulted. Joshua had a reason for his actions. He hated people with double standards like this. He belittled others' weapons but didn't allow anyone to touch his own. Amaru said, "I'm just speaking the truth. If not, prove it. One duel will tell." Joshua didn't agree. The academy rules didn't allow fighting. Amaru became even more scornful. He thought Joshua was just using the rules to avoid a duel with him. Joshua replied, "I just want to follow the rules. If you want to fight, why not wait for the practical class? Then it won't be considered a violation." Amaru's voice was filled with scorn. "Fine, that's one way. The practical swordsmanship class is tomorrow. Professor, I beg you. If you allow this duel, I will help. I will never argue about this again. Please give me a chance to prove myself, so I won't be labeled a liar by the other students." The professor had a headache. Amaru was from the powerful Sten family. He couldn't refuse. But things had come to this point. The professor had no choice but to stand by and watch, so he allowed the duel to take place. But they could only use wooden swords, not real ones. Amaru was thrilled. He wanted to smash Joshua's body with a wooden sword. Even if he knew the 4th prince, once on the dueling grounds, he had to accept the outcome. So Amaru gave Joshua a provocative look. In response, he just gave a bone-chillingly cold smile. A while later, in Joshua's dorm, Agazeth and Icarus couldn't understand. Why would he dare call the rapier trash right in front of someone from the Sen family? Joshua didn't see it as a problem, but Agazeth and Icarus disagreed. They knew Amaru was vengeful, so they were both very worried for Joshua. He felt a bit emotional and said, "I thought you were someone who lived without much suspicion. I didn't know you could be so observant, Agazeth." He didn't answer and continued to advise him. Amaru was one of the best students in the academy. The blood of the San family ran in his veins. Not only that, Amaru could sense mana on his own, so he was a very difficult opponent in the academy. Joshua was a bit curious. From what he saw, Agazeth knew a lot about this Amaru guy. It turned out they had been friends for a long time. Their families were both guardians of the Deadlands in northern Avalon. Amaru's father was considered the commander of the North. He was also the head of the Sand family. Agazeth's father was the head of the Douglas family. He was also the one who always protected and supported Amaru's father. Their relationship was very famous in the Avalon dynasty. It was built from countless life and death situations on the battlefield. That's why Agazeth knew Amaru, but because he was an illegitimate son, it was hard to be true friends with him. However, since they both shared one thing in common, neither could inherit their titles. Agazeth and Amaru became friends as children. They were friends, and that's why he understood him better than anyone else. So Agazeth wanted Joshua to apologize to Amaru. He just laughed mockingly. You want me to apologize so weakly? Anyway, you live a comfortable life now. All you do is smile like an idiot and bow to everyone. Icarus advised his new friend not to take it so personally. He knew Agazeth was just worried about Joshua, but Joshua didn't think so. Apologizing makes a person weak. So, if they wanted to change their fate, they both needed to work hard to achieve their goals. Not only that, they had to maintain faith in themselves. So Joshua advised the two of them, if you don't want to live in someone else's shadow for the rest of your lives, remember that. After speaking, he coldly turned and walked away. Agazeth and Icarus watched the door close and fell into thought. They couldn't believe a 9-year-old child could say such things. That night, in the Crescent Moon's secret chamber, Zero was receiving Mocker, who had come to ask for information about Joshua. He said, "That's right, I need information on him. All we know is that he just enrolled in Avalon Academy this year." Zero replied, "I have some suspicions." But before he could finish, Mocker interrupted. He was in a hurry. So Mocker was willing to pay any price for information about Joshua. Zero agreed to provide the information. However, the price for that information was not cheap. At first, Mocker didn't see it as a problem, but when Zero named an astonishingly high price, he was rendered speechless. Mocker was stunned. He didn't expect Joshua's status to be so great. Even the Crescent Moon, a famous intelligence organization in the Avalon Empire, had to give him special treatment. But because of the mission Varen gave him, Mocker was determined to get the information at any cost. However, when he heard Zero's price of 1 million gold, Mocker was terrified. 1 million gold was more than the taxes most capitals collected in a year. Zero saw the hesitation on Mocker's face. He didn't make it difficult for him and gave him time to think. Mocker watched the Crescent Moon's manager leave the room and fell into thought. Outside the door, Zero was a little excited. To him, this was an investment. Even if Varen found another source to investigate, once the Crescent Moon set a price of 1 million gold, they would surely think Joshua was an extremely dangerous person. If Zero's guess was right, Varen would definitely give up this grudge, fearing the consequences. After all, Zero knew that kid was the type to fear the strong but bully the weak. So, to let Joshua focus on finding the red coin, Zero didn't hesitate to invest to end this feud from the start. Meanwhile, at Avalon Academy, Joshua was training hard with the spear, Lucia. Contrary to the strict regulations of the academy, they could go anywhere on campus. Thanks to this, Joshua could focus on regaining his lost strength. After all, at the Duke's mansion, Agnes had eyes and ears everywhere, so Joshua couldn't train in peace. Streams of mana began to overflow like waves. At first, he could endure it, but later on, Joshua couldn't control the power anymore, because the holy power and mana in his body were like oil and water. They were completely chaotic and couldn't harmonize, so Joshua tried to use Proton to stabilize these two powers. Just then, the mana in his body went out of control. It shot out forcefully. It created a terrifying shockwave that engulfed the entire training ground. Even Joshua, standing nearby, was directly affected. The mana wave threw him against the wall. It knocked Joshua unconscious. Time passed quietly. Joshua slowly regained consciousness. His body ached intensely. His bones felt like they were all broken. But he didn't care about the pain. Joshua just felt a bit emotional. Holy power and mana were an incomplete form of power, so Joshua couldn't completely control it. If he had used Proton to control the holy power and mana a little longer, he might have reached the third stage of magic spear arts. To be able to use that, Joshua wanted to try training again, but just as his will was surging, Joshua discovered that his spear, Lucia, had disappeared. So, he could only run around in a panic, searching for it everywhere. While Joshua was still confused because he couldn't find Lucia, a voice suddenly scolded him, calling him a fool. This stunned Joshua. He had no idea what was happening. While he was still disoriented, a black hole gradually appeared in front of him. Joshua immediately recognized it as space magic. Just then, a voice spoke up. "Your stupidity knows no bounds. How could you sleep for 3 days in a place where an enemy could invade at any time?" Hearing those words, Joshua was shocked. He didn't know who the voice belonged to. In front of him was just a faceless child. It turned out that person was Lucia, and more importantly, it had protected Joshua for the 3 days he was unconscious. Hearing this, Joshua was even more shocked. He had been unconscious for 3 whole days. However, what bothered him more was Lucia's worried expression. In his past life, Joshua had seen Lucia when he reached the 3rd stage of magic spear arts, but after being reborn, he realized Lucia could also turn into an iron staff. Joshua had never thought such a skill could exist, so he began to think that maybe he wasn't the only one who had regressed. Lucia saw Joshua staring blankly at it and said, "You think I look like a kid, don't you?" Joshua was startled. He didn't expect Lucia to be able to read minds. It reacted with pride. "You think I can't do things like reading someone's mind in my first awakening stage? But isn't there something more important than this? You should understand yourself before you understand your enemy. You probably don't think your body's condition is perfect, do you?" Joshua could only feel a little embarrassed. It was true that he had thought so. Instead, Lucia wanted to give Joshua more information. It turned out the revelation stone he was holding not only contained elemental power, its true ability lay elsewhere. Hearing that, Joshua couldn't help but be curious. He wanted to know where that was. Lucia looked at him and continued to mock him. "Think about it. Although each revelation stone has a unique power like rebirth and balance, but that's not so important." With that, Lucia said no more, only letting Joshua figure out Proton's power on his own. Joshua was completely confused. In his understanding, the Proton stone only provided superior lightning power, but now Lucia was saying that natural power was only a part of the Proton stone's ability. This made Joshua feel lost in a fog, unable to understand anything. Seeing Joshua lost in thought, Lucia said, "Think it through yourself. After all, this is a question that can help you achieve your goal as quickly as possible." Joshua was even more confused. He didn't know what goal Lucia was talking about. Hearing his reaction, Lucia dropped the mocking tone. It revealed a fierce smile. It knew Joshua's goal was revenge. The next morning, a new day began at Avalon Academy. Students slowly returned to their seats. Of course, Agazeth and Icarus were among them. They walked and talked happily, not paying attention to those around them. Just then, Agazeth suddenly stopped. In front of him was Amaru, his childhood friend. But now, they were on bad terms. They just glanced at each other and quickly turned away. Just then, Duncan came from behind and shoved Icarus hard. He stumbled forward. Duncan spoke arrogantly. "If I were you, I probably wouldn't have run away with that ASS guy. Don't you think so, Agazeth? After all, that's what you're best at. Running away when there's trouble." Hearing those words, Agazeth was furious. He told Duncan to stop bothering him. But one of Amaru's lackeys didn't care. In his eyes, Joshua was a coward who ran away in the middle of a fight, so they wouldn't let this go easily. Duncan was excited. He grabbed Icarus's head. In his eyes, the 2 people who shared a room with Joshua were also just trash. As the atmosphere became tense, the professor entered and shouted, "What are you doing? How many times have I told you? This academy strictly forbids fighting between students. Duncan, if you continue this, I'll have no choice but to discipline you." Hearing the professor, Duncan had no choice but to let go of Icarus. The professor felt helpless. He knew very well what this would lead to. He had wanted to prevent it from happening again, but it seemed he wasn't too worried about it anymore. Joshua had disappeared, and at least the current incident only warranted discipline. But just then, a figure appeared at the classroom door. It was Joshua, who had been missing for 3 days. Seeing him appear, the professor cursed under his breath. He didn't expect Joshua to walk into the lion's den again. The students in the class saw Joshua and started whispering. The classroom suddenly became as noisy as a market. The professor told everyone to be quiet. Then he turned to Joshua and said, "Go to your seat. We need to continue the lesson." The professor had no choice but to improvise. He decided to postpone the practical class, hoping things would stop here. Amaru saw Joshua appear but said nothing. But killing intent rose in his heart. He just wanted to beat him up. Agazeth watched Joshua calmly sit down. He didn't know what to say. After a moment of internal struggle, he finally spoke. "How the hell did you come back? Hasn't the Zexus family already fallen? Even if you wanted to, you couldn't run away, could you?" Joshua was a bit curious. He didn't understand why Agazeth had investigated his identity. It turned out the rumor of the Zizi's family's fall had spread throughout the academy. So Agazeth didn't need to investigate to know Amaru was behind it. So he wanted Joshua to apologize to him. In Agazeth's mind, bowing to others was no big deal. On the contrary, it made him feel safe. Joshua didn't want to rehash the past. He already had a way to protect his ideals. Just then, Joshua saw the expression on Icarus's worried face, so he said nothing more. He understood what his roommate was worried about. But the problem was, Joshua no longer had time to bother with a children's fight like this, because earlier, Lucia, with a fierce face, had forced him to take revenge. At that time, Joshua didn't understand why. Why did Lucia know about his grudge? But after thinking for a while, he guessed that it had also returned to the past with him. So Joshua asked what Proton's other ability was. Lucia replied, "You must be wondering about a lot of things. But I can't just tell you for free. But if you meet my conditions, I don't mind telling you." Joshua was furious. He thought Lucia was playing games with him. But it wasn't like that. Lucia had no obligation to tell Joshua about Proton's ability. It could just shut up and go to sleep, and that would be the end of it. Joshua fell silent. Then he asked what Lucia's condition was, and it replied, "This is how you should have acted. A wise decision. It's simple. Just reclaim your relationships from your past life and take better care of yourself." Joshua still didn't understand what that condition meant, but Lucia didn't explain further. It just urged him to answer quickly because it was about to fall asleep. Joshua thought for a moment. He felt the condition wasn't too much to ask, so he quickly agreed with Lucia. It then said, "I expect you to fulfill them. A promise to a sacred weapon like me holds great power. So, as promised, I'll give you a hint. The power of Proton you're questioning is not prophecy. The prophetic dream you had is another kind of power." Joshua was confused. He had clearly dreamt of the fall of the Agnes family, and that was something that would definitely happen in the future. So Joshua knew very well it wasn't just an ordinary dream. Lucia saw him thinking and said, "If you think too much about something, it's bound to appear in your dreams. In this case, because he is one of your revenge targets, he appeared in your dream. In short, the prophetic dream you had is one of the other powers hidden in your body. It is holy power." Joshua was extremely shocked. He knew what holy power was. It was the power of high-ranking priests, those who received divine enlightenment at the brink of danger. And Joshua's prophetic dream was similar in nature. The power of the gods truly surpassed what humans could imagine. Moreover, that second power was still flowing chaotically inside Joshua's body. If he could completely absorb both powers, no one would be able to stand against him. Lucia then clarified about the Revelation Stone. Proton's true ability was to amplify light attribute energy, the fastest power, and also the most destructive. It represented growth. Back in the present, Joshua recalled Lucia's words. He still felt like he was lost in a fog. Just then, Amaru stood up and demanded that the professor not ignore this matter. The professor didn't understand what he was planning, but Amaru wanted him to allow the duel between him and Joshua to proceed. To him, it wasn't just a normal duel. It was a fight to reclaim the honor of the nobility. So if the professor changed his mind, Amaru's entire family would be insulted. That's why he wanted to use this method instead. Hearing those words, the professor fell silent. Outwardly, he and Amaru were teacher and student, but he couldn't escape the principles that made up a family's power. He was in a dilemma. Amaru then turned to Joshua and said, "I don't know why you came back, but if you think I'll let this go, you're wrong. I'll take this opportunity to make you remember just how trash the weapon you praise is." Joshua laughed with interest. He didn't expect his and Amaru's thoughts to be so similar. After all, Joshua had no intention of letting this go either. He would show Amaru that the rapier was just a useless item on the battlefield. Hearing those words, Amaru was furious. If looks could kill, he would have killed Joshua long ago. Joshua rested the spear on his shoulder, calmly looking at Icarus. "From your expression, it seems you don't believe in my skills. Do you want to make a bet with me?" The boy looked surprised. "What? A bet?" Joshua calmly continued. "If I defeat Amaru Brandstad to protect my pride and survive the Stan family's assassination attempt, then I win. The loser has to grant one wish to the winner. Deal?" Icarus impatiently furrowed his platinum eyebrows. His blue eyes hardened. "I don't know why you're saying this, but my goal is to stop this fight. Besides, you don't even know what I'll ask for if I win. Why are you in such a hurry?" Joshua smiled calmly and replied, "Obviously, because I've never thought I would lose this bet." Joshua tightened his grip on the spear. He looked at his opponent standing on the other side. Amaru narrowed his eyes at Joshua, his hatred radiating from his body. The large instructor glanced at Icarus and said to him, "Icarus, don't interfere. We can't postpone the match any longer." Icarus turned to leave the training ground, but he didn't forget to remind Joshua, "You overestimate yourself. You can't change this place alone." Joshua looked at him, slightly confused, and thought, "I can't change this place alone?" The instructor raised his hand and announced, "And now, the match between Amaru Branston and Aspen Frederick will begin." Below, the students cheered excitedly, eager for the showdown. Amaru immediately got into position. He raised the wooden sword in his hand and pointed it at Joshua. From below, his friends' voices rang out. "Crush that little punk. Give it your all. Amaru, use that sword of yours to shatter that twig." Amaru's face darkened for a moment. He felt like he was being underestimated. On the other side, Joshua held his spear upright in front of him. His eyes were still half closed. Below, more jeers were directed at Joshua. "What's with that bastard? What's he doing? Closing his eyes? Just give up your life. He really likes to show off. He's an attention seeker." One after another, they took turns mocking Joshua. It seemed they were all on Amaru's side. Joshua tightened his grip on the spear, planning his strategy. "Even though I've reached the third stage of magic spear arts, instead of using that power to overwhelm him, I should just use my spear skills to defeat him. All this time, I've been so focused on reaching the peak of magic spear arts that I forgot nothing is more important than the fundamentals. Right now, I can feel that familiar path from the past. It's as if I can now reach the peak that I couldn't even touch in my previous life. Amaru charged forward angrily, gritting his teeth and shouting, "Enough with the arrogance, you bastard. Are you just going to keep delaying like this? I won't let you." Amaru used his signature move, heart-piercing strike, thrusting straight at Joshua. Joshua's eyes snapped open. He hid behind his spear and watched his opponent close in. His gaze became razor-sharp. A single sweep of his spear carried terrifying power. Before Amaru could even touch Joshua, he was hit with a devastating blow. His entire body was thrown back. He crashed heavily to the ground. Everyone watching from below was utterly shocked. They were all so stunned their mouths hung open. Even the instructor couldn't hide his astonishment. It was impossible to knock an opponent away like that with just the first move. Anna, sitting in the stands, seemed displeased with Joshua's actions. She whispered, "Just as I thought. He never acts the way I want him to." Joshua von Agnes. Icarus turned to Anna in surprise. She said, "Joshua von Agnes?" On the dueling floor, Joshua calmly rested his spear on the ground. He coldly looked at his opponent lying face down in front of him. A movement so fast the opponent couldn't perceive it. Agility beyond normal limits. "I've finally reached the peak I've always dreamed of. Something I couldn't even touch in my past life. The 6th stage enlightenment. The 6th stage of magic spear arts. I grasped it in the instant he fell." The girls' dormitory at Avalon Academy was a magnificent building. In her private room, Anna was holding a magic orb and talking to her father. She complained to him, "I thought he would live quietly, but he created such a big mess." The image of a stern-looking man appeared inside the orb. "It's been a while, Anna." Her father replied directly, "Is there a problem in the kingdom?" His voice came from the orb. "Although some suspicious people have appeared in Tehran, it's nothing too serious yet. So why?" Her father continued, "The Thunder Mage from Jasperos Tower killed Viscount Bitch. How unfortunate. Viscount Bick was very useful for our cover." Anna said into the orb in horror. "A mage? The magic tower itself dealt with Viscount Bitch? Why would arrogant people like them do something like that? Could it be the tower has discovered our plan?" Her father explained to her. "The magic tower's actions are completely unrelated to us, but it seems Joshua von Agnes is holding a priceless item they are looking for." "Anna, you said." "Joshua, if it's an item the magic tower is looking for, wouldn't it be better for us to take it?" Her father slowly replied to his daughter, "It's no use. If it's not the magic tower, that item can't be used. Besides, if all the attention is on us, our long-term plan will turn to dust. The important thing is the variables appearing around Joshua. Isn't that why you called?" Anna, with a displeased expression, explained the situation to her father. "Yes, that's right. As soon as he set foot in the academy, he caused a huge problem. He was challenged to a duel right after calling the rapier trash in front of the Stan family, and then he defeated the Stan family's son in one move." A look of interest appeared on her father's face. "Excellent. I'm very curious to see how Duke Agnes will react when he hears about this. The official heir of the duchy might fall into that kid's hands." Anna was stunned and asked her father, "Change the heir? An illegitimate son like Joshua will take Babel's place? I don't understand," her father calmly explained. "Although Joshua is an illegitimate son, wouldn't Duke Arnott favor his own child over someone else's?" Meanwhile, in Professor Ken's office, Joshua stood before him, listening to his questioning. Aspen Frederick. The Frederick family disappeared a long time ago, and they weren't a renowned martial family. Besides, I've never seen spear skills at that level in my entire life. Who are you? Joshua looked at him without any sign of confusion and replied, "E.M. Aspen Frederick." Hearing that, Professor Ken slammed his hand on the table. "All right, that's enough." He stood up from his desk. "There are quite a few high-ranking nobles and royal family members from other kingdoms who enroll in the academy under different identities to hide their true selves. Honestly, I don't care what you're thinking." He glanced at Joshua. "However, this identity change is not welcome. Even though he is from the Sand family, this was originally just a fight between two children. What you said to him could have been considered a simple argument between children, but now, everything is completely different. You defeated the Stan family's swordsmanship in front of countless children from other noble families." Joshua calmly replied, "I will take full responsibility." Professor Ken said sternly, "Take full responsibility? Around this time last year, there was another student who thought like you. That child's name was Simi Kunglis." Joshua was surprised. "You mean Gaz?" The teacher sighed and continued, "The important thing is, this isn't a problem that can be solved just by taking full responsibility. Even in this academy, the students may seem equal on the outside, but there is an invisible hierarchy among them based on their family's power. That class, stratification, and circle of power were established a long time ago. Of course, Amaru is also a part of that hierarchy. Do you understand what that means? From now on, those kids will constantly attack the children of weaker families, including you." Joshua looked at the teacher and asked back, "Let me ask you this. Dividing the academy into ranks and using that as a reason to prevent rule violations, even if doing so would cause greater losses, standing by while violence and threats silently take place in this academy. Is that what an adult who calls himself a teacher does? Joshua continued firmly. I don't think I have anything left to learn or hear from that kind of teacher. If you prohibit something just because you're afraid of the immediate consequences, these habits will continue forever. Professor Ken turned his head in frustration and said, there are some things in this world that can never be changed. Joshua replied flatly, there's no such thing as never. There are only cowards who have never tried anything because of their own fear. Professor Ken sighed. He looked out the window where the sunset was painting the sky yellow and continued. If your only goal in coming to the academy is to get the mandatory graduation certificate, then I suggest you go to the Royal Knights. You can complete your mandatory education there. Someone with your abilities would pass the test without any difficulty. Joshua thought, I've already refused Kaiser's invitation to join the Royal Knights. Besides, I've awakened the power of Pronto, so I can't waste any more time at the academy or the Royal Knights. Seeing Joshua's silence, the teacher said again, what do you say? It's not difficult for me to use my authority to register you. Joshua answered bluntly, I don't intend to waste my time here either. The teacher seemed pleased, thinking Joshua would go to the Royal Knights. Is that so? Then pack your things. I will. Joshua interrupted him. I don't intend to run away with my tail between my legs either. However, after all, I'm not a coward. The teacher's face immediately darkened. He turned to look at the boy. Joshua didn't wait for him to say more. He placed his hand on his chest and bowed. Then, I'll be leaving. After saying that, he left Professor Ken's office. He had his own plans. He didn't need anyone to arrange things for him. The teacher looked out the window, letting the golden sunlight wash over him, and said softly, Coward. You think so too, Simi. On a beautiful day on the rooftop of Avalon Academy, Joshua stood with his hands on the railing, lost in thought. The Academy's round table. Even if I'm planning to leave the Academy to achieve my goal, I should leave after dealing with this. Amaru's voice came from behind him. Aspen Frederick. His face was full of frustration, his hands clenched. I have something personal to say to you, so listen up. Joshua didn't seem to welcome him. You and I have nothing to talk about. Joshua turned to look. Amaru immediately bowed. I'm sorry.